Sup, my fellas, don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. Valier looks at Charlotte in disbelief. He tries to object, but it doesn't come out the first time. What the hell are you talking about? He asks, throwing up his hands. I usually try to stay away from people like you, says the princess. When I found out you were a beggar, I decided to follow you around a bit. The girl looks askance at Valier. I found out where you're from. What kind of people do you surround yourself with? What gang do you associate with? And who does it get support from? The hero remembers about Loyar, Daban, and his other comrades. She knows about the Ring Gang, he realizes. She didn't know I was a demon, Valier thinks, but she did find out something else. That the Ring Gang has the support of the Thieves Guild. We see many members of the Guardia's underworld. And all this was done thanks to the fact that she caught on to a completely, seemingly insignificant piece of evidence. She's a princess or some brilliant detective, the hero thinks. One gets the impression that nothing can escape her very tenacious attention. And don't even think about making up any pathetic excuses for this gang of vile parasites, the princess warns Valiera. If you start doing this, I can order the city guards to start a very fun sewer cleaning expedition. The hero looks warily at his companion. What do you want? He asks, putting a hand to his head. This guy, Charlotte says, showing Valier a piece of paper. He looks closer, and his eyes freeze in surprise. Find this guy, the princess repeats and shows the hero his own image, only not changed by the magic filter. If he's alive, Charlotte says, find out where he lives. If he's dead, tell me where he is and how he died. Yes, it's definitely me, Valier understands. Keep me informed of the results of your investigation regularly, the princess demands. This will be your main priority, so forget about your other activities, including in the temple. And don't even think about putting it in Berta's hands. If you do this, I'll get rid of you and your gang. Valier looks at Charlotte in silence. Be sure to find him, the girl says finally. Dark hallway with flower stands and massive chandeliers. Sitting down somewhere in the middle of it, Valier sighs heavily. I can't believe she ordered me to find myself, he thinks. It's a very strange feeling. Charlotte seems to think that the Reinhardt I've transformed into is a street beggar, and he's the perfect person to find someone who's lost in these very streets. But despite the fact that the princess's behavior seems rational, she does not behave rationally at all. The hero remembers the princess's look. When she spoke to me, he thinks, her eyes were bright with emotion. She checked my background very quickly, but it seemed to me that she was not in a position to make rational decisions. Valier tilts her head back and rests it on the back of the sofa. Darius must have convinced her that I was a suspicious character, he thinks, and instead of being wary of Reinhardt, she decided to force him to find someone she really cared about. She's obsessed with finding Valier, and she doesn't even know it's Reinhardt. The hero is sprawled wearily on the couch and looks at the ceiling. But if she had looked at the situation a little more objectively, he thinks she would have easily noticed a lot of suspicious things. The guy who saves her from the Demon King's castle suddenly disappears, and a beggar about the same age appears out of nowhere. We have both characters in front of us, and they are really quite similar, at least in their hair and physique. It's a good thing she doesn't suspect me, the hero thinks, but I feel really guilty when I see how desperate she is to get back to who he was before. Valier looks up sadly. If he continues to lie, that they'll just blow his head off with a huge scythe. Elaris, Loyar, and Sarkagar will also be affected. But opening up to Charlotte would be ridiculous, Valier knows. I need to discuss this with Elaris, Loyar, and Sarkagar. Harriet appears in the doorway. Hey, beggar, she calls out to Valier, who looks up from the back of the couch. What do you want? He asks the girl who comes up to him. She giggles. It's all right, she says, folding her arms across her chest. You responded. The beggar. Harriet laughs merrily, covering her mouth with her hand. What's so funny? Her hero asks. I really am a beggar. Harriet stops giggling. Okay, this is boring, she says. I've heard about the duel. Your opponent is very strong. Most likely, he will beat you up badly. Valier continues to sit on the couch. Well, if he beats you, he'll beat you, he replies indifferently. It's not like I'm going to die from this. Aren't you afraid at all? Asks Harriet, surprised. I'm very afraid, the hero replies. So much so that I'm ready to pee. Then why did you agree to the duel? The girl looks at Valier very displeased. Because he might screw up, he says, looking away. Crazy bastard, Harriet says, and leaves. I'd love to see him finish you off. Yes, goodbye, Valier says, waving after her. He leans his head back on the couch. So everyone thinks I'm going to get beaten up. Well, Charlotte can wait, he thinks. The important thing is that the duel is still 2 weeks away. He raises his hand and looks at it carefully. If I don't do anything, I'll be beaten to death before my supernatural powers awaken, the hero understands. Valier opens the door and enters somewhere. I need to get stronger so that I won't have such incidents in the future, he thinks. We see that he is already in the gym, where other students are working out. The hero decided to train hard, comprehending martial arts. His companions in this case will be Cliffman, Aka 5, and Ellen. They spend almost all their time here. It looks like the two of them haven't even spoken to each other in all their training, Valier thinks as he picks up a wooden sword from the rack. I don't think these extreme introverts will bother me either. If I were writing a story, the hero thinks I might write something like I've been practicing with the sword all day or I felt like I was getting better. But since he lives inside his own story, he must train and learn martial arts for real, for real. Imitation won't do here. He picks up a wooden sword and stands in front of the simulator. I need to remember what I was told in my martial arts class last week, Valier thinks. Literally play back the memories that were left in my head. He holds the hilt firmly with both hands. After issuing a battle cry, the hero strikes. You can see from his face that he is very determined. But this outburst ends very comically. Valier stumbles and falls. Rubbing the back of his head, he looks at Cliffman and Ellen. Those, as if nothing had happened, continue to beat on their simulators. It seems that I will have to work very hard, the hero thinks. The sun is shining through the window of the gym. 3 students continue to train, making sounds typical of this type of activity. Now there were 2 of them left, and Cliffman was the first to leave. It was night, and only Valier was left in the hall. His hands are barely holding the sword anymore, but he keeps working. At some point, Ott flies backwards and falls on his back. Damn, I have blisters all over my hands, the hero says, looking down at his palms. How do Cliffman and Ellen manage to swing a sword all day and not have such problems, he thinks. Or do they just put up with it all? Okay, he thinks, there's no point in being envious. I just need to get used to these workouts. I can't always get out of this by bluffing and using moral pressure. But his hands are really scary to look at. What's interesting, Valier thinks, is that the third-year students didn't show up today. They apparently decided not to contact the prince and sent sophomores instead. Nasty bastards, the hero says, looking up wearily. Did they really decide to show up when I thought of them? A girl is standing in the doorway of the gym, and Valier turns to her. Hi, rookie, she says quite calmly. So you're here. The hero sighs, not knowing yet how to react. The girl says that she came because Radina asked her to help Valier. The hero, who still hasn't gotten up from the floor, asks to clarify exactly what that cute little girl from the second year said. It turns out that Radina begged Adriana, which is the name of Valier's new acquaintance, with tears in her eyes. This was serious, she said. If things continue like this guy will be beaten to death. Stop him, please. What a wonderful little girl, the hero thinks. I'm still terribly ashamed that I was so rude to her back then. I can see that you really want to learn something, says Adriana. But you do realize that you can't beat art even if you work out for 2 weeks, right? You will lose, and in the most brutal way. She looks at the hero a little sadly. Just apologize and prevent this senseless beating. He's not a bad person, no matter what you think of him. Valier continues to sit on the floor. I don't think he's a scoundrel or even an enemy, but it's a little different, he says. I need to be beaten up. What? Adriana asks again, unable to believe what she's hearing. I can't say more, but it's true, says Valier. Adriana doesn't say anything. She closes her eyes. Then the girl bends down and picks up the sword from the floor. What are you doing? Her hero asks in confusion. Adriana straightens up and stands in front of him, her sword ready. She starts swinging the weapon, demonstrating quick and confident movements. What is she doing? Thinks Valier, who has not yet risen from the floor. Now try this again, the girl says, handing him the wooden weapon. Do you want me to repeat that? Asks Valier, sitting on the floor. Yes, says Adriana, handing him a wooden sword. Well, it's not impossible, as I think, says the hero and takes up a weapon. He exhales to compose himself, and then rushes to the simulator. Adriana sees Valier's feet lift off the floor. He falls clumsily to the floor again. My head is on the floor, but my butt is sticking up for some reason. Are you trying to make me laugh? The girl asks. I'm sorry, the hero tells her. Adriana grabs his wrist. Reinhardt, let's talk, she says. You're tired. There's no point in suffering like this. You'll just disfigure your hands. Now she's holding him by both wrists at once. Stop it, Valier screams, writhing. I feel humiliated. All of a sudden, he feels something, and it's not exactly unpleasant. He looks at her in surprise. He relaxes his arms and lowers them. Now they glow with white energy. Didn't you know that? Adriana asks him. I'm incredibly happy to be a paladin, she says. Divine magic can eliminate muscle pain and fatigue. What do you think? Valier, whose hands are finally free, stretches his arms and realizes that they have stopped hurting. Yes, I'm definitely feeling better, he says. All right, Adriana tells him. Now try to do what I showed you earlier. You should be much better at it. The hero looks at her gratefully. Okay, I get you. Thank you so much, he says. Then I'll give it a try. He picks up a wooden sword from the floor. Valier resolutely takes this weapon to the simulator. Night, temple building. From its windows come the sounds of blows and cheery shouts. Reinhardt, your physical condition is very bad, says Adriana. I'll be waiting for you in the dorm lobby tomorrow. I'll try to help you dial it. Valier is sitting on a bench in front of one of the temple buildings, yawning. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. He feels very uncomfortable, having woken up much earlier than usual. "How long have you been waiting for me?" someone asks him. This is Adriana. Fixing her hair, she wishes him a good morning. The hero greets her in return and informs her that he himself has just arrived. The girl says that first they will do a little jog to warm up. After a while, already during exercise, Valier asks if Adriana thinks that by helping him with a set of physical fitness, she is setting up her classmate. "Who knows?" she says evasively. "I believe that I should help you improve your physical fitness and acquire some combat skills." Art doesn't listen to me when I tell him that he shouldn't bully the weaker ones because of his wounded ego. While talking, the girl does not stop showing exercises for charging. "You'd better worry about yourself instead of me," Adriana says reasonably. "In your current state, I won't even call you weak." Kiryu really doesn't look well. He's exhausted and breathing hard. "The bitter truth is always a good thing," he says gratefully. "Think what you want," says the girl. "I'm just advising you to train hard." Well, warmed up. Let's move on to the main classes. Adriana and Claire run. The girl is in front and the young man is in the back. He is very tired and can barely keep up with the leader. "Rookie, this is all very serious," Adriana says to the dying freshman behind her. He cannot answer at least something intelligible. "Run faster," he hears. "I understand that this run is good for me, but I can't leave you and run ahead." Valier musters his will and tries to fulfill Adriana's request. She turns sideways to it and charges it with her energy. "What a pleasant feeling it is," Valier exclaims happily. "Yes, of course, but remember that this is a kind of cheating," the mentor replies to him. "If the paladins were running a marathon, they would win all competitions," the hero tells the girl, almost catching up with her. "Stop talking while you're running. It won't make you breathe again," she tells him. "Take an example from your classmate Ludwig. He runs around the temple every day at an extraordinary speed." "Yes, he has it inborn," says Valier. "He has the stamina of a locomotive." Endurance and strength training sessions lasted 3 hours. We see that after running, the hero, lying on his back, lifted the bar. Every time. When he was exhausted, Adriana replenished them with her divine powers. Before returning, "If you want to be able to handle intense workouts normally, make sure that your body gets more nutrients," advises Valeru Adriana. In other words, eat a lot and often. After listening to the girl, the hero goes home. Despite the fact that his body is in perfect order, he is mentally exhausted. There's still a little time before breakfast, Valier thinks. He walks on half-bent legs, with his back bent. But you can find some food in the pantry or in the kitchen. All he thinks about is putting something edible in his mouth. A specially authorized restaurant is responsible for catering the students of the royal class. We see a friendly, mustachioed, gloved waiter and 3 chefs working hard to prepare some delicious dishes. There are many high-end chefs working here, and they only work with the highest quality ingredients. If any of the students of the royal class want to eat in the middle of the night or eat somewhere else in the middle of the designated meal intervals, they have a well-equipped kitchen at their disposal. The chefs working here will be happy to prepare any dish that the student wants. When Valier comes in here, he sees that someone is already eating breakfast in the kitchen. It's Ellen, with a large plate of dried meat strips piled high in front of her. The hero looks at it and considers what he sees. This part of reality he did not describe. But the fact that a girl is very hungry after morning workouts and comes here to eat well is not at all surprising. If he remembers correctly, Ellen eats a lot more than the other students at the general breakfast table. Could it be that she has a very high metabolism in addition to the need to recuperate after training? "Hi," he says to the girl, walking over to the table, which has only 1 plate of meat on it. "Is this all that's left of what we've got ready for this morning?" Ellen confirms his hunch. "Was there only beef chips?" "No, there is also bread and other products." "Are they delicious?" Valier asks, referring to the pieces of meat Ellen keeps eating. "Not very." "I see. Bon appetit," says the hero. He turns and walks away from the table. "I'm not going to take her food," he thinks. Valier walks into the kitchen and marvels at how nice and clean it is. He finds a lot of products that can be used to make something very tasty, but he was too tired to do it. Therefore, the hero decides to simply mix a few simple ingredients with each other. He takes the eggs and a piece of dried meat. Valier lights a fire under the frying pan. After that, he begins to cook scrambled eggs with meat. Ellen, who continues to eat beef chips, feels a very appetizing aroma and hears the sounds that the cooking dish makes. Her mouth starts to water. Valier comes out of the kitchen and into the dining room, holding a pan of fresh scrambled eggs. Ellen looks at him enviously. He puts the frying pan on the table and invites the girl to eat together. Fried eggs with meat look very appetizing. "The kitchen was full of eggs and meat," says Valier, sitting down at the table. "Why are you eating this stuff? Don't you want to cook? Or don't you know how?" He gives the girl a fork. "I've never tried it," she says. "But you won't learn if you don't try," Valier says, and holds out his fork to take a piece of fried egg. "If you don't know how to do something, just learn it." Oh, those kids. The hero, turning away from the table, pretends to be a grumpy old man, and Ellen, meanwhile, eats the delicious food that he has prepared. Okay, let's eat, says Valier. Try it, don't be shy. All right, the girl replies, eating her scrambled eggs. Turning back to the table, the hero opens his mouth in surprise. Wait, why are you eating so fast? He asks. He draws a line in the middle of the frying pan with his fork and asks Ellen not to cross it, and in general to eat at human speed. She obediently agrees. You don't have to agree if you're not going to keep your promise, Valier says indignantly, seeing how quickly the food disappears from the pan. What should I do with you? He asks. Take away the fork. Beggars aren't so hungry. The sun is shining through the dining room window, high above the horizon. You have an appetite like an elephant, says Valier. You've eaten more than half of what I've prepared. In front of the eaters is a completely empty frying pan. I'd like to eat some more, the girl replies, looking away sheepishly. Well, you give, the hero says perplexedly. Okay, we have lessons today, right? Yes, then let's have dinner together. He steps away from the table, and an evil light glows in his eyes. I'll make you eat 2 servings of yeongkukjang, he thinks. You will beg me for mercy, and your breath will smell disgusting. Valier stands in front of the mirror in his apartment and assesses his figure. Hoping for drastic changes after just a day of classes would be silly, he thinks. But still, my strength has increased by half a point, my mobility has increased by 0.3, and my stamina has increased by 0.6. The hero clenches his fist and looks at him. This, of course, quite surprisingly, even the magic power increased by 1/10. The duel, which is scheduled to take place in 2 weeks, has become something of a trigger. This is just a fulcrum, but without it, to nowhere. Valier looks in the mirror. There's a look of determination on his face. In this world, I can only rely on this body 100%, he thinks. I don't want to be the dirty bastard that most people around here think I am. I need to gain real strength. Duel in 2 weeks, relationship with Bertus and Charlotte, the coming apocalypse. We see a lot of hands reaching out to the bare-chested hero. I don't have time to be lazy, he realizes. I must awaken autosuggestion as soon as possible. In front of us is a cafe, from behind the doors of which you can hear characteristic sounds, someone grunting and slurping, eating food. Ellen puts a spoon in her mouth with a trembling hand, tears rolling down her cheeks. She's still shaking, but she's eating a lot better, Valier thinks, looking at the girl. If she doesn't like yeongkukjang, she can choose not to eat it. But the fact that she came with me and ate everything is really amazing. I wonder if she's here because it's my treat. Maybe it's written somewhere in the scenario of this world that she likes free food. Ellen is holding an empty decanter, the contents of which she has already emptied. This is a real glutton, the hero thinks, looking at her. You ate more than half of the food I made this morning, Valier tells the girl. Don't you think so? That if I, a beggar, buy you dinner, you're even worse than a beggar. Ellen, who is still picking at her plate, looks at him in disbelief. She lowers her eyes sadly. Then I'll buy you a drink next time, she says faintly. Valier, casually stirring his yeongkukjang, looks at Ellen intently. I can't believe I managed to get her to agree to another trip to the cafe together so easily, he thinks. I guess I'm a very smart guy, right? The girl leaves the place. A cafe employee standing at the entrance tells her to come in again. The hero, realizing his genius, rubs his chin with his fingers. The gate crisis is a disaster caused by the incompetence of the creator of this world. We see terrified people pointing fingers at terrible monsters flying over the burning city. The author, when he was still alive, did not alter this piece of text in order to preserve the possibility of defeating a student who was studying a year older. Valier, thinking about this, walks down the corridor, wiping his head with a towel. Right now, he is training hard to survive the gate crisis that will result in so many deaths. Now he is constantly short of breath. Once he was very badly beaten, and several times he caught himself thinking how weak and pathetic he is now. We can see that Valier's hand is shaking from exhaustion. The more keenly he felt it, the more resolutely he forced himself to pick up the sword again. A fist is already firmly clenched in front of us. The hero believes that he does not have time to worry about the past right now and scroll through thoughts in his head about how weak he is. Right now, he's just an aggressive scoundrel, but he'll make sure that he's considered a truly intimidating, fearsome guy. Valier goes to an elaborate door that has a restaurant sign hanging over it. Oh, this can't be happening, he says, shocked, once inside. He sees Ellen with several dozen sausages on a large plate in front of her. One, already bitten, on a fork. Are you here again? The hero asks, puzzled. And again with some wild amounts of food. He goes to look for something to eat and even looks under the sink. Valier is very hungry and hopes to find something there. Didn't they bring any new products? There's a hint of desperation in his voice. All the shelves are empty. Then what the hell is Ellen chewing? He thinks, turning his head in the direction of his classmate. He steps right up to her. What are you eating? He asks. Raw sausages from the pantry. The girl replies that they can be eaten in this form. There is nothing dangerous in it. Valier objects. He says that they need to be fried at least a little. It's too much trouble, Ellen says. I can't believe you can't use a stove at your age, the hero tells her. Yes, I haven't tried to use it yet, the girl agrees. If we just fry these sausages, they'll be too salty, Valier thinks, clutching his head. What should I do? I don't have the energy left to stand and cook right now. I can't cook right now, he tells Ellen, who is casually eating a raw sausage. Just do as I tell you, a voice says from the kitchen. Like this, someone is chopping onions here. Yes, you're doing a great job. We see that Valier directs the actions of his classmate. You're as good as a temple chef with a knife, he praises her. You didn't lie to me about not being able to cook. No, I'm not lying, she says. This is my first time cooking. Valier stands next to the girl and directs her actions. If that's really the case, he says you're going to be a great cook. Do the same with the carrots. Ellen readily agrees. Now add the rice. Like that. Yes, the rash is already there. Stir slowly so that nothing sticks to the sides of the pan. Steam curls over the stove. This is a strange soup with lots of sausages floating in it. Is it ready yet? Asks Ellen. Yes, it responds. Hero, it doesn't look great, but the fragrance is amazing, isn't it? Just remember what you did, and cook the same way. Buy me a drink next time. Valier smiles happily, he has achieved his goal. It's all a bit of a hassle, the not-so-cheerful girl tells him. She starts to eat, and Valier cringes at the sight. What are you doing? He shouts. The soup is still very hot. But Ellen doesn't seem to feel anything. The hero opens his mouth and looks at her in shock. You didn't burn your mouth? He asks. And at the same moment, something strange happens to the girl. She holds the spoon in her mouth and shakes her hands gently. It feels like her head is about to explode. A second later, she hits the table with both her fists and her head. Valier jumps up from his seat, startled. Either spit it out or swallow it, he shouts. Why are you breaking the table? Wait, I'll get you some water. Soon everything calms down. The girl drinks water from a glass. Are you feeling better? Valier asks her. Yes, Ellen says. It's still a lot better than eating them raw, isn't it? Why don't you want to thank me? The hero asks his classmate. I made it already, she says. You just moved your hands and I decided what to do. But I made this. Young people sitting at the table eating freshly prepared soup. What the hell? Valier thinks. Why is she contradicting me? Wants to ruin the relationship. Why is she doing this? He looks at her blankly. We made it together, she finally says, popping another spoonful of soup into her mouth. She looks down sadly. Valier looks at her in silence and a little upset. Suddenly, he remembers something and looks up. May I die? He thinks. This Ellen. We see the door slightly open, behind which we can see the luxurious chandelier of the educational institution. She reminded me how pathetic I am, Valier thinks, dead tired, as he closes the door behind him. He seems to notice something. This is a very nice maid with short hair. She looks at him with strange eyes. What is it? The hero thinks. Why is the maid in my room so late? Had Bertus or Charlotte sent her here to find out something about me? The girl doesn't take her eyes off Valier. Moreover, she begins to approach him decisively. Hey, what's wrong with you? The hero asks, backing away in fright. She seems to approach the door, passing the hero who has moved away. He indignantly reprimands her for boorish behavior. It's been a long time, Your Highness, the maid says suddenly. Valier looks at her in amazement. She curtsies. Phew. It seems that the hero understands who he really is. Yes, Your Highness, he hears in response to the unspoken phrase. It's me, Sarkagar. We are reminded of what this character looks like. The bright moon illuminates the brick building of the temple with a high tower. How did you get into my room? Asks Dreadfine Valier. It wasn't hard at all, he says. From now on, I will visit you occasionally. First of all, the princess' supernatural powers that you asked me to learn about. The hero sits wearily on the bed, listening to Sarkagar in the guise of a maid. Yes, did you find out something? He asks. Sometimes you have to take a lot of risks to find out something, but I didn't come to you empty-handed. The princess' supernatural abilities are a subject of very serious controversy, including within the imperial family. So, for example, the prince's supporters seriously doubt that she has them. They say that they are being hidden because it is actually a shameless fake. Sarkagar is standing in front of Valier in the pose of a modest girl, not a middle-aged nobleman. So, Valier says, even the prince doesn't know what kind of supernatural ability she has. So, apart from the emperor, there are probably only two people who can know about it. The first is the homeroom teacher of Class B, Mr. Mustang, and the second is the teacher who works with her in supernatural ability classes. We see what the characters the hero is talking about look like. What kind of risk did you mention just now, by the way? Asks Valier Sarkagar. He's sitting on the bed with his arms crossed. If, for example, knowledgeable people have relatives or friends who they trust with their innermost secrets, I can pretend to be one of them. But serious secrets that no one should know about are very difficult to lure out in this way. Valier scratches his chin thoughtfully. The circumstances surrounding Charlotte's supernatural powers seem very strange to me. he says. If she has them and doesn't want to show them, it means that they are unpleasant or completely unacceptable. In front of us is the princess, whose eyes glow ominously, and black smoke rises behind her. I think so too, says Sarkagar. Okay, let's forget about it for now, Valier says. It's too risky. The truth will come out sooner or later anyway. The maid bows politely. Yes, your highness, the girl says. This is a very wise decision. I have something to tell you, too, the prince says. Sarkagar anxiously asks what he means. Did something really happen? Valier calms Dreadfine down. No, it's hardly serious. But this is also about the princess. He's sitting on the edge of the bed, one leg crossed over the other. Charlotte is looking for me, says the hero, supporting his head with his hand. Excuse me, Sarkagar, in the guise of a cute maid, looks anxiously at Valier. I can't believe it, comes from the dorm. It seems to me that the temple is too dangerous for you, your highness. The hero has just informed Sarkagar of Charlotte's orders to find the Valier she escaped with from the Demon King's castle. You don't have to get involved in this, Dreadfine tells the hero in the guise of a maid. He says he understands that. If I do what she asks, yawning into my fist, Valier reports, a lot of the gang members will suffer. How ironic, says Sarkagar. The moral obligation that the princess feels towards you has become a huge problem for you. Oh, shut up, Mr. Kidnapper, Valier thinks, looking at the Sarkagar maid. I never thought that I would have to do such a stupid thing as looking for myself, says the hero. I have no idea what I should do right now. Fabricate some evidence that I died somewhere, or think of something else to tell her. I think, says Sarkagar, that this is a very good plan. If only the answer would satisfy Charlotte. But we can't even guess how the princess will react. Moonlight spills through the window, illuminating the figures of Valier sitting on the bed and the maid standing in front of him. There is a chance that Charlotte will get rid of me after I fulfill the role that she assigned me, the hero thinks. He imagines the guards attacking him with sharp spears, and the princess giving them the appropriate order. But I'm much more likely to disappear if she thinks I'm not doing a good job. She'll just think I'm useless ballast. Then we'll pretend that I work a little, Valier tells Sarkagar. What do you mean, I work a little? You mean, yes, they will not do anything to us, the hero explains, if they see that we are achieving some results and are actively working to fulfill the order given to us. Valier's eyes are thoughtful. Damn me, I really don't want to see Charlotte as my opponent, he thinks. Bertus will pay attention to him as long as he sees what Valier can do for him. Charlotte will not touch the hero while he informs her about the progress in the search for Valier. I work for two highborn hypocrites who are half related to each other. A huge honor for someone's poor ass. Moreover, the hero tells Sarkagaru, if Charlotte thinks that we are working for her properly, she will not pursue us, but protect us. Valier's face shows that he is thinking hard. This situation is objectively bad, but I want to think positively. I won't be caught between a rock and a hard place like Bertus and Charlotte. Come to think of it, he tells Sarkagar, I'm now in a position where I can use both the prince and the princess. Dreadfine screams in surprise. How I admire your infinite wisdom, he says, giving the maid a completely devilish expression. God, this is terrible, Valier thinks as he looks at the nightmare unfolding in front of him. I didn't think you'd put on much weight in a day, but this is some kind of nightmare, rookie, Adriana says, towering over the crouching Valier. He coughs and gasps for air, trying to catch his breath. Sweating profusely, he looks helplessly away. Let's rest for another minute and continue running, Adriana tells him. She smiles and holds out her hand to him. An inspired paladin who wholeheartedly trains the next Demon King, Valier thinks as he assesses this absurd situation. If she ended up in hell for this, it would definitely be his fault. By the way, why doesn't Adriana use her divine power on herself? After all, her training will be much more effective from this. After regaining his breath a little, the hero asks the last question out loud. What? The girl doesn't seem to understand what he's talking about. I do not know, she says. It may sound like heresy, but it's not considered natural to develop with the help of divine power. Thoughtfully, she rubs the fingers of her hand under her chin. This is something like doping. Everything can end up causing harm to your body. Divine power restores physical strength, but it does not replenish the energy that is burned during training. Here is a clear illustration of her words. That's why I always tell you to eat a lot after you finish training. In general, this is something like stimulants, Valier concludes. After you reach a certain level, Adriana says, you can do it without my help. And now let's run, she asks her ward. He, barely able to stand on his feet from fatigue, agrees. Suddenly, Valier notices something. It's Ludwig, he thinks. It seems that he also decided to study early in the morning. Next to him is Lanyan Cesar, who has a musical talent, and Delphin Isidra, an archer. So, at least, it seems to the hero. In the original story, There were a lot of scenes where these girls were fighting with guys from class and arguing over the most insignificant things. In particular, they reproached Ludwig for his lack of talent, called him a beggar and reproached him for not knowing his place. But now all the negativity in class has focused on Valier, and the real protagonist, Ludwig, has apparently become everyone's favorite. And although it is very interesting for the hero to watch the plot of his story change, it is also quite scary. Valier looks after the fleeing trio, all of whose members he has just listed. He has no idea how significant the cumulative effect of the butterfly will be in this world. A new day dawns over Guardias. What are you thinking? Asks Valiera Adriana irritably. You're going to fall behind completely. I'm running, he says, and sets off to catch up with his mentor. What? Do you want to cook again? On the face of the hero, we see both fright and surprise. Yes, says Ellen, who is holding a spoon and a bottle of something. You don't want to hear me brag anymore, or what? What are you cooking? Valier asks her. Beef stew, the girl replies. I once saw it being cooked at home. It's all good, and the dish is wonderful. But have you ever tried to cook it yourself? The hero openly gets on Ellen's nerves, standing over her soul. No, but she puts white powder in a spoon. Are you going to add salt now? Valier asks her. The girl looks at him reproachfully. Okay, don't get mad, I'm just interested, says the hero, smiling. All he does is bother Ellen with stupid questions and advice. Do you know what's missing here? You're digesting meat. You won't chew it later, you'll still have all your teeth in it. Are you putting condiments in now? If I were you. Ellen endures all this bullying in silence. However, at some point in her hand is a huge kitchen knife, from which Valier tries to protect himself with a frying pan. Don't look at people like that, he tells the girl, especially if you have a knife in your hand. I'm done, Ellen finally says. Really? The hero continues to harass her. You didn't listen to me at all. Redo it with my advice in mind. We see a pot with something, at first glance, very appetizing. Wow, it's finally done, says Valier. If you eat slowly, you'll stay here until breakfast. Well, what? Edible? He asks, smiling. Yes, Ellen says shortly. Naturally, it's all thanks to me. By the way, are you really going to eat it all? The pot that stands in front of the girl is actually too big. Yes, I'm going to. I see, I'm happy for you. It's a good thing you're in the temple right now, he says, also picking up a spoon. Why is that? Because no family can feed you, the hero teases Ellen, scooping food from the communal pot. I'm not here by choice, Ellen says calmly. Valier looks at her in amazement. People from the temple insisted that I study here, she says calmly, looking into the hero's eyes. She's finally started talking about herself, Valier thinks. This is a good sign. You're crazy, he says aloud. The girl eats the dish prepared by her with an appetite. What does no mean? The hero asks. The bulging veins on your forehead suggest otherwise. He stifles a laugh. Bringing the stone Buddha around is a lot of fun, he thinks. I think I'm getting really sadistic, though. Valier starts laughing. It's so funny, he shouts. I've already got a stab in my side. But the girl doesn't care. She looks at him like he's a moron. But at this time, the stupid sadist had no idea that Ellen should not be angry. You're doing it all wrong, she says. Valier, who is holding a wooden sword, looks at the girl in disbelief. This is not how it is done, she repeats. Ellen stands next to the hero with her sword and directs his actions. Repeat the exercise, she orders with a rather cold expression on her face. Ellen began to take revenge for all the bullying she had experienced from Valier. She started teaching him all the basic sword fighting techniques. We see that she is standing next to her ward and says that he is doing everything wrong. You don't have to use force the way he does. I should be happy that such a strong fighter is helping me, Valier thinks, but then why am I so angry? How hypocritical I am. After the theoretical part, the girl arranged sparring sessions for the hero. An understanding in a fight with a real opponent came to him faster. Valier had learned that the art he was trying to master involved more than just swords. Here is a visual illustration showing the head, hands, knees, and feet of a master swordsman. All these body parts need to be used in the right way. The hero realized that sometimes the outcome of a battle can be decided by a kick to the lower part of the opponent's body, and that the sword must initially be held as it should be. We can see exactly how the training takes place. Ellen kicks Valier hard in the knee. It also hits me with an elbow in the gut. In the same way, the hero learned firsthand some techniques of sword fighting, attack, and suppression. Especially painful were the blows to the head, from which drool flew in all directions. It was only now that Valier realized how much Ellen was superior to all his other classmates in sword fighting. You're a corpse, the girl says, putting the point of her sword to the hero's throat. I think I'm going to die for sure, he says. Friday, 2 days before the duel. In front of us is a brick wall of one of the buildings of the temple. Ellen made him perform a very strange exercise. He holds a sword in front of him, and she hits it with all her strength. We see Valier's weapon flying far away after another blow. He sighs wearily, and his mentor tells him that any sword technique will be useless if he loses his sword so easily. According to her, the exercise that they are doing now is aimed at increasing the grip strength, so the Valier should hold his weapon as tightly as possible. She raises her sword and looks at her disciple from behind the hilt. "You're holding your sword so weak," she says, "that we'll have to do this exercise until the day of the duel." She strikes again, repeating that Valier must never let go of his weapon. He screams in pain. "You'll rip my palms off," he warns her. "Nothing will happen to them," she says indifferently. Valier lost track of the length of time this torture lasted. At some point, only the hilt of his sword remained. Everything else was splintered on the floor. The hero looks in amazement at the pathetic stub left over from what he defended himself with. He himself was not injured, but the psychological shock was very strong. "These training swords are so flimsy," Ellen says with displeasure. "They break too easily. But this is understandable. If they were stronger, we would have suffered serious injuries." "I don't think this is the first time you've done this," Valier says thoughtfully, looking down at his injured hand. "Never let the sword out of your hand," Ellen repeats for the 1000th time what she thinks is a simple truth. The hero, moving away from her, complains that this is easier said than done. He's going to get a new sword. The girl standing behind the hero calls out to him. "You're going to lose," she tells him. Valier is silent, staring mournfully ahead. "I know," he says, and with a determined movement takes one of the swords from the rack. "Do you want to win?" The girl takes a step forward. Naturally, the hero answers. In this world, no one likes to lose. He tries to continue, but Ellen interrupts him. "There is one way," she says, "which will allow you to win." She comes close to Valier and looks him straight in the eye. "I can describe it to you." The hero sees his reflection in her eyes. "Here, take the jar," Adriana tells the hero. He thanks the girl and takes the offer. "You did a good job, rookie," she says. "Rest until tomorrow's duel and try to maintain your condition." The hero greedily drinks from the jar and says that he will do as she said. Tomorrow is finally duel day, he thinks. He remembers the words Ellen said to him the day before, about how she knows a way to help him win. He then asked what exactly it was. The girl turned her face away and then advised me to think carefully about what duel essentially means. Valier ponders, propping his head on his hand. After those words, she didn't say anything, as if she specifically didn't want to give him any more clues. "Adriana, I want to ask you something," the hero says. The girl replies that she is ready to listen to him. "One of my classmates said that there was only one way for me to win this duel." "Do you know what she meant by that?" he asks. Adriana thinks about it. "I don't really know what it could be," she finally says. Even she doesn't understand what it is. Valier thinks ruefully. "We see his fist. Okay, if I lose, I'll lose. So there's no escaping it." The time for the decisive battle has come. As a result of hard training that lasted a week, Valier managed to become a little stronger. His stats, thanks to Adriana and Ellen, have grown significantly. This is the status window where these changes are displayed. And what is it at the bottom? The hero thinks, evaluating this information. The combat level rating is F+. Not enough, of course, he thinks. It's a bit disappointing after such a huge amount of effort. Valier stands with his wooden sword slung over his shoulder. He is standing inside a large indoor arena where we can see a small group of students in the stands. However, the hero thought that there would be fewer people here than he sees. Are these all freshmen? Valier examines the audience. He notices Ellen, who is as sad and unflappable as ever. Harriet's here, as well as Kono, Erich and Kair. "Reinhardt, show your best," the fans shout at him. "I have a new song playing in my head," says one of the girls. Charlotte is also here, and she looks at the hero with either contempt or anger. Apart from Berthus and Liana, there are all students from Class A. There are also a few people from Class B some Valier didn't expect to see here at all, such as Ellen and Scarlet. And the fact that Charlotte is here scares him. The hero peers into the faces of the audience. "Hey, beggar boy." Valier hears a familiar voice and turns to look at it. This is Harriet. "You're in a lot of trouble today," she shouts happily. "I hope you've prepared well for them." Her neighbor tries to stop the girl. She insinuates that these words sound very inappropriate. However, malevolent remarks are heard from many present, which, of course, does not please the hero at all. Art Degardes appears in front of Valier. "Looks like all the sophomores in the Royal class are here," Valier thinks. There might be a few people in Class B, but he only recognizes Art, Adriana, and Redina. Mr. Eppenhauser, who sits at a typical teacher's desk, says that both sides are gathered, so you can start directly to the duel. But first, he wants to tell you a couple of necessary things. Art Degardes was involved in a certain incident, as a result of which Reinhardt greatly offended his honor. The teacher looks at a piece of paper. "I have to read out what the report says," he says. 2 weeks ago, on a Saturday, first-year class of student number 11, Reinhardt, grabbed the genitals of second-year class of student number 3 and squeezed them hard. The students giggle merrily as they listen to this nonsense, framed according to all the rules of the school bureaucracy. Art, whose eggs are now being listened to by dozens of people, stands with an extremely gloomy look. Mr. Eppenhauser, meanwhile, continues. Art Degarty said afterwards that the event had deeply hurt his honor, caused unbearable moral suffering, and subjected him to sexual humiliation. He demanded an apology from the number 11 of the first year of Class A, Reichardt, but the latter refused to provide it. As a result, Art challenged his assailant to a duel in which both sides agreed to participate. Valera is shaking with laughter. Is everything right? The teacher of both duelists confirms that everything is described correctly. Both confirm the correctness of the presentation. Now, please tell us what you want from Reinhardt if you win, he asks Art. He replies that he wants Reinhardt to get down on his knees and apologize to all the undergraduates for the disrespect he showed them. They must also declare their loyalty and respect for them. It's Valier's turn to talk about it. What he wants to get if he wins. Naturally, I want to stop all the absurd rituals that senior students perform towards my classmates and all other students from junior years. Clearly, an apology wouldn't hurt either, he says. Valier, who has a wooden sword on his shoulder, looks very bold and determined. Excellent, says Mr. Eppenhauser. Let Als, the god of war, decide which side he is on, and Art interrupts the solemn announcement. Raising his clenched fist in the air, he declares that he, as a participant in a duel, has the legal right to put up a champion in his place, that is, a person who will defend his honor. And who is it? Asks Mr. Eppenhauser. What kind of nonsense is this? Valier thinks. What other champion? My champion will be number 7 from the 3rd year of class. Behind Art appears a grinning young man who I think we already know a little bit. This is Mayarton. Art hands him a wooden sword. So you're the brat who told me to come back when the prince was around? The goon asks Valier. Let's see if you're as good a fighter as you say you are. Smiling, he looks at the much more fragile hero. It seems that my provocation has offended the 3rd year students from Class A, the hero thinks, and they decided to deal with me with their own hands. Some of them are also sitting in the stands. By the way, he is not going to look away from the enemy. Valier recalls Ellen's words that he should think carefully about the true meaning of the word duel. Now he seems to understand what she meant. That can't be what she meant, he thinks. The appointment of a champion, that is, a fighter who defends the honor of the duelist, is an inalienable right. This means that Ellen hinted that she agreed to act as his champion. This is Ellen, who seems to be just waiting for this. It seems that this is really the only way to come out victorious from this duel, the hero understands. She's an experienced fighter, and she's unlikely to lose easily to this guy. Valier glances at the podium and sees Adriana sitting there, fuming. What's wrong with her? The hero thinks. Did she really hate this undergrad so much? The girl's fists are clenched and her eyes are filled with hatred. It seems that she is also very eager to take my place, Valier understands. He can't believe that 2 people in this school are willing to fight in his stead. If there are no other disagreements, prepare to start a duel, says Mr. Eppenhauser, who is sitting at the table. If the result is clear or one of the opponents decides to give up, it will end. Sir, I have a suggestion, Mayarton says with a predatory grin. What is it? The teacher asks him. Can we make it so that the duel can only end with the surrender of one of the parties? Why is that? Asks Mr. Eppenhauser, who looks a little puzzled. The result, I think, is relatively clear, isn't it? Mayarton holds out his sword towards Valier. I just want to teach some cheeky junior some manners. Reinhardt, do you agree to this condition? The teacher asks the hero. Yes, but then I'll add my own, he replies. Who should I choose as the champion to fight in my place in this duel? Ellen, or was it Adriana? But what Valier says is completely different. He will not use the right to field a champion. I ask my opponent for a head start, he says. Are you really going to fight me? Mayarton asks, laughing. Reinhardt, Adriana screams and stands up from her seat on the podium. Ellen is still staring at the floor with the same impenetrable indifference. Mayarton must not use his left hand during a duel. The hero announces his condition. No problem, the 3rd year student says, and waves his sword in front of him in agreement. This is indeed a very serious handicap, Valier thinks. Until recently, he hadn't even thought to ask for something like this. But during the sparring sessions with Ellen, he realized how important the hand, which is considered a non-primary, auxiliary hand, plays. Images flash through his mind of the very painful experience of learning the basics of sword fighting when he received many blows to different parts of his body. But all this pain, as it now seems, was not entirely in vain. My chances of making up for the difference in size are very small, the hero thinks, but still. Valier holds the sword tightly and points it in the direction of the opponent. Start the duel, Mr. Eppenhauser says. Mayarton, smiling cheerfully, puts his weapon in the hero's direction. Afraid? He asks. He doesn't seem to expect a trick from me, Valier thinks. Maybe throw myself at him and try to catch him off guard. The hero, without thinking twice, attacks Mayarton. But he easily repels this attack. Why is he so strong despite only using one hand? Valier glares at his opponent. He almost dropped his sword from the retaliatory blow. "How weak you are, shining all your teeth," says Mayarton. Now it's up to him to strike. Valier tries to block it. "He only hits my sword on purpose," the hero understands. "This is probably what Ellen prepared me for during our training sessions. Right now, it's very difficult for him to hold his wooden weapon in his hands. She knew it would turn out this way," Valier thinks. But after another powerful blow from Mayarton, he loses his weapon. He falls back on the floor and hits it. It's very painful. The hero screams. As he writhes on the floor, a third-year student taunts him while standing over him. "What are you doing, rookie? How can you throw a sword so carelessly?" He nudges the sword with his boot, which has flown away, toward Valier, who is sprawled on the floor. "Take it," he orders with a smile on his face. The hero glares at his enemy. The duel continues in the indoor arena of the temple. Mayarton kicks Valier in the chest. With a loud cry of pain, the hero flies back and hits his head on the floor. He lies on the floor and groans, covering his stomach with both hands. "How's it going, rookie?" his opponent asks. "You can take it again." Mayarton laughs out loud, referring to the sword that has fallen out of Valier's hands again. "And he's really reaching for his weapon." "I don't understand," says the third-year student, "why a man who doesn't have any skills to back up his bad temper keeps begging to be made into a chop." The hero gets another hit. Mayarton swings his sword down, and Valier tries to block the hit. The smile disappears from the third-year student's face. "You may be a dummy, but you have the eyes of a true swordsman," he admits. Valier reaches out with his fingers again. "Don't get up, you idiot," Mayarton shouts, and strikes again with his sword. "It seems to me that it would be better if you just quietly and peacefully admit your defeat," advises the bully. Mr. Eppenhauser is watching the duel calmly, his arms folded across his chest. Students sitting in the stands, meanwhile, are very worried about the weaker one. You can hear their exclamations and advice. "Give up. Say you're giving up. God, give up. You will immediately feel better." It hurts them to watch what happens to their classmate. "Why doesn't the teacher stop them?" the girl sitting in front of Charlotte asks in fright. Adriana angrily calls out to Valier, and Redina, who is sitting next to her, is sobbing with her face in her hands. The hero, kneeling in front of the enemy, spits blood. "Well, what? Give up?" he asks. "Or would you like to continue our instructive lesson? Are you the most diligent student in the world?" The hero listens to his feelings. "Holy shit," he thinks. "Not just my hands, but my whole body is telling me that I can't win." However, he picks up the sword again. "Hey," he calls out to his opponent. "I won't be able to win," Valier thinks, "but even if that cruel, freaking out bastard kills me, I just want to use my sword to get him to his feet." The hero looks menacingly at Mayarton. "Let me hit you just once, you scum," he shouts, and charges. "One hit is more than enough." "Are you crazy?" the third-year student asks. Valier's behavior does seem abnormal, a premonition of imminent defeat in the intention to awaken supernatural powers, having fallen into a hopeless situation. All this faded into the background and was forgotten. Only animal rage remained. The hero is scary to look at. He hadn't originally intended to do something like this and drive himself completely insane, but Mayarton had crossed the line. Here is a status window that informs you about using the revision function. Valier is so angry that he doesn't care about anything. He swings his sword at the opponent. He knows that the moment he hits Mayarton's sword, it will shatter into pieces. And it seems to be happening. Here is another status window. It tells you that you need to spend 20 achievement points to complete the event. "I'll use them," Valier says flatly. His sword cuts into Mayarton's sword and breaks it. The third-year student is no longer amused. He realizes that things didn't go according to his plan at all. Valier slams into the big man, sending him flying backwards. Art is probably very happy now that he gave up his place to a student of a year older. Just like Ellen said, wooden training swords aren't very strong. The probability that something like this will happen is very high, so the hero managed to achieve the desired result without spending a large number of points. Mayarton is shaking all over and holding onto his genitals, which probably just got hit very hard. He curses his abuser in a trembling voice. Mr. Eppenhauser picks up a new sword and throws it at the third year's feet. Valier knows he mustn't let that happen, so that the weapon falls into the hands of his opponent. He accelerates and runs to Mayarton, who is already bending down to pick up his sword. If he takes it, I'm dead, the hero thinks. He slams hard into Mayarton's back. In the next second, the third-year student hits his face on the floor, and the sword thrown to him is in Valier's hands. We see the head of a bully, on the top of which something flies. It turns out that this is the hero's boot. Valier holds the sword by the blade, swears profanely and repeatedly kicks at different parts of the body of the enemy lying on the floor. Damn it, he thinks. It's not enough to knock him out. He will recover soon. However, he continues to trample on the third-year student. At some point, he gathers his strength and throws Valier far back with a powerful kick. "You fucking idiot," Mayarton yells, his eyes bulging with rage. Blood is oozing from his nose and mouth. "Do me a favor, don't give up." Why would I give up? Valier replies ironically. I won't do it. You can bet on it, you son of a bitch. The third-year student, who is already on his feet and holding a sword in his hand, asks in amazement. He can't believe what he's hearing. I'll win, the hero confidently tells him. He's battered and his clothes are torn, but he doesn't seem to have any doubts about his success. Do you really think you're going to win after just one sneak attack? Mayarton is ready to tear apart an excessively bold opponent. Great. Valier wants to win and doesn't want to lose. But the last thing he wants to do is get down on his knees and apologize, if only because dozens of students are looking at him now, along with whom he still has to study. But he can't beat his opponent, and he can't figure out a way to make Mayarton give up either. The third-year student is already approaching the hero to smear him in front of everyone. How do you even plan on beating me? He asks, his face contorted with anger. Do you want to show me? He raises his sword to strike, but Valier wants to defeat him, no matter what. He wants to make the bastard crawl on his knees in front of him, no matter what it takes. No, you can't even wish for that. This level of power is completely impossible for the hero at this point in time. But even knowing the hopelessness of his situation, he still hopes to win. You can see it in Valier's face, too. He's sure of her. His hand, he clenches his fist, and what is needed to win gradually becomes visible to him. The hero understands how his ability works. It has nothing to do with bringing yourself to some extreme states. Go ahead, start it, Valier says to Mayarton. He asks again, surprised. The name of the hero's power is autosuggestion. I'll still win, he says, and points his sword at the enemy. He has to tell himself something and really believe it. He's gone mad, Harriet says, looking at Valier. Her neighbor repeats her phrase almost word for word. She can't believe it either. Adriana calls out to Valier in alarm, but it's completely useless. The hero must blindly believe in his victory, even if its chances are zero. He must not doubt her. That's his strength. It's Charlotte's face. And Ellen. And now we see that the lock that stands next to the blocked ability on the status window starts to crack. The hero must act like a naive child, like a complete idiot, like a kamikaze. Look, he says to Mayarton, and swings back to strike. It is already rushing towards Valier to destroy him. The third-year student's face shows that he is not going to spare the hero. But this was no longer the weakling who had entered this duel. I have already beaten you, Valier says. And you can see in his eyes that he doesn't doubt that at all. Autosuggestion awakened. A very powerful blow from a wooden sword hits Mayarton in the face. That's my ability, says the hero. Mayarton dropped to one knee in shock. What the hell? This can't be happening. Gritting his teeth, he looks at his assailant. Valier grabs him by the hair. The third-year student yells to let him go, but immediately receives a powerful punch. The audience looks on in shock. Only Mr. Eppenhauser remains calm on the surface. Adriana and Redina are especially worried. Surrender, Valier tells the enemy, holding him by the hair. How did you do that? He says in shock, unable to get up from the floor or resist. The hero slams his face down hard on the floor. You'll either give up or pass out, he warns him. We see Kono, Erich and Kay are in the stands. The latter winces in disgust. He seems to experience Mayarton's pain as if it were his own. I told you I'd win, Valier tells his opponent, looking him in the eye. This is the realization of a baseless belief. The blinder the faith, the stronger my strength, the hero thinks. He was absolutely sure that he would win, and he became strong enough to achieve this result. Smiling fiercely, Valier lifts Mayarton's head by the hair and demands that the third-year student say this. That's what autosuggestion is, he thinks. This guy has been visiting the temple for 2 years longer than I have. He shouts loudly to the audience, showing them the helpless face of his opponent. He's stronger than me and much better at swordsmanship. Go ahead and say, I, a third-year student, was severely beaten by a freshman, Valier says to the clueless enemy. He laughs like a madman. Mayarton is silent. What? You don't want to say it. The hero looks at the bully in surprise. Then I'll make sure you wake up in a room with an unfamiliar ceiling, he shouts at Mayarton, pulling his hair to slam his face into the floor once more. Third-year student, stammering, admits defeat. Blood is oozing from his nose and mouth. The hero lets go of his head. I was wrong, the goon says, bursting into tears and falling face first on the floor. Mr. Eppenhauser walks up to Valier and holds up his hand. The duel is over, he says formally. I declare Reinhardt the winner. They stand in front of the fallen Mayarton, who lies unconscious behind them. A status window appears that informs you that the duel with art task has been completed. The hero gets 600 experience points as a reward for winning. But there's something wrong with Valier. His vision is blurry. He so wanted his opponent to wake up in a room with an unfamiliar ceiling. Adriana looks anxiously at her companion. She tries to call out to him, but he can't hear anything anymore because he's lost consciousness and collapsed on the floor with the back of his head down. Oh, shit, Valier thinks, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling. It is he who is now doing what he promised to provide for his opponent. He lies covered with a white blanket on the bed, next to which is a nightstand with a vase. As a result of the duel, both of its participants passed out, but he made it to the announcement of the result, so this result can hardly be disputed. The hero hears some sounds. He sees Adriana. The girl pulls back the curtain and states that Valier has finally come to his senses. He greets the guest. "I'm really glad you don't have any serious consequences," says Adriana. One of her hands is behind Valier's forehead and the other is on her own. The hero confusedly confirms her words. He sits up in bed and asks me to tell him what happened at the gym in the first place. "The duel ended with your victory, but then you just passed out," says the girl. "You're currently in the dorm recovery department." Valier looks around in surprise. It turns out, he thinks, that there is such a room not only next to the gym, but also here. Does this mean that Mayarton lies somewhere nearby? Valier remembers the third year's battered face. "Your opponent is currently in another room in this ward," Adriana informs us. "You don't think they'd put you in one, do you?" "I see," Valier says, but he peeks cautiously through the curtain. "By the way, Reinhardt, then, during the duel, our eyes met. Didn't you know that I was ready to be your champion?" Anger appears on the girl's face. "Really?" The hero turns away, smiling. "You're completely out of your mind," Adriana continues to complain. "Did you get into a self-defeating cancer, hoping for a miraculous and instantaneous awakening of a supernatural ability? I couldn't even imagine what you meant when you said you wanted to be beaten up." Valier isn't going to argue with her. "Good things end well," he says, avoiding the girl's gaze. "Not a damn thing," she shouts angrily. "You did something completely reckless." We see a battered hero, holding his elbow, and dozens of attentive eyes watching the beating. "This time it ended well," says Adriana, "because you were able to awaken your supernatural ability quite by accident. But do you really plan to continue doing this for 6 years in order to develop?" Valier lies back down on the bed and turns away from her guest. "I'm not going to do it," he says. "Supernatural abilities have additional conditions," he thinks. "I'll buy the rest of the talents I need with achievement points." "Anyway," Adriana says crossly, folding her arms across her chest, "don't do anything else like that. And don't go overboard with the upperclassmen just because you won a duel." "I think it's inevitable," Valier tells her. The girl looks at him sternly. "If this happens again, you'll get a very serious scolding from me," she says. "Fine, I'll try to control myself," the hero says without turning his face to Adriana. "But seriously, I'm very grateful to you," he admits. "I prefer undergraduates who get along peacefully with others and don't fight with everyone," the girl tells him. "I don't think I can change that much," the hero replies, smiling. "So you'd better get used to me." The brute. Adriana hits Valier on the head and he screams in pain. In front of us is the majestic building of the temple, illuminated by the bright daytime sun. Adriana spent quite a long time with Valier after he woke up. We can see the bump on his head that he got as a result of this. After the hero was able to leave the recovery unit and was examined by doctors, he met with Mr. Eppenhauser. Auto-suggestion. The teacher looks at Valier carefully. "This is very interesting, number 11. We, of course, assume that among your innumerable potentials, there must be a propensity for supernatural powers," he says. "But you are actually able to activate one of those abilities. Although to fight a duel with an undergrad, in my opinion, this is still a very stupid idea. However, if you look at the result, it paid off." Valier holds a hand to his head. "Actually, I did it because I hoped it would end well, but to make it work." The hero tries to explain his motives, but the teacher interrupts him. "Talent can't be obtained through hard work, so luck can also be considered a talent," he says. "However, from now on, you are forbidden to use your ability to attack other people." "I won't do anything stupid," Valier promises. "However, when I use my power, it's not so obvious," he thinks, leaving Mr. Eppenhauser's office. "So nothing can be guaranteed here either. Even though I'm being violent, I'm not a fool at all. I bet even Miss Rollandria will be surprised." Valier looks thoughtfully into the distance. He walks down the hall with his hands in his pockets. Students passing by turn to look after him. They discuss Reichardt's awakening of supernatural powers during a duel, the hero realizes. Even the upperclassmen had heard rumors about it. The duel itself is the #1 news item in all the royal classes, from top to bottom. It was won by a freshman, and this alone generates a lot of rumors. Valier looks very sad. "The views of those who hate me have changed a lot," he thinks. We see this in the case of Kaer and Erich. This was not only affected by the awakening of the supernatural ability, but also by what they saw during the duel. Valier is startled to meet someone in the hallway. Is that Miss Idiot? Wow, he thinks. Harriet walks past him with a stony face. What's wrong with her? The hero wonders. Isn't this the perfect time to say something like "you got it well, but you should have done better to my face"? Valier rubs his chin in confusion. Unable to bear this slight, he calls out to the girl. She hears and stops. "What do you need?" she says irritably, turning to the hero. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" he asks. They haven't beaten you enough, you poor beggar. The hell you would have won if you hadn't used your supernatural ability unfairly. The girl shouts out whatever she thinks, looking directly into Valier's face. Well, that's exactly the reaction I expected from her, he thinks. But it seemed to me that you were worried every time it hit me, says the hero. What? Harriet looks at him in disbelief. You had a completely white face, and you also stamped your foot, Valier says ironically. The girl starts crying. She clenches her fists and looks at the hero with either hatred or fear. In general, in her eyes a whole range of strong feelings. No, I didn't do any of this, she shouts, closing her eyes. Why should I worry about some filthy beggar? Harriet says, pointing a trembling finger at Valier. On the contrary, I enjoyed it when he hit you. The hero stops this flow of emotions by grabbing the girl's cheeks with his hands. What are you doing? Don't touch me. Harriet breaks free and raises her fist to hit Valier. He smiles stupidly. How sweet she is when she's angry, he thinks. Suddenly, he understands something. Wait a second. What are you? The girl doesn't let him finish. You filthy bastard. Why are you torturing me like this? She bursts into tears. Don't mock me, she shouts, wiping away her tears. What the hell am I supposed to do now? The hero thinks. Calm down, Valier says. Eat this yummy food, it will help. No, you've already touched it. I won't eat it, Harriet says, sobbing. This is very similar to when an adult goes too far in games with children, they start crying, and then he can't stop them, the hero thinks. Look, I'm sorry, he says to Harriet. Do you hear me? I'm sorry. Shut up, she says angrily. You keep bullying me and calling me an idiot. She covers her face with her hands. No one talks to me like that. Not my father, not my mother, not my older brothers. And you're nobody at all. Zero. A dummy. And you're the only one doing it. The hero is offended to hear all this, but he tolerates it. But you call me a beggar too, he says. Harriet clenches his fists. So because it's true. How can I mock a beggar if I call him a beggar? It cuts to a squeal that cuts Valier's ears. Should I hit her? He thinks. Look, Valier says, you can't call this bullying. Honestly, I'm doing this because you're so cute. Harriet, who has tears in her eyes, looks at the hero in disbelief. Think about it, he says. Didn't I just apologize? I called you cute and complimented you. Is this really bullying? The girl does not understand how to relate to what Valier is saying. She stands defensively in front of him, her small fists outstretched. You were patting my cheeks and laughing, she recalls. But only because you looked even more cute at that moment, the hero justifies himself. You really looked incredibly cute at that moment. Harriet seems to be calming down. I see, she says. Just don't you dare touch me with your dirty paws again. I understand, Valier tells her. But first, calm down and eat this. He hands her something that looks like a cookie. She tries to stop him with her hands outstretched. I get it, Harriet says indignantly. Just stop acting like some old lady. You look a lot like my grandmother right now. Valier and Harriet are standing by the window. The first man crosses his arms and looks off into the distance. The girl looks at the cookie he gave her. Did it hurt you when Mayarton hit you? Asks Harriet. It hurt like hell, Valier says. How can this not be painful? Then why did you continue to endure and fight? You could have just given up. If you hadn't accidentally awakened a supernatural power, you would never have won, says the girl. At least once in your life, it happens that you don't want to lose to someone, the hero answers her. At this point, he imagines the gloating face of Mayarton standing over him. You really want to hit the enemy at least once, he continues. It doesn't matter what the price is. And that vile undergrad was just such an enemy to me back then. You know what? Harriet says sadly. You will die young. Maybe, Valier tells her. But I didn't die this time, did I? The girl looks at him in surprise and says nothing. It's hard to imagine what's going on in her heart. Valier and Harriet are standing next to the window, just as they were at the beginning of the conversation. But the atmosphere has changed markedly. They really have a lot to think about. In front of us is a magnificent building with a large coat of arms of the temple, illuminated by the bright daytime sun. I've heard the news. You're just an animal, Reinhardt. You were able to defeat a third-year student in a duel. It's just amazing. Bertus looks at the hero with approval and gives him compliment after compliment. Valier tells him that he just had a supernatural power awakened at the right moment. Suddenly, this conversation is interrupted by a call from the side. Someone calls out to Valier, and he turns toward the voice. This is Art. You seem to have recovered, he tells the hero. What? Do you still have any questions for me? Valier doesn't understand what the sophomore wants from him. He suddenly bows and apologizes. I lost the duel, so I came to admit that I was wrong, he says. I will never again make unreasonable demands on undergraduates, insult them, or beat them up. Maybe Adriana was right, Valier thinks, looking at Art. He is indeed a very worthy man. Maybe Mayarton just forced Art to put him up as the champion instead. And this girl seems to be in a similar situation too. He's referring to Redina, the yellow-haired cutie who is currently having fun with the other students. It is impossible not to love her, and she is probably the favorite of the entire class of in the second year. One can only imagine the mental anguish she experienced when she was forced to drill freshmen. The third-year students probably chose her because they understood that she was not capable of offending even a fly. However, the scoundrels forced her to do so and may have even bullied her when she tried to object. Art considers her a good friend, so he just couldn't stand it when Valier humiliated Redina so cruelly. The hero understands how wrong he was then. He stands up. What I did was also wrong, Valier says, and bows low. I'm sorry, too. Art looks at him in amazement. Kono and Erich, who are standing behind him, are also shocked. A smile appears on Art's face. Thank you, Reinhardt, he says. Turning around, he leaves, and the hero silently looks after him. I'll apologize to Redina later, too, he thinks, looking thoughtfully out the window. The Victory Festival starts next week, Mr. Eppenhauser announces. As you all know, winning the Great Demon War is one of the most important events in history. For this reason, the temple will be closed for the month during which the festival will be held. The students are cheering, shouting, and waving their hands. But given the schedule and other circumstances, the school will only be closed for 5 days. It will be next week. The joy of students disappears somewhere, but when they leave the meeting, they are also happy about the 5 days that they have been allocated for rest. They will be able to rest at least exhausting morning runs. Valier imagines visiting Ellery's, whom he hasn't seen in what feels like 100 years. However, someone calls out to him. 11, you should come with me after school, the hero hears. Mr. Eppenhauser gets up from his seat, goes to the door, and asks Valier to follow him. The hero looks at the teacher in disbelief. What have I done? He thinks. This is an elegant building with a high tower on the roof. The weather is sunny. Valier is surprised. He and Mr. Eppenhauser are sitting on a typical outdoor bench in front of a swimming pool. Let's wait here for now, the teacher tells him. There's no water in the pool, Valier thinks, head down. Most likely because it's quite cold outside. And if you think about it, why can't you heat the water in the pool? Don't we use mana stones to warm our shower water? Is this also my flaw in the plot settings? Mr. Eppenhauser, Valier says to the teacher, I know that there is no problem with hot water in the temple. Why not set up a swimming pool there? This would allow you to go swimming even in winter. It is possible, the interlocutor replies, but it is very expensive to maintain an internal pool. Even if you use rainwater in it, no one wants to swim in the same water all year round. Why are you asking that question? He asks. No, nothing, the hero answers, confused. I was just wondering why we don't use the pool in winter. Do you want to have swimming lessons this time of year? Is that all? The two men are freezing on a bench, looking out at the empty pool. Well, I think that would be nice, Valier says thoughtfully. I see, the teacher tells him calmly. You don't seem to have any ulterior motives. Ulterior motives? What is he talking about? The hero is a little alarmed by the phrase of Mr. Eppenhauser. Valier genuinely doesn't understand what he means. Dude, do you think I asked this because I want to see girls in swimsuits? He casts a suspicious glance at his homeroom teacher. He's just clearing his throat. She'll be here soon, so I'll go, he says. Teacher, where are you going? Why is it so unexpected? I think you misunderstood me. Valier has a panic attack. But Mr. Eppenhauser is already leaving, and the hero hears another voice. It's been a long time, hasn't it, Reinhardt? I had no idea that you would actually have a supernatural power awakened in you. And, I must say, what I saw really struck me. This is Rolendria, a teacher of supernatural abilities. I'm very surprised, too, Valier tells her. This is almost a unique case, so now we will have an exam rather than a lesson, says the teacher, looking at the hero with hope. Should we start? She's holding a stopwatch. 8 seconds. It's faster than before, she shouts happily. The hero, who is squatting, performs some task at her direction. Excellent, Rolendria says. Your average time was 8.3 seconds, and after using autosuggestion, you did it in exactly 8. It works. I was initially worried that your power would affect some unexpected things, but now I see that it's only limited to strengthening your physical capabilities. Valier bent at the waist, panting, trying to regain his composure. It seems that he is not at all happy that they are working with him in this way. This is the first time I've seen such an ability, Rolendria continues to rejoice. It affects reality through simple autosuggestion. I think I'm going to lose my mind, Valier thinks. He grits his teeth in anger. Autosuggestion. This is an ability that allows a person to believe in what he has invented for himself. Before us is a hero lost in thought in 2 of his hands. If a person before the start imagines that he is the world champion in short distance running, he will be able to show the corresponding result, or even higher if it raises its supernatural ability to a certain level. But to do this, of course, you need to believe very strongly in it. This is very similar to the winner's mentality, the hero thinks, or the childish belief that my dad is the president of the whole world. It seems that he was forced to do some exercise again. What's the problem, Reinhardt? Asks Rolendria, who seems to have noticed that something is wrong with Valier. How would you put it? It's getting harder for me to handle it mentally, he says. Don't despair, the teacher reassures him. You have great abilities. He looks at her, sweating profusely. It's true. It seems to me that everything is not so rosy at all. Naturally, the difference in results may seem insignificant now, Rolendria assures him, looking at his papers, but there is another aspect that deserves recognition. Reinhardt, you use your supernatural ability extremely well. Despite the fact that the effect is very weak, you can activate it instantly. Valier looks down at his hand in surprise. It can be assumed that you are familiar with the activation method before your power awakened. In other words, Reinhardt, you have a natural gift for autosuggestion. Rolendria, literally glowing with happiness, points her finger at the hero. She's complimented me, Valier thinks, but why do I feel so bad? The exam is over, the teacher happily declares. Please come to my classes. Be sure to come and don't miss any of them. Top view of one of the buildings of the temple. Night. Valier lies in his clothes on the bed, arms outstretched. This ability is no different from what is described in the famous anime The Eccentricity of Love is Not a Hindrance, the hero thinks, looking at the ceiling with detachment. What the hell is my life like? Valier jumps up in bed at the sound of the wired phone ringing. He picks up the phone. Hello? Go down to the main lobby, he hears. I want to check something out. We see that his companion is Charlotte. A typical gas lamp hangs on a hook. Valier and Charlotte are sitting on a bench below him. You suddenly became the owner of a supernatural power, says the girl. How do you feel? Well, it's not a bad feeling, the hero replies. I've heard that your ability is called autosuggestion, Charlotte continues. So if you believe something hard enough, it will happen, right? This, of course, can be called an ability, says Valier. So if you believe very strongly that you are someone, you can immediately understand where the person you think you are is, asks Charlotte. Her eyes are full of sadness and worry. The hero looks at her sympathetically. It probably won't work, he says, but I can at least try. He hides his eyes from her. You need this. The girl asks, what's it? Valier looks timidly at the paper Charlotte is holding. She has something urgent to do, he thinks. If I do everything right, the Ring Gang might live a little longer. He stares, and his eyes widen in surprise. He sees a photo of himself as before without using magic filters. It is clear that Valier is also sad and, perhaps, even ashamed. This girl, he thinks, has been carrying this image with her all this time. Now I have to lie to her again. He turns the picture of Valier over in his hands. I think I can see the castle crumbling, he says. Charlotte is alarmed. What does castle mean? She asks excitedly, turning to the hero. I see a huge castle and people coming out of it, Valier continues. They seem to be riding a horse now. They are being chased by some other people. The girl looks at the hero with her mouth open. And I also see some demons, the hero adds. The girl doesn't take her eyes off him. Well, they look like demons, at least, Valier says defensively as Charlotte grabs his wrist. Say more, she begs. Please, I'm begging you. There are tears in her eyes. Valier thinks, his mouth hanging open. My little lie is taking on a very serious dimension. He thinks. It keeps adding new details. And all this causes more and more pain to Charlotte. Here is a suffering princess and a twig in front of her face. I'm doing something very terrible to her, Valier realizes. We see a girl on her knees, shrinking from unbearable heartache. I do not know, says the hero. I just see the same scene. He pretends to look at the picture carefully. Maybe, he continues, it's because my strength is still very weak. Just tell me if he's alive or not. Just this, pleads Charlotte, who is already sobbing profusely. He is alive. The girl freezes and looks at one point. I do not know what exactly happened to him, who he is with now and where he is, says Valier, whose back we can see, but he is alive, I am sure of it. Charlotte approaches him, tears rolling down her cheeks. She looks relieved. She presses a fist to her chest. Thank you, says Charlotte sincerely. Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks. Valier stares at the picture, unable to look up. Valier and Charlotte are sitting on a bench. They both bowed. One is over a photo, the other is crying, covering her face with her hands. It seems that the passions have subsided a little. Two heroes look into the distance, at the night sky and the sharp tower of the temple. Please don't tell anyone about this, the princess asks the hero. You understand why I'm asking you to do this, don't you? Of course, the hero answers. Because Bertus will try to use me to find out some information. Charlotte smiles. He's my savior, she says enthusiastically and looks up. If it wasn't for him, I would have gone crazy long ago, she says. I wouldn't be here. Even now, I feel like I'm going to lose my mind. When I was in a place where there was nothing but blood and death, and my heart was completely broken. This guy appeared in front of me. He said everything would be fine, and he kept telling me that humanity would win. We can see it. What events she remembers. He tried so hard to comfort me. He told me that he had lost his memory, says Charlotte. He didn't know who he really was or why he was in this prison. He seemed calm, but he must have been very scared by the whole situation. Because I was shaking with terror, he tried to calm me down. Charlotte remembers the crackers he gave her earlier. He only showed kindness because he met someone who needed it in this hell, she says. Valier is still looking at his old self. So I promised to help him regain his lost memories, the girl says, looking down sadly. To fulfill that promise, I must find him. Is this what he really wants? Valier asks. Bring back those memories. He had been through a lot in the Demon King's castle. Don't you think so? That these memories would be too painful for him. Charlotte listens with her arms crossed. Of course, it would be nice to find out who he is. The hero continues, but some things are better never to remember at all. Yes, you may be right, the princess agrees. But I can always ask him about it when I find him. Reinhardt, find him, Charlotte pleads, looking at the hero. If you do that, you can ask me anything. You can see in her eyes that she's really willing to give up everything in the world. This is a very dangerous promise, the hero replies with a smile. You're not giving it to the most decent person on this earth. Valier remains on the bench under the street lamp, alone. I'm just a shrimp, and I'll be crushed quickly if I get caught between two fighting whales, he thinks. We see a curved iron gate illuminated by a lantern. The hero sighs and enters them. I think my sister is looking for someone, he hears Bertus say, as it turns out that he was waiting for him in this ambush. Bertus, what are you doing here at this time? Valier asks, turning to the prince. Damn it, don't tell me he heard everything I said to Charlotte, the hero thinks. She asked me to find someone, he replies aloud. Although, don't you know who she's looking for? Of course I know, Bertus says, smiling. It's all right. I don't think you've found the man yet. She probably asked you to find him with the help of the Ring Gang, right? Well, how is it? Any progress? Valier looks warily at Bertus. I think he's checked out my background, too, he thinks, and now he's blatantly showing that he's always following me. What success is there if I only have a portrait? I don't even know his name, the hero replies to the prince. She didn't say who it was, he asks. Valier stares at the prince, one hand still in his pocket. No, she didn't give any special details about him, he tells the high-born interlocutor. Okay, the prince reassures the hero, but you should know that I'm also looking for this guy. If you find out anything about him, please let me know. He is leaning against a pillar, looking calmly at Valier. Then he turns away from the hero. Although it may all be for nothing, he says, I feel like it will break even if I just leave it alone. Or rather, she's probably broken by now if she's asking someone like you for help. The prince stares at the hero. I want to ask you something else, he says. Are you by any chance the future head of the Thieves' Guild? Your suspicions seem logical, but you're wrong, Valier assures him. I haven't seen a single member of this guild in person, and if I had my way, I would cut all ties with them. So you're connected to the Ring Gang, not the Thieves' Guild, right? The prince rubs his chin thoughtfully with his fingers. Sorry, so sorry. Why is he so upset? What is he even thinking about? The hero thinks, glancing sideways at Bertus. Reinhardt, the point is that I consider the existence of criminal organizations to be an unavoidable evil, explains Prince, smiling enigmatically. Even if you take out all the gangs and destroy them, new ones will take their place. He picks up a tree leaf with his fingers. By the way, it is absolutely impossible to completely eradicate them. What a bastard, Valier thinks, knowing what Bertus is driving at. But you can try to rule the dark side. This gives at least the opportunity to somehow control it, the prince concludes his thought. Reinhardt, he says, looking intently into the hero's eyes. There's an eerie soulfulness on his face. Do you want me to become the head of this guild? Valier stands before the prince, not even sure how to respond to his question. What? 2 dead butterflies lie on the paving stones. Students chatter as they leave the temple for a short vacation. See you after the festival. You've done a good job, now get some rest. Bye. One of the students suggests that we meet in Central Park on our return. Reinhardt, you said you were going home tomorrow, one of the teachers tells the hero. Train there, and tell me if you're interested in going to church. Thank you for the suggestion, Valier replies, but I'm just going to rest. Okay, I'm going to miss my train. See you. He walks out the door and turns around to say goodbye. Okay, see you later, the girl waves at him. Valier walks thoughtfully across the cobblestones. He's thinking hard about something. Bertus' phrase is running through his head, you want me to become the head of this guild. It wasn't the last one. The prince then said that he would like to appoint someone he knew to lead the guild. This would allow him to control the underworld. He declared his willingness to secretly support this person. I don't think that's a particularly outrageous suggestion, Bertus said, looking at Valier. This guy wants to make his way to the imperial throne in this way, the hero thinks. Okay, don't worry too much about it, the prince says, looking into Valier's eyes from a few centimeters away. These are still only abstract plans, nothing serious. In any case, I won't be able to start executing it right now. Well, good night, Reinhardt, Bertus said, then turned and walked away. And this is as Reinhardt still sounds in the ears of the hero. Wake up, Reinhardt. Concentrate. Your thoughts are not here, says Ellen, who is holding a wooden sword. I'll be damned, Valier thinks. Bertus' words are still in my head, and I can't concentrate. I've had enough for one day, he says, smiling. Let's finish this. Ellen, who looks very disappointed, reluctantly agrees. Valier calls out to the girl. Don't you think you're pushing yourself a little too hard? He asks. I think you could use a little rest, too. But Ellen ignores his words. I will train, says the girl, continuing to beat the simulator with a wooden sword. What's wrong with her today? Valier thinks as he leaves the gym. Is she under some kind of stress? Why doesn't she spare herself at all? Okay, I'm off, he says out loud. Do not overexert yourself, rest at least sometimes. The hero walks down the corridor. Sounds from the gym reach his ears. Valier thinks about it. There are 2 delicious sandwiches in front of him. What am I even doing? The hero thinks. It's not like me at all, but this girl is acting in a way that makes you want to take care of her. It turns out that he brings sandwiches to her. Did I get attached to her? It's scary, very scary. I made a lot more food than I planned, but for her it's not a problem at all. The hero continues to reflect. He goes to the gym and informs you in advance that he has brought something to eat. Ellen, go get some food. But, by going inside, Valier freezes in surprise. The girl is lying on the floor next to the simulator and her sword is lying a little behind. The hero calls out to Ellen, but she doesn't hear him. Don't go, brother, the little girl says with concern in her eyes, with several other people standing next to her. Why do you have to sacrifice yourself? She asks. What about me? What about us? The brother is on one knee in front of the baby. Please don't go, brother, she says, but he's already leaving, followed by his companions. Ellen is lying in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. Are you awake? Valier asks worriedly, who is standing next to her bed. Where am I? The girl asks, turning her eyes in his direction. We're in the infirmary. Do you even know that going to places like this can end in death? You're very young. Why are you so keen on reincarnation? The teacher, who is in the same room, snorts, stifling a laugh. Ellen, if he had come just a little later, the girl says, turning to the young men, I do not know how it would have ended. And even though he's saying such terrible things right now, he's the one who brought you here. Valier glares at the teacher. He was as red as a crab, and he shouted like a madman, Teacher, teacher, help, do something. Teacher, do you have to talk about this? Valier asks in displeasure. But the mentor does not respond to his words. She leaves the room, telling Ellen that the girl is working out too hard. In the future, she should be more careful to harm her body. Ellen weakly thanks her for the advice. Why were you even lying there? The hero asks. I lost my balance while working with the simulator and, as I think, it hit me hard on the head, the girl answers. So it could be a concussion, says Valier. How could you make such a mistake? By the way, doesn't that mean I saved you? The hero asks, looking at Ellen lying in front of him with a smile. So am I right or wrong? Don't you want to answer that? Valier asks her classmate. Yes, you're right, she says faintly. Well, maybe you can try to get up, suggests the hero. Ellen looks at him blankly. You were treated with divine power, Valier explains, so you should be fine by now. The hero turns away, and Ellen gets up on the bed. Let's have a couple of sandwiches, Valier suggests. I made a lot of them, especially for you, so you can say a word of thanks. Ellen stares at him. She removes the covers from her body and starts to get out of bed. Great, the girl says. I need a shower, Ellen says. I think that it will make you unable to go to bed on time, Valier warns her. But I don't like it when my body smells like sweat, the girl calmly replies. Okay, he thinks, the hero, you can break the end time in. This is not such a serious violation. In the original story, Ludwig often wandered around the campus after this peculiar curfew. Okay, then I'll go down to the dining room, says the hero. But your teachers might catch you there, Ellen warns him. What should I do then? Valier asks. Can't we eat in my room? The hero looks at the girl in amazement. It's raining outside. In front of us is a piece of bed, a round rug and a nightstand. On the bottom shelf of the ladder are 2 massive dumbbells. So this is Ellen's room, Valier thinks. He's sitting at a table with sandwiches on it. Members of the opposite sex visit each other's dorm rooms. In the temple, this is not considered something strange. When the hero wrote his work, he made the dormitory common to facilitate his author's task. Well, wouldn't it be fun if only guys lived here? What would they do? Did you play soccer? And that's it. Perhaps that's why the hero who is currently looking out of the window doesn't feel particularly embarrassed about being in the girl's room. And maybe she would, too. Valier looks around Ellen's room and realizes that it seems as empty as his room. Except that the smell here is a little different. Well, he doesn't have any sports equipment. There's also a suitcase in the corner. What can be in it? The hero thinks, not taking his eyes off it. I'm done, Ellen says, getting out of the shower. She smells nice of flowers. Okay, let's eat and go to bed then, Valier tells her. In front of us is a window with a light on, half hidden by a long round balcony. Valier and Ellen are sitting on the balcony, despite the rain. A girl eats a sandwich. At some point, they hear something and turn towards the sound. The girl listens. That's what it means to be human, Valier says sadly, taking a bite of his sandwich. Sometimes we feel really bad. For some reason or no reason at all. Yes, it is, Ellen tells him. They continue to eat while sitting at the table, but the atmosphere here is very gloomy. But if you don't talk about it, the pain will eat you up inside, Valier continues. What if? Ellen apparently decides to say something meaningful to herself. What if you can save the world, but you have to sacrifice yourself, she asks. Will you do it? Valier looks down sadly. She thinks that death is death, no matter how glorious it is, the hero understands. Even if someone saves the whole world, they only have one life. People worship the hero Artorias for what he did, but Ellen could only grieve for him. That's why the girl not only missed him, but was also angry with him, Valier thinks. I don't think I can answer that question until I find myself in that situation, he says out loud. You're right, but I'll never die like this, Ellen says very sadly, looking at the rain outside the balcony. Yes, you may be right, the hero replies, looking in the same direction. The girl's eyes are incredibly sad. I want to show you something, she says, and heads into the room. Ellen walks over to the chest that caught the hero's attention earlier. It's a sword, she explains, opening the lid of the chest. It looks very unusual, says Valier. Forged through tears, reads the inscription that we see before us. What does this even mean? The hero thinks about it, trying to understand the secret meaning of these words. But he knows exactly what kind of sword it is. It's called crying, says Ellen, picking up the gun. Valier knows this very well. The hero Artorias carried two sacred swords with him. Alspringer, the sacred sword of Al, the god of war, and Lament, the sacred sword of Mensis, the goddess of the moon. The second of these swords is now in front of us. Its location was unknown to anyone other than the people who knew of Alan's existence. Before going to war with the demons, her older brother left this sword to the girl as a memento of himself. That's why you're so strong, Valier asks, smiling. Ellen looks into the trunk. Reinhardt, the girl addresses the hero, still kneeling in front of the chest. She looks up at him and almost smiles for the first time. Thank you, she says. It's still raining outside. Here is a status window that informs you about the completion of the task Ellen's truth. It says here that Ellen Artorias revealed her identity earlier than expected, and this earns the hero 500 achievement points. In front of us are typical Korean houses, illuminated by the bright daytime sun. And now a backpack with two small pockets. This is a railway station, which has already been approached by a steam locomotive with a chain of rare cars. Valier goes where, looking out the window of the car. When he gets to the right station, he gets out and smiles as he looks around. It is reported that the hero is located on a shopping street in the Liger district. It's quite busy with low-rise buildings and cobblestone sidewalks. Hello, welcome. Here is Elleris, who is glad that a customer has finally come to her shop. She recognizes him and a startled expression appears on the girl's face. Your Highness, this is indeed a Valier. He smiles and raises his hand in greeting. Long time no see, Elleris, he says. But the girl is scared. Why are you here, Your Highness, she asks. It's very dangerous to come here. It's all right, Valier reassures her. I had been wandering around for a long time before coming here, so if anyone was following me, they lost me long ago. I'm not going to stay with you for long, he says. I just need to stay somewhere while school closes for the holidays. He turns away from Elleris and lowers his eyes. But it would be much more comfortable and peaceful if you stayed in the temple, says the girl. But you're here, Elleris. Valier tries to use what he thinks are the most convincing arguments. Yes, thank you, says the touched girl. But it's much more complicated than you might think, she says. Coming here is really very dangerous. Why are you acting like this? Valier asks with a displeased look. Something happened. Elleris looks at him, alarmed. Remember when you first came here, the girl reminds the hero. With the scrolls you tried to sell. We see the book containing the mentioned artifacts. Naturally, the hero answers. No one wanted to buy them, so I ended up wandering in here. I think that's what brought them here, says Elleris. Valier looks at her quizzically. They managed to find out that this is the place where Your Highness was last seen. Elleris stands next to the stunned hero. So you're saying that the people who were looking for me came here? Valier asks thoughtfully. Elleris replies that they don't seem to suspect her of anything, but they continue to monitor the store, as this is the only place where they were able to find at least some information about it before. And one more thing, Your Highness, she continues, putting her hand to her chest. I'm saying this just in case, but I heard that you stole a fireball scroll from a shop. The hero already screams with indignation. I'm told you did it at Mr. Borton's store. There, your pursuers also managed to get some important evidence. Valia remembers the man Elleris is talking about. Shameless old man, he thinks, and grits his teeth in anger. I didn't steal anything, he explains to the girl. The scoundrel gave it to me. The hero is sitting on a chair. One of his hands is on a nearby table. He seemed to think that the scrolls I was selling him were very high-quality fakes, so he asked me to copy the real scrolls. He was going to pay me for this job, Valier explains. A startled expression appears on the girl's face. How could he do such a thing? She asks. People who bought these scrolls might die if they tried to use them in a dangerous situation. You did the right thing, Your Highness, Elleris says angrily. Such people deserve to be punished. Needless to say, Valier continues, he sensed a profit opportunity and gave me the scroll himself. I only wanted to stay with you for a couple of days while the school is closed. How are our mutual friends from the gang? Are they all right? I do not know, Elleris says, rubbing her chin thoughtfully. Lawyer only contacts me when something very serious happens. But I think we should try to get together and discuss the situation. Okay, let's pay a visit to the Ring Gang tomorrow, suggests the hero. Night. In front of us is a brick building where someone is snoring. Valier is lying on the bed, and Elleris is sitting on a chair next to him, looking out the window at the city at night. Your Highness, are you asleep? She asks Valier. Not yet, he says sleepily, opening one eye. What's the matter? Is there something you want to tell me? We can see that Elleris is very upset about something. I don't think humans are better than demons, she says thoughtfully, looking out the window. Nor do I think they are more virtuous. People value prosperity, but when I see them killing each other for wealth, I start to hate them. The moon shines on the girl's face. Valier sits up in bed and calls out to Elleris. What happened? He asks. What's wrong with you? The girl is very sad. You'll find out tomorrow, she says, still looking out the window. The next day. How are you? Valier asks. He and Elleris walk up the sewer drain to someone. We see that he was addressing Sarkagar. Dreadfine spots the hero, raises his hands in the air and greets him happily. He runs to Valier and hugs him tightly with his strong arms. Lawyer looks disapprovingly at what is happening in front of her eyes. I heard from Elleris that you have awakened supernatural powers, shouts Sarkagar. I always believed that Your Highness could do it. How loud you are, the hero answers, panting in his arms. Let me go right now, my ears are going to bleed. Valier eventually manages to escape from Dreadfine's embrace. So, how is life in the temple? Asks Loyar, who has regained her smile. Everything is fine there, the hero replies. I don't even have time to get tired. I was also almost killed there. The girls look at him in surprise. Loyar is silent, and Elleris asks to decipher the last phrase. Valier tells them about his duel with Mayarton. Elleris, Loyar, and Sarkagar listen to the story with their mouths wide open. Then they scream in terror. I think I've made it clear that we shouldn't rely on violence, Elleris says in a pained voice. What are we going to do with your wild temper? Sarkagar, on the contrary, is delighted. What ruthlessness, what pride, and fighting spirit. Perfect job, Your Highness. You are born to be a ruler. Loyar is angry. Your Highness, she says angrily. I thought I told you to be quiet while you were in the temple. Calm down, please. The hero answers all three of them. I haven't used this yet. He shows them his red pendant. It pleases, but still. Elleris is crying, her body pressed against the wall. Well, will you tell me now? The hero asks Loyar. What do you mean? The girl wonders. Yesterday, when we met, Elleris told me that you have some information for me, Valier says. Sarkagar and Loyar look at the hero warily. You don't want to tell me anything, he says to his two accomplices. Elleris stares at them in silence. What happened? Valier wonders. Why are you suddenly so serious? What happened to you? Sarkagar is responsible for everyone. Rumor has it, he says in his most tragic voice, that during the victory celebrations, captive demons will be sold on the black market. We can see who he means. They are young members of their race, chained up. Valier glares at Dreadfind. Why weren't most of the demons executed right after the war? He asks. Loyar and Sarkagar are silent. Why would they sell demons on the black market at all? How are they going to be used? Elleris is also very sad. They can be purchased by collectors, she says. Isn't that why people buy things at auctions? Are you telling me that they collect demons, goblins, and orcs because they want them in their collection? Valier shakes his hands in anger. He's absolutely furious. Wait, don't tell me that. He looks at Elleris, who seems to want to say something. The most popular demons they have are succubi, says the girl. We can see who she means. They are most similar to people, and therefore have the greatest value for them. Wait, Valier shouts in exasperation, shaking his fists. I don't know much about it, but succubi are very dangerous. This is a race that feeds on the life force of humans. Do they want to die? Succubi take their life force, no doubt, says Sarkagar, but they can be brainwashed into not doing so. Sometimes people use surgery to achieve this result. Valier listens to Dreadfind in shock. The same goes for incubators, he says. The hero thought that most of the demons were destroyed, but perhaps humans left humanoid demons alive to profit from them. Do they keep them as harmless pets? That's what slave markets are for, isn't it? I understand, says Valier to his companions, that you want to save the prisoners, don't you? Even though watching these evil humans act is sometimes unbearable, says Sarkagar, if we can't save them, we'll be in grave danger ourselves. Valier sees that both he and Loyar, who is standing next to him, are really very afraid of this. He's got it all right, Your Highness, Loyar chimes in. Right now, only 3 demons can support you. If you lose even one, all your plans may be ruined forever. We see Valier falling from a wooden structure and falling into the abyss. I also agree with them, says Elleris. If it wasn't for Valier, the 3 of them would have rushed to save their kin. And like moths, flying into the flames, they would die because of their short-sightedness and stupidity. But, fortunately for them, they had a hero who could be in a completely different place. As a result, their highest priority was once again protecting Valier's life. If everything had gone as described in the original story, the demons would only have managed to kidnap Delphine etc. while Ludwig was busy playing with his friends. Afterwards, he would be able to extricate himself from the situation and save the girl. And now I must find a way to somehow save the members of my people, Valier thinks sadly. He's sitting in a chair, looking down at the floor with a blank expression. No matter how he looks at what is happening, it is his character who becomes central to everything that happens here. Valier covers his face with his hand. To be honest, he thinks, I'm a 30-year-old man, not a teenage demon. Do I see the point in rescuing captured kindred? The hero looks into the distance, at the starry sky. I don't even see the point of reviving the demon realm, he thinks. Valier looks very grim. I'm not one of those people who heroically rush to save others without caring about their own lives, he thinks. That, at least, was the case in his real life on Earth. The hero's eyes are full of sadness, but he sees his comrades who need him and consider him their leader. They look at him hopefully. We see Valier sitting on a chair with his head bowed against the black sky. Support me, he says to the demons lined up in front of him. I am sorry to have disturbed you, Elleris says sadly. Next to her, Sarkagar looks completely drained. As I thought, we must endure for your sake, and let the inevitable happen. In my experience, Valier interrupts, many illnesses are caused by fatigue. He looks down at the ground, his elbows on his feet, and lack of sleep is the main cause of chronic fatigue. Excuse me, Your Highness, this is Elleris. I don't quite understand what you're saying right now. I just want to sleep in peace, Valier says. The next second, he's clutching his face in his hands. Let's try it, he says quietly. His companions stare at him in amazement. Loyar and Sarkagar look hopeful. What did you just say? Elleris asks. Didn't you hear me? Let's find a way to save these prisoners, the hero says decisively. In the corridor of a dark castle, Valier Jr. sits on a chair with his head bowed and hands folded in his lap. Next to him stand Elleris, Loyar and Sarkagar, who have collectively decided to do what they have planned. They glance nervously at the protagonist. Putting her hand to her chest, Elleris frowned, saying that if they wanted to save them, there were 3 things they should know beforehand. Elleris raised her hand and started listing on her fingers while Loyar crossed his arms, irritably listening to her. First, they needed to know the location of the black market. Second, the number of prisoners, and third, their safety. Sarkagar, standing next to Loyar, raised his hand and exclaimed that the information about the black market was only available to the nobles, so it would be difficult to hear anything about it on the streets. He said that he would deal with it himself since this information originally came from him. In the middle of the dark, dusty corridors, the only sound was the sound of their dialogue. Valier said that he was pretty sure they would need a ticket or something. After all, this is supposed to be a secret black market. Sarkagar responded to this by saying that they don't know who might be selling them yet, so he decides to ask around among the nobles to find out more. Valier, sitting on a chair, asks what Sarkagar's opinion is on the worms who organized this. Sarkagar replies that it's no big deal. Considering they were able to siphon off prisoners under the control of the Allied forces, they must have the cooperation of whatever is in charge of the prisoners of war. As their dialogue progressed, somewhere a prisoner girl with long, white hair and small horns was sitting barefoot on her knees in disheveled clothes, being held under someone else's authority. Valier frowned, wondering if they couldn't have spoken to the person in charge of the prisoners beforehand. Sarkagar, Loyar, and Elleris stand in front of Valier sitting in a chair and talk to each other. Sarkagar says that not every soldier with the rank of commander knows that when it comes to someone of either rank, way to make decisions. Before he can get his thoughts out, Elleris interrupts him and says that she is sure they would have known everything, whereupon Valier assumes that they had already discussed it with their unit commander beforehand. Valier gritted his teeth tensely and put a hand to his face, realizing that the matter was only getting more complicated. Valier thought about how the rumors were spreading among the nobility, which meant that they couldn't help but reach the ears of the imperial family. Tense with thought, Valier said that there was a possibility that the imperial family was also involved, to which Elleris, standing in front of him, along with Loyard, replied that his thought might be correct. Introducing Bertus and Charlotte, Valier wondered if they knew about everything. The protagonist's thoughts stretched like threads, one after another. This was not a problem that could be handled by simple gangs like the Thieves' Guild. It must be something that was planned by the powerful organization of the imperial family. That means their security has to be serious. If we do that, we'll have to bypass this brutal security system. We'd also have to plan how many prisoners we could get past them. After we take them away, we would also have to hide them somewhere. After that, his thoughts finally became confused. Valier cocked his head upwards with a frightened expression and said that this was insane. His face became even more alarmed and he cried out again that this is bloody madness. Still sitting on the chair, he asked Elleris if she could do something with magic, to which Elleris replied that there were probably wizards of the same level as herself among them. Elleris also said that they would definitely destroy the magic barrier. Putting a hand to his head, Valier realized that the more he thought about it, the more his head started to hurt. Valier wondered if this operation had been impossible all along. Elleris worriedly waved her hand and asked the protagonist if it was really worth it to make their move when the black market was open. A frowning Valier, still sitting in his chair, asked what she meant. Exhaling, Valier listens puzzled to Elleris, who says that trying to save them when the black market open is the worst time they could do it. In the morning, under the sunlight near the castle walls, the guards look rather sleepy and relaxed. Elleris says that the guards should be more lax before the auction starts than during it, and also once ownership is transferred to a private person. That person will have to manage the prisoners on their own, so Elleris says it would be fairly easy to rescue them at that point. Sarkheger and Loyar look at a confused Elleris in silence. A puzzled Valier, Sarkheger and Loyar open their mouths and look at Elleris. Valier asks if she is serious. A half-burnt match lies on the floor as Sarkheger and Loyar continue to talk amongst themselves about the auction. Sarkheger says that those in the auction will definitely pay a high price, to which Loyar replies that even if they could make them suffer, they wouldn't kill them anyway. Valier joins the dialogue and says that it all seems unbelievable. All four of them sit down at the table and continue discussing the rescue of the prisoners. Spreading his hands, Sarkheger said that it might take some time, but they could rescue one by one after they would get their transaction log. Loyar replied that the risk was the inaccuracy of the scenario. Sitting back in his chair, Valier crossed his arms and silently watched the conversation with a disgruntled expression on his face. Loyar says that rumors of demon captives either going missing or being stolen are likely to spread, to which Sarkheger replies that after they rescue some, the owners will be vigilant and perhaps hide those who remain. Elleris joined the discussion while the protagonist crossed his arms, staring blankly somewhere, ignoring their conversation. Valier closed his eyes and sank into his thoughts. He thought that if they succeeded in Elleris' method, it would suggest that some organization was systematically stealing demons. Valier pictured Elleris being led away from his confinement into the wild, straight into the light. A bloody and tattered flag with a black symbol lay on the ground. The idea of rescue shattered like splinters, for such actions would definitely turn the imperial capital upside down. The very fact that the freed demons were hiding somewhere in the imperial capital, that would already be a huge security threat from the empire's point of view. It would also mean that a huge number of guards would be patrolling the capital's surroundings. Valier imagined people in white suits near the stairs and on the temple balcony anxiously discussing the rumors. Sitting at the table across from the others, hands folded in his lap and head bowed, Valier, exhausted by his own thoughts, simply remained silent. He had never written anything about such an incident. Sarkheger, Loyar, and Elleris looked serious. Loyar and Sarkheger's reaction to Elleris' method was positive, meaning that they would definitely stick to her plan. The future of this operation is like bloody shards of glass broken piece by piece, reflecting the suffering, anger, and impending fear. Valier believes that this operation was a failure from the beginning. A drop of sweat drips down the anxious face of the protagonist. He wants to think of a better method, but realizes that they have no way to transport all the prisoners at once. A tense Valier tries to think of a solution to the problem while Sarkheger and Elleris lean their hands on the table and continue to talk. Elleris looks very worried as it suddenly dawns on the protagonist that it is possible to move them all at once. A dumbfounded Valier jumped up from his chair and exclaimed that his idea was right. Sarkheger, Loyar, and Elleris, who were sitting on stools at the table, looked at the protagonist. Leaning his hands on the table, he asked if Elleris could use the mass teleportation spell. Elleris asked which spell he was referring to. A worried Elleris replied that she could use the spell, but it would take her a long time to cast it. Valier asked how long it would take her to realize it. Elris replied that it would take about half an hour, so it would not be possible to activate it immediately. After hearing this, Valier gritted his teeth in annoyance. An aerial view of the capital in the afternoon. Valier asked if places with barriers or defenses that could suppress magic were particularly common. Elris told him that he was right, but before he could finish his thought, she was interrupted by Valier. He asked what if it wasn't in the auction house. A puzzled Elris asked what he meant. Sitting the four of them at the table, Valier raised his hand and asked how many people could be teleported at a time. Elris answered him that 20 people was her limit, but if it was night she could probably handle 50. Valier touched his hand to his mouth again and thought, succubi and incubi are humanoid demons. There shouldn't be a huge number of them. All the imprisoned demons he had seen during his escape were not humanoid. Loyar asked if Valier was thinking of another way. Valier flicked his finger on a coin and suggested drugging them, then stealing the prisoners from them. But the reality was that their powers would not be enough. Unexpectedly, Loyar swung her fist right in front of Saker's face. Valier leaned his hand on the table and said that the very existence of the black market is already a huge problem. Valier questioned whether the market was legitimate. Elris said she didn't know. Saker immediately said that the mere fact that people are buying up the demons that destroyed them is not good. Loyar said that this black market is hidden from other people's eyes. Valier put his hands together and said that trading demons is not legal. He asked about what would happen if a rumor was spread about what would happen there. Loyar and Elris looked at him questioningly. They didn't understand what he meant. Valier said that the demon trade would hit the reputation of the imperial family hard. According to him, it would be enough to make the citizens who had lost loved ones in the war start to stir things up. Loyar asked if he really wanted these people to attack the loyal market. Valier grudgingly said that it would be easier if they knew its location, and yet, even if they don't attack, they will do everything they can to disrupt the auction. Saker said that because of this, the Imperial Army would be forced to disguise themselves as ordinary civilians. It was possible, he said, that they might even start suppressing riots with extreme brutality. Valier crossed his arms and said that the Emperor's power is strong. However, public opinion is stronger, he said. Valier suddenly raised his hand and pointed his finger upwards and said cheerfully that it would definitely grate on the nerves of the top government. Elris was shocked. She asked him what was more important than that top government. Valier replied that religion. He told her that the demon trade defiles the sacred knights. Thus, the emperor would receive a lot of discontent from the temple. Besides, the holy knights do not obey the emperor, so if they interfere, there will be a civil war. He said that such an outcome of events could not be ruled out. According to Valier, in the end, they will definitely close the black market. They will have no other choice. Against the holy knights, no army could stand against them, so the outcome was obvious. Valier stubbornly stared at one point and thought that the holy knights who had gone through the war would view the emperor's actions as a betrayal. Valier realized that since the temple was essentially a state within a state, the empire was unlikely to want to conflict with such a power. Saker and Elris looked worried. They both put a hand to their chests. Saker turned to Valier and said that he was sure it would definitely stop the black market. Elris, also putting her hand to her chest and looking away, said that then all the demons would be executed. All the heroes looked down at the floor. Valier absolutely calmly said that was correct. Then he suddenly stood up and slammed his hand on the table. He said that the holy knights wouldn't immediately deal with the prisoners. Valier stared at them intently. He reasoned that all their attention would be directed towards the emperor. According to him, the demons would serve as proof that the emperor was a traitor. He said that even if the location of the black market changed afterward, it would only benefit them because they would not be able to think of all the security nuances in a hurry. Loyar and Elris stared at him shocked. Then Valier strongly exclaimed that then they would simply rescue all the captives by mass teleportation. However, there was something that worried the protagonist. He thought about the fact that if there were more captives than they could carry, the extra would simply die. At the same time, he thought about the fact that of all the ways, this one was the best. Loyard was thinking about something. Suddenly an idea struck her. She asked Valier about what would happen if they used the gate instead of mass teleportation. Valier was shocked. He asked her again about it. Loyar replied that then they could easily transport all the captives to where they needed to go. Loyar said that if they used a gate that could move everyone at once, she thought then they could save everyone. Valier was shocked. He said that was only possible if they could install the gate. Saker intervened in the conversation. He was drawing something on a sheet. Saker said that there are many gates in the capital. According to him, there is certainly a gate in front of the temple. Elris folded her arms at this point. She looked unsure. She said the gate must be on the escort route of the captives. Saker said that when they arrived at the location, they would have to stage a riot. According to him, it would only be necessary to force them closer to the gate. He added that they would be able to stop the Knights of the Empire by moving them elsewhere with the help of Elris. Valier was shocked. He thought about how it was essentially possible, given that the gate was a normal passageway, but if the gate broke, it would become useless. Valier smiled happily. He thought about how the plan was slowly getting better. Loyar put her hand to her chest and said firmly that she would be in charge of the riot. Elleris said she would help Loyar distract the knights. Following them, Saker said he would disguise himself as the knights. Valier looked annoyed. He sat with his arms folded. At the same time, the hero was thinking that there were too many nuances, but at least this plan had a hope of success. Valier then looked at his hand with apprehension. He planned that if something suddenly changed, he would use his power. Some time passed and night fell. We see Elleris lying on the bed. She was lying on the same bed as Valier. She thanked him. Valier said irritably that it was his duty after all. He asked her about why she was thanking him. Elleris said with a smile that it was a dangerous business after all, and that's why she really thanked him. Elleris pressed herself against Valier. The hero asked her about how she was doing herself. Elleris looked upset. She said that it didn't matter how she was feeling. The most important thing was that no innocents get hurt, be it knights or demons. She sadly told Valier that she had taken many lives with her own hands. She said that now she didn't even remember how many lives she had taken. It had become so familiar to her. According to her, she was tired of taking lives. She was tired of it. Elleris closed her eyes. She thanked Valier once more. The hero looked at her over his shoulder and told her everything would be fine. Then he turned to her altogether and hugged her. The time had come. The celebration of the victory over the demons had begun. The streets were filled with joyous people. And finally, the day of the rescue of the captives had arrived. We see two guards standing outside the guild hall. The heroes talked about this being the building of the Merchants Guild. Loyar, Valier, and Elleris were sitting on the roof. Valier wondered if the prisoners were being hidden there. He was looking thoughtfully somewhere. At the same time, he pondered that their goal was not to put the aristocrats responsible in jail, but to rescue the captives. We see that meanwhile a column of knights was moving down the street. Alongside this, Valier thought about the fact that even if everything went smoothly, the only people they could save were their fellow black marketers. Valier realized that they would have to act quickly as they needed to get everything done before the auction started. According to the information that Sarkiger and Loyar know, the number of captives is around 100 demons. The black market is located in the Merchants Guild. Valier began to reminisce about how they had negotiated. He thought about the fact that they were essentially going to publicize the origin of the black market. In the thought process, they had found two ways, but neither of them gives an accurate prediction. So far, they are having a hard time identifying the source of the rumors, but they only have one chance of success. And the second method is that they sent a letter to the Holy Knights. Fortunately for the heroes, they didn't ignore the letter. The heroes were still standing on the roof, and now they were already heading towards the black market. Elleris cheerfully turned to Valier. She said that invisibility magic was a very handy thing, because they were at the most guarded place in the capital and no one could see them. Valier looked a little nervous. He waved his hand and confirmed her words. However, he said that when exposed to anti-spells, the effect wears off quickly. He said that they could be detected by those with superior search skills. Suddenly, something shocked Loyar. She looked at the carts that kept moving. Loyar said that the smell of the Holy Knights was getting stronger and stronger. Loyar suddenly jumped higher. She said that she thought they would not move today. She added that their letter seemed to have worked perfectly. They were looking at 5 carts pulling in somewhere. Loyard said they must have directed all their attention to the center of town. Valier, squatting, wondered if they had decided to keep it quiet. At the same time, he wondered if it was better to have a holy march here to preserve honor and dignity, or if they had decided to defend the honor of the empire. Loyard watched the knights carefully. Suddenly, she waved her hand. One of the knights said that they had received information that demons were being sold here illegally. The guard was shocked. The knight who stood in front of the guard said that if their accusations turned out to be false, the Holy Knights would officially apologize to their trading house. The knight asked the guard if they would cooperate with them. The heroes watched the whole thing from above. Loyar said the guards and knights continued to argue. The guards were tense. Loyar said that the guards seemed to have decided to back down. The knight said that if the guards had nothing to say, that they would too. Suddenly he drew his sword. They pointed their swords at the guard. He was startled and began to scream. Loyar excitedly exclaimed that the guards had cleared the entrance. She said that the Holy Knights were moving towards the inside of the guild. Valier was determined. He decided it was his turn. He summoned the system. The hero thought about the fact that if the Holy Knights executed the captives right away, it would become a problem. He also decided that to prevent that from happening, he needed to use it. But suddenly something shocked him so much that he shrieked. It turned out that Valier wanted to use the overview function. However, the panel said that the overview function system was not available to him. He was very angry and wondered what was going on. Valier looked at that panel in horror. He wondered if he couldn't use this function. He wondered if the execution of prisoners by the Holy Knights could not be prevented even by the system. He was horrified. He wondered if the destruction of all demons would happen no matter what. Valier began to envision horrible pictures. He was worried that at this rate all the captives might die. Elleris tried to shout to Valier. The hero was terrified. Elleris asked him what was wrong with him. What bothered her was that Valier had gone pale. He suddenly felt embarrassed. He said he was just thinking about what would happen if the knights killed all the captives. Loyard continued to keep a close eye on everything. She informed Valier that the Holy Knights were approaching. Valier thought about the fact that this plan was created with enough attention to even small details. That was why it seemed to Valier that this plan should not fail. However, Valier was in a state of dread. He thought with horror that it was unlikely that they would kill the captives that would be the proof of such a gruesome crime. Valier wished it were so. Suddenly the captives began to leave the building. Elleris said that the Holy Knights were carrying out the captives, the same number as they had originally. The hero was shocked. Elleris said that from the outside everything was fine, no wounded. Valier almost passed out from worrying too much. Elleris exclaimed happily that as expected, it was a success. Valier was relieved. He reflected on that and looked up at the sky. He wondered if it was supposed to be like this. He thought about everything going according to the plot. That's why the review didn't work. Valier raised his hands and mentally thanked God. Elleris looked at him questioningly. Loyar meanwhile said that they now knew the location of the captives, so they would proceed as planned. The heroes ran somewhere. Loyar exclaimed that they had to get there before the Holy Knights. Loyard started to say something about the gate. However, they were all suddenly shocked by something. The heroes heard the dialogue of the knights. The Holy Knights were talking about how they had enough evidence. Another knight asked about what would happen if people were scared when they saw them. The girl said that then they would just pretend it was all for the sake of experimentation. The heroes continued to run across the roof. The Holy Knights talked about how the merchants were doing black deeds, selling them secretly, and no one had any idea what was really going on here. Valier was very angry with them and called them worms. Elleris looked upset. She realized that the Sacred Knights had been involved in all of this from the beginning. Valier thought to himself that it was now clear why they had arrived here at night. However, Valier couldn't figure out why they were doing all this. He wondered if they had betrayed their faith. Then Valier remembered the words of a certain nun. This girl had told him that God's grace helped her in everything. She had also said that she was sure Valier would like the feeling of God's grace. Valier closed his eyes. He thought about the fact that the result seems good, but the process itself is horrible. Loyar told Valier that the gate was close. She said that since they were far away from the Holy Knights, they needed to get things ready as soon as possible. She told them to contact Sarkhagar. The Holy Knights meanwhile continued to approach the gate. However, suddenly someone loudly ordered the Holy Knights to stand. Valier was shocked. One of the Holy Knights raised his hand and said irritably that someone was here. He ordered the other knights to find the stranger. The heroes continued to run. Valier wondered if they had been spotted. Elleris told Valier to run. That Holy Knight turned to the strangers. He shouted for the stranger to show himself now. Valier called for the system panel again. He thought about the fact that since they had been discovered, there was no way to delay. He decided to use the overview. Valier shouted to Elleris to start a mass teleport. But suddenly something happened that Valier had not expected at all. He was stunned. The hero saw Elleris using fire magic. She looked completely calm. The girl started attacking the Holy Knights with that fire. The knights panicked and started screaming. They wondered what was going on. The Holy Knight who discovered them asked the stranger about how he got such power. Valier was confused. The knights, meanwhile, were shouting. Valier was confused that Elleris wasn't even thinking of minimizing the damage. He wondered if they shouldn't have bought time and teleported the demons away. Valier watched the flames envelope everything around him. He wondered if she wasn't going to destroy the captives along with the knights as well. It didn't make him happy that she was burning everything she could. Elleris continued to use fire magic. Valier thought about the fact that it was definitely not a good idea to anger Elleris anyway, because he didn't want to die. The knight raised his hand and ordered everyone not to panic and prepare for battle. Suddenly, someone's roar sounded. The knights covered their ears because they were in pain and wondered what it was. They saw a wolf. The knights exclaimed that the enemy was not alone. They were shocked when they realized it was a werewolf. The knight shouted that it was demons. The captives heard about it being demons and found hope. Elleris stood at the gate. She began to shout to the captives not to stand still and to go to the gate. The captives obediently listened to Elleris and headed for the gate. The knights shouted as the captives ran away. Another knight raised his sword and ordered that the knights stop the captives. All the knights raised their swords. They began to call out to Ares, the god of war. They asked him to grant them victory. Valier watched this from the sidelines. He was a little excited that they had a lot of experience in battles, after all. Valier thought about the fact that adapting to stressful situations was commendable. The hero was concerned. He realized that no matter how strong Elleris and Loyar were, the two of them would definitely not be able to cope. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. The knights felt it as well. A knight questioned what the sound was. The knights held themselves together. Their leader wondered what was going on. Suddenly something black came out of the ground. The shocked knight wondered if it was a dragon. The dragon was furious and its eyes were glowing red. Suddenly we are transported to the border of the Kernstadt Empire, namely the forest of Duratanis. Some time passed and the heroes were already in the forest. They were happy because everyone had been saved. Elleris calmed the captives and reassured them that everything would be fine now. At the same time, Valier told Sarkegger that he didn't know he could turn into a dragon. The hero said that thanks to Sarkegger they were able to get out of there. Elleris turned around and told Valier that everyone was alive and almost well. Valier closed his eyes and said that was great and that he was satisfied. Suddenly he received a notification from the system that said the mission to rescue the captured demons had been completed. Valier crossed his arms and said that everyone had done well, so they could rest, and he would introduce himself to his brothers. The hero introduced himself to the captives. Valier said that since the former king was dead, he would now bear his name. The captives were surprised. They began to worship him. The captive demons shouted that they were very happy that the king was alive. One of them captives stood with her hand to her chest. She asked the hero if he was Valiru. Sarkegger was shocked, for he saw her as a princess. Valier, on the other hand, understood nothing. She looked worried and held her hand to her chest. After a while, the princess and Valier sat alone on a rock. The princess asked Valier if he didn't remember anything. Valier confirmed that he did. He said he didn't even remember who she was. The hero apologized if he had offended her. She looked at him pitifully. The princess turned away in embarrassment and thanked him for saving them. She said she didn't know he had survived. Princess felt embarrassed. She said she was glad that he had survived. The princess shamefully looked away. Valier watched her, wondered why she was looking at him like that. He assumed it was because they had some special relationship. Valier folded his arms and said that he had lost all his memories of the past, but really, he didn't feel like remembering. Valier apologized to her that he might have done something wrong in the past. The princess suddenly blushed and began to worry even more. She exclaimed that there was no need to apologize to her. She started to talk about something but suddenly stopped. Valier looked at her and asked about what she said. The princess smiled and looked away and started to tell Valier what the matter was. Valier said with annoyance that they would skip that topic. He asked if she was mocking him. The princess stiffened. Then she blushed and started laughing. She didn't even know how to tell him that. The princess was the one who was leading this. According to Eri, it started like this. They were childhood friends. Eri was the daughter of one of the 4th heavenly demon kings. In fact, she was the 3rd demon princess. And Valier, for bullying his subordinates, was getting a kick out of her. Probably all because her status was higher than Valier's. When meeting in person, Valier would always run away from Eri in fear, but in front of the demon king, he behaved as usual. In simple words, they hated each other. After the 4 heavenly demon kings died, Eri was captured, and the demon king's son miraculously survived. Valier thought about the fact that the situation was unusual to say the least. He thought that it must be hard to believe that he had saved her out of the goodness of his heart. Valier suggested that Eri forget the past, for from her story, he was a terrible demon. Eri smiled slyly and agreed with him. Valier was confused. He looked at her and thought about how she was kind of weird. He asked her about how she was doing with magic. That suddenly cheered Eri up. Valier said that he had gotten word that people had done something to her. Suddenly Eri's gaze darkened. She reached for her hair with her hands. She lifted her hair and revealed that her horns had been cut off. Valier was shocked. Eri clutched her head. Tears appeared in her eyes. However, she was smiling. She said that the humans had cut off her horns and tail. According to her, these are more than just body parts to demons. Because of this, she would never be able to use magic again. Eri's tears began to fall on her dress. She said that she was now a nobody, for as a demon she had become mere trash. The girl apologized to Valier. She said she would never forget the fact that he saved them. Eri continued to sob. She said she was grateful to him. At the same time, she wondered what she could, since she no longer had the strength. While Eri was crying, Valier sat quietly by her side. Eri continued to apologize to the hero for making her so pathetic. However, suddenly something shocked her. Valier said that he didn't save all of them to use them. Valier had said that he had gotten the chance to free his fellow humans and he had just grabbed it. So she didn't owe Valier anything. The hero looked at her and said it was up to her to return to the demonic lands or not. Eri stopped crying and listened to him carefully. Valier said that after everything that had happened, she didn't have to obey him. Valier put his hand on Eri's head. He said that she can live her life freely. Valier, holding his hand on her head, said that as the daughter of one of the strongest demons, she had done more than enough. After a while, some of the other captives approached them as well. Valier asked if besides the 10 of them, everyone else had decided to return to the Dark Lands. Eri sadly said that they had. Valier told the 3 captives that he found it difficult to understand the reason why they stayed, but asked them to at least try to explain. Eri said firmly that they would stay in the Empire. She put her hand to her chest and said that she was useless in magic and wouldn't be able to help in battle, but she was still a member of the demon royal family and wouldn't be able to just drop everything on Valier alone. The other captives meanwhile looked amongst each other. Elleris and Valier were surprised. Eri said that although they had lost their powers, they still had their bodies. Valier asked her what she meant by that. Eri said that money is necessary to survive in the human world, and she has heard that big money itself is a threat to the human world. She said that with the money she earned, Valier would be able to go into entrepreneurship. Valier and Elleris were shocked. They had many questions. Eri said that if Valier becomes a successful entrepreneur in the Empire, it will definitely help rebuild the Demon Kingdom. Eri added and said that in addition, they would be able to split the Empire and cause chaos being in the center of the capital. Elleris and Valier were still looking at her questioningly. Valier put his hand on her neck and said that she was right, of course, but it wasn't that simple now and things were different here. Valier asked her about where she wanted to find the funds from. Eri looked down regretfully and said that there was no need to worry about that as she had one solution. She suddenly put her hand to her chest and then told him to sell them. Valier looked at her shocked. She said that if he sold them, he would get a lot of money. Eri started to talk about how he could start a business with that money, but Valier was tearing up with anger. He was furious and called her names and asked her about what she was carrying. Valier approached her and put his hand on her shoulder. He asked if they risked their lives to rescue them from captivity, but now they want them to sell them. Valier was angry and continued to yell at Eri. He asked her about why so many sacrifices were needed then. Eri cried again and lowered her gaze. She said that still, it was the best thing she could do for the demons right now. Eri began to cry even harder. She exclaimed that she was the most useless of all right now. She added that she simply had no other choice. Eri continued to sob. She said something about her trampled pride. However, this only made Valier angry. He started yelling at her and telling her to just shut her mouth. Suddenly, the two captives behind them bowed to Valier and began to beg him. They were asking him to think things through properly. There were tears in Eri's eyes, but she looked annoyed. She said that if Valier didn't want her to be someone's subordinate, she would sell her body to help her country in some way. Valier was shocked. He asked her about why there was no way she would calm down. He placed his hand on her shoulder again. Valier asked if she thought that he would be happy to get such money from her. Valier exclaimed that he would rather die than take it. He told her that besides, there were many ways to make money without sacrificing anyone. According to him, you just have to use your brains a little bit. Eri was confused. She asked him about the meaning of the expression to move your brains. Valier was shocked, for he remembered that they were far from being the smartest. Valier spread his hands apart and said that one could do something else besides that. According to him, whether it was in a bar or an inn, they could do whatever they could do. Elleris then told Valier that there was an island nation called the Edina Archipelago. She told him that it was a trading city in the waters south of Kernstadt. According to her, it's full of all sorts of rabble because of which you can go about your business discreetly. Elleris and Valier looked at Eri cheerfully. The hero asked her what she thought. Valier asked if she could get along in a place like that, right? Eri put her hand to her chest and looked away and said that it was fine and that she wouldn't do anything they weren't happy with. She suddenly straightened her posture and stuck her chest forward and exclaimed that in any case, she would be someone who would definitely be of use to them in the future. Eri and Valier glanced at each other. He put his hands on her shoulders and told her to be sure to contact him if anything happened. Elleris turned to the hero and said that he had better return to the temple now. According to her, the atmosphere in the capital has become much more serious than before. We are then transported and see Eppenhauser making some sort of announcement to everyone in the temple. The students were standing in front of him. He said that for the moment, none of the students would be able to go outside the academy. During the victory celebration of the Great War, there was an attack by rebel demons. No one was killed, but the clash with the Holy Knights did not go unnoticed. The night sky was then colored by a firestorm. All the townspeople were horrified by the spectacle. Because of what happened, the victory celebration, which in the original story lasted a whole month, ended in a few days, and it was all thanks to Valier. They were attacked by demons on the day of the destruction of all demons. The captives were in the capital at the time, and the Empire, which talked about the complete destruction of the enemy, secretly sold them on the black market, because of which the honor of the country was defamed and brutally trampled. And Valier was the cause of it all. The hero received a notification from the system that his actions changed the main storyline and he received 500 achievement points. He crossed his arms thinking about the event he had managed to predict. The students talked about how they couldn't believe that the demons were still in the capital. Another student wondered about the fact that the war with the demons was not over yet. A student spoke of being a little scared. At the same time, Reinhard realized that the kidnapping of Delphine Isidra could not take place. Meanwhile, the weather outside was sunny, beautiful weather. We are transported and see Ellen. She asked the hero what he was talking about. Reinhard was lying in front of her. She, holding her sword, asked him about the demons. Ellen asked why they fought against the Holy Knights. Reinhard replied that he didn't know, and then asked a counter question about how a mere bum would know about such a thing. Reinhard continued to lie on the ground. Ellen asked that if he wanted revenge and there was a way to get to the capital, wouldn't he head somewhere else? Reinhard thought to himself that it was because demons are evil and evil always wants attention. The hero looked at her with skepticism. He wondered if she thought humans and demons were equally intelligent. At the same time, Ellen put her hand to her chin and said thoughtfully that she thought there was something they didn't know. Reinhard thought about the fact that she must be an ordinary girl with no prejudices. He got up from the floor and said that if that was the case, the truth would soon be revealed. However, suddenly something shocked him. He remembered that he was disqualified from being human because he led demons and terrorized the imperial capital. What shocked him was that he realized that he was proud to see humanity's strongest hero growing before his eyes. Accordingly, he couldn't be a demon either. The only question that plagued him was the question of who he was. Reinhard looked at his hands and talked about how complicated everything was. Ellen was puzzled. Ellen then calmly told Reinhard to pick up the sword, for the training was not over yet. Reinhard asked grudgingly if the training wasn't over. The hero asked if she wanted to train until the last day of the feast. Reinhard grudgingly exclaimed that absolutely anyone should go out and walk on a day like that. The hero added that one should exercise in moderation, otherwise one wouldn't pick up any bones. Ellen only asked about why that was so. Reinhard irritably pointed his finger at her and said that it didn't matter and that they would go for a walk right away. Ellen turned away from him and told him to go alone. Suddenly, however, he grabbed her arm. He dragged her behind him and told her to just shut up and follow him. Ellen suddenly blushed and was embarrassed. Reinhard was determined and said he would give her a treat. The girl with blue hair and blue eyes looked up with her mouth open. Ellen said she didn't like soy sauce. A guy with white hair stood next to her and looked at the girl in surprise. He opened his mouth and there was sweat on his face. Reinhard said that he thought the girl liked the sauce. She replied that she ate it because there was nothing else. A light fell on the guy, who had a red pendant hanging around his neck, and the girl. He asked her what other sauces she liked. The girl clenched her hand into a fist and looked at the unusual fruit with incomprehension. She brought the spoon with a piece of fruit to her face and clutched it, while Reinhard behind her laughed. The girl's face turned blue and was saddened. She thought about how she just wanted meat. The sun was illuminating the building where the shutters of the windows were open. Someone was asking them to come again. The guy opened his wallet and the inside was empty. He trembled as he held his wallet in his hands and a girl stood behind him. Reinhard turned his head in her direction and clenched his teeth. He didn't understand how it was even possible to eat so many steaks at once. He was already thinking about the girl having a black hole instead of a stomach. The guy with the white hair and the pendant looked irritably at the girl and said that dessert would definitely be on her. That was what they had originally agreed on. She had agreed. The two companions were walking along the dark brown paving stones. They were discussing that there was a cafe not far from them. They could go there. A girl with white hair was pulling the bowstring of her bow. She let go of it and the arrow hit the black streak of the target. She didn't understand why it was going so badly. Reinhard and walked through the town, and there was dejection on their faces. The boy said that if they turned a corner, they would see a cafe. The two companions went around the corner and in front of them was a little girl who was shooting a bow and turned her gaze to them. The little girl then looked at the target with the bowstring taut. The little girl blushed and pointed the bow at the guy's face. She yelled loudly. The boy told the girl not to point the bow at his face. The girl put the bow down. The boy with his hands in his pockets stood next to the girl who had blue hair. The boy asked the girl what she was doing here and where are her parents. They are not parents, but friends, the little girl replied. There was a target hanging behind her back and the girl frowned at the boy and girl. She asked them, why are you two hanging around here? The girl was angry and Reinhard told her with a sneer. Is she trying to hit a target to get a plush toy? Considering how close to the target she's standing, it would take her 2 years to even hit anything. The girl menacingly told him to shut up and get out of here. The guy put the money on the table. He said he could help her as an apology for what he had said earlier. Reinhard was pointing his thumb and smiling, and a girl was standing at his side. She asked him if he knew how to shoot a bow. The boy replied that she had better tell him what prize she wanted. The girl pointed her finger and the smile immediately disappeared from the guy's face. She was pointing at a purple plush toy that looked like a bear. Reinhard thought about the fact that it was very big. You have to get 100 out of 100 points to win it. The boy took his bow and drew the bowstring. He lowered his gaze down and decided to see how the power of self-interest worked. We see a yellow inscription, I am an archer, from which a glow emanated. Reinhard held the inscription paper in one hand and a small toy in the other. He stood next to the girl. They were both sad. The girl asked him and how he was better than her. The guy walked over to the girl with blue hair and held her shoulders. He said it was for fun, but now it was going to be real. Reinhard put the paper on the table again and said, "Here, one more time." The guy stood beside Ellen and held a bow in his hands. He said he promised to help, but he didn't say he would do it himself. The girl took the bow in her hands. Reinhard shouted, "Show me a master class." The girl placed the arrow on the bow. She began to draw the bowstring and light reflected off the arrowhead. A moment later, the girl was walking, holding a large toy in her hands. The guy stood beside her, crossed his arms and asked the girl a question. Not only is she a sword master, but she's also a god archer. The girl replied that she had shot a couple times. The hero thought about it, and above his head were various weapons. He thought that with her talent, she could use any weapon. Isn't it cheating to get a perfect score by shooting a couple times before? The little girl looked confusedly at the girl who was holding the toy. The girl with blue hair threw that plush toy into the little girl's hands. The little girl stood at the side and, holding the toy from the guy's friend, asked, "Are you giving it to me?" The girl with blue hair replied that she didn't want the toy. Under the little girl's eyes were yellow streaks that looked like little lightning bolts. She looked at Ellen with a smile and thanked her. She said that Ellen was the best. Reinhard walked up to the girl and pointed his finger at himself. He said that if Ellen was the shooter, he was the one who paid. Shouldn't the girl thank him? She said the guy was a worse shot than she was. The guy took the toy from the girl and moved on. The girl shouted loudly, "My present." Reinhard said, "We should get something to eat already." Ellen looked at the girl who was slapping the guy on the back and telling him to give back her present. The three of the guys sat in the cafe and ate. Reinhard held a mug in his hand, but suddenly someone asked, "Is black tea tasty?" Ellen ate cookies, the hero drank tea, and a little girl sat, resting her hands on the table. The boy replied that he adores black tea, but doesn't like it to be intensely sweet. The little girl asked a question. Why did the hero call them for dessert? He replied that it was for her and Ellen. The little girl chewed a piece of dessert. The boy said that they both like sweet things. They replied that they did. Suddenly, the girl frowned. She pointed her finger at the hero who was drinking tea and told him, "Don't be so rude to her." Reinhard replied that he wanted to take the opportunity to apologize anyway. The little girl looked at her reflection in the mug of tea. At this time, the guy said that he hadn't had time to have a proper conversation before. He wants to say that he did something he regretted then. He apologized for it. The girl put her fork in her mouth and then said, "The guy won the duel anyway." To be honest, she hated him, but that older guy was stronger. Ellen was looking at the menu and Reinhard was holding a mug in his hand. Across from them sat a girl along with her plush toy. The boy asked her, "Is that older guy that bad?" The girl replied that he was the one who made her raise them. There are many things she doesn't even want to talk about. The girl sat on the couch, rays of sunlight falling on part of her hair. Reinhard asked her how old she was. The girl answered that she was 15. The guy looked at the girl in surprise and it was already sunset outside. The girl put a straw in her cocktail and looked at the guy. Reinhard thought about the fact that she was 2 years younger than the freshman. What kind of ability does she have since she was able to get in here so early? The guy crossed his arms and grudgingly asked the girl what she was majoring in. She asked Reinhard, "You don't know?" He replied that the girl hadn't told him anything before. Then sparks started exploding in the girl's hand. She cheerfully said that her specialty was magic. After this phrase, a fireball appeared in the girl's hand. Reinhard looked frightened at all this, and there was a faint flame above the girl's finger. The guy thought that the girl had superpowers and asked her about it. She replied that it was not a supernatural ability, but magic. Lightning bolts appeared from the girl's fingers. She raised forks in the air that burned with green light, controlled the flow of wind. She said Ellen and Reinhard could do it too. The boy looked at the girl with his mouth open and sweat on his face, and Ellen sat next to him, but she was unfazed. Reinhard asked, "What kind of magic is this? Was such a thing even possible?" The girl smiled and a spoonful of food flew in front of her. She asked, "Isn't this great?" The hero remembers opening a book where a seal was drawn. In the temple, they call it stillness. An elderly man and a girl were conjuring seals. There is absolutely no casting process that is required for normal magicians. In other words, it means that the girl can use high-level magic without any training. Sweat appeared on Reinhard's face. He had never written anything like this before. The girl brought the spoon to her mouth and asked the guy, was he surprised? She put the spoon back in her drink glass and said she was actually a second year, number 1 in her generation. The girl twirled the spoon in her hands, Reinhard held the mug, and Ellen sat silently at the table. The second-year girl asked, "Is it a magical ability similar to supernatural power?" Even the temple didn't know that. The little girl put her hand to her mouth and said, "If there isn't enough mana, it won't work." The guy was about to take a sip from the mug. It didn't matter if the ability was there or not, without mana it was useless. Reinhard thought it was a pointless waste of time for him. There was a golden apple in someone's hand. Magic is the most convenient and powerful thing because it is easy to use and understand. The girl sat at the table, on which there were many different books and papers. Of course, one cannot do without studying. You need to have a natural talent to use a huge magical power and also be able to realize this talent. Also, an elemental predisposition is important. The girl kneeled on her knees and beat the floor with her hand. In general, there are nuances everywhere. The little girl looked at her drink and dug into it with a spoon. Regina has the talent to use magic. Plus, she's smart, but her mana supply is in trouble. Next to Ellen's hand was a plate with cutlery in it. They were sitting at the same table with Regina and Reinhardt. The girl told the young girl that things would get better with time. Regina is still young, after all. The girl replied that was true, but she wasn't sure about it. She put her head on the table, closed her eyes and exhaled. She said she didn't know. Suddenly Regina opened her eyes because Reinhardt had something to say to her. The girl did not believe that he could surprise her. The guy raised his index finger up and with a smile on his face said that when you learn about the problems of others, you yourself become better. It's the basis of psychology. Regina looked apprehensively at the guy who was smiling with his eyes closed. She said if Reinhardt does that, he's terrible. The guy replied that all people are like that. It would have been dark behind Reinhardt's back if it wasn't for the white light. He said that in this world, there are those who have great power, but not everyone knows how to use it. Regina screamed. He got up from the couch and rested his hands on the table, while Reinhardt was drinking tea. The girl asked the guy, does he mean that she was born with tremendous power, but can't use it? It's impossible, Regina said. The guy calmly replied that yes, there are many amazing things in the world. Reinhardt remembered how he couldn't lift a small dumbbell. He thought about how that really does sound ridiculous. It's like being born a jock but not being able to lift a small dumbbell. The girl jumped up abruptly and opened her mouth wide because of Ellen's single phrase. That sounds a lot like Voiden's boyfriend, the girl said. From that point on, Regina listened intently. He wiped a tear from his eye with his finger, covered his mouth with his hands. The guy sat with one eye closed, and Regina covered her mouth with the fingers of her palm. She asked, what should she do? Reinhardt replied that he didn't know. Most people are like that. The guy took the lace away from his mouth and smiled. So that's it, he thought. Regina sat up fearfully and her cheeks were flushed. The guy asked her, stop worrying. Right now, she's probably thinking about how she's not, Reinhardt suggested. Regina clenched her fists and trembled. The sun was already setting. Regina shouted that the guy wasn't very smart. The three of them were walking through town and approached a lamppost, but they stopped and observed their surroundings. Regina said she loved it here and hadn't felt this calm in a long time. Reinhardt told her that maybe it was because of what had happened. It was all his fault, though. The girl lowered her gaze and asked, so the Demon King has risen and decided to take revenge. Regina raised her head to look at the boy's face. Reinhardt indifferently replied that he didn't know. The three acquaintances walked through the city and discussed, what if it was true? What would they be able to do? Ellen stopped and thought for a moment. Artorias is dead, after all. Who else would be able to defeat the Demon King? The girl stopped and Regina and Reinhardt kept walking. She thought about the fact that there was no one in the world who was stronger than Artorias. What would they do when the great hero was dead? The boy turned his head toward Ellen, and Regina sobbed. The girl was screaming that Artorias was the only one who could fight the Demon King equally. Ellen looked at the floor and said nothing. The girl's gaze was sad. The boy took hold of her neck and said that meant they would lose without him. Regina screamed that it was wrong. There were horns on the head of the shadow the guy was casting. But after all, there was a demon prince left who doesn't want to be a demon king. Instead of Ellen's silhouette on the ground, there was the silhouette of a hero with a sword behind his back. Artorias is dead. But there is the hero's sister who doesn't want to become a hero. These thoughts visited the hero once again. In the end, he became Charlotte's enemy, and also an enemy of Ellen. Although, it would seem, they are the closest people to him. The boys were coming out of the alley. The hero thought about the fact that he was unbearably tired. Regina waved and thanked them for this bear. She said she would keep him safe. Ellen waved back at the girl, and the boy, hunched over, said he was off. Reinhardt walked up the steps and said it was a fast day. Ellen stood in front of the steps and did not go up. She looked up and called out to the boy. Reinhardt turned around and asked her what was wrong. The girl lowered her head and said, if the Demon King is really resurrected. The girl didn't finish and raised her head towards the guy. She asked Reinhardt, do you think we'll have to fight him? The boy became sad and lowered his gaze. He didn't know what to answer. We are shown the inhabitants crossing their arms in front of the knight. This task is entrusted to him by a carefree society. The girl, when she was still a child, sat quietly alone. Ellen knows that she has more abilities than Artorias. We are shown a battle between demons and humans, because if war suddenly breaks out and it's revealed that Ellen is Artorias' sister, she'll be forced to fight demons. The two guys were talking about something and there were drops of sweat on their faces. Ellen isn't ready, but one day she will have the strength to surpass the Demon King. At least that's what he believes. A light fell on someone's brown shoes. Except she's not about to give up her life for peace. The doors opened and Ellen sat beside them, staring at the floor. Fate. It's a strange thing. Sooner or later life would set things right. Reinhard stood in front of Helene. The girl asked him, does he believe in all this nonsense too? The boy took hold of his hair and said he wouldn't want that to happen. Ellen looked up at Reinhard and asked, why? Hero came down to her and said that without her, he would have to eat alone. Ellen said she was asking seriously. The guy was already standing a centimeter away from her and replied that he was actually serious too. Reinhard sat down on the step beside the girl and said that of course he didn't want to spend his life feeding her. The hero looked away and Ellen's gaze was directed at him. He went on to say that if it would be for the good of the girl's happiness, he was fine with it. He doesn't want her to die. Ellen looked at him, then turned away from the guy and just like him looked away. She asked Reinhard a question. Does he think the girl will rush into battle with demons without a backward thought? There are people who will ask to die for them, but here's the question. Will there be someone willing to die for you? Ellen asked. The girl was smiling for some reason. Ellen clenched her fist in her left hand. Reinhard asked Ellen to try not to think about the Demon King anymore. The girl said there was no need to worry about her. That was how the carefree days ended. A quiet life without problems and blood. I wish it could be like that. Failure and his team stared menacingly ahead. Because the hero had changed history, everything had gone to hell. That meant the events he needed to prepare for would be different. So a girl with purple hair and glasses stood fearfully near the wall. Reinhard asked her, are you Adelia? The hero stood in front of the girl in the white jacket. He stood in front of the frightened girl in a skirt with one hand in his pocket. Adelia asked him what he wanted from her. Now the hero would have to make things right. A man with gray hair and glasses stood and said what he thought. Everyone was already aware of the rumors surrounding the recent events. The man stood in front of the students who were sitting at their desks. He was saying that the temple belonged to the imperial palace, so it was now forbidden to leave the grounds without a good reason. The safety of the students is paramount. But due to what happened, the temple realizes that their parents might be greatly worried about the students. Reinhard sat at one of the desks and was greatly surprised by the man's words. He said that if the students thought it was dangerous for them to stay here, they could write a request for an unscheduled vacation. The hero couldn't believe it. The girl with brown hair raised her left hand. He asked what would happen if they took this vacation. Would they be able to go back to school next semester? The man lowered his head and looked down. He said that if the students left, they would have to start the current semester from the beginning. Without passing the first semester, they simply wouldn't be allowed into the second semester. Hero crossed his arms and didn't realize what was going on. He thought to himself that there was something wrong with their heads. All the students here are the future pillars of the empire. All of them will become the greatest people. But now they want to give up. Reinhard slapped his forehead and thought about how the students were slobbering. Did they get that much fright at the mere mention of demons in the capital? Some guy was standing in front of a girl with red hair. A few days ago, Ludwig was helping Scarlet, who was being bullied by Erich because of the color of her hair. Then Charlotte stood up for her. Charlotte took Scarlet by the shoulder and led the way. She said that she needed to help her own so as not to tarnish the Empire's name. Obviously, this was just another clash of heirs. Power struggles always go on behind the scenes. Some guy with short brown hair was pointing 3 fingers. And yet, the protagonist has suddenly shifted to the background. If things continued like this, he was finished. A man stood beside the girl with brown hair. He asked her if she was ready to take a vacation. The girl replied that her parents said it was dangerous there, but suddenly another girl raised her hand. She had yellow-colored hair. She told the teacher that she wanted to ask something. The girl the teacher was asking about vacation was looked at carefully by Reinhard. She was asked to come up to the teacher after class. You can't let the characters scatter before the main events. A wooden sign hung near the door. The door to this building was swung open by the hero. In front of him, behind a desk, sat Adelia. The girl sat on a chair, and in her hands she held an encyclopedia. She asked Reinhard why he came to her. The guy started walking towards the girl. Adelia was greatly frightened when the hero asked her number and name. After Reinhard's next question, the girl's face looked even more scared. He asked her where her insufferable friend was now. Adelia got up from her chair and started to walk away, holding a blue book in her hands. The hero, on the other hand, asked her where is she. They were all at a disadvantage now. Reinhard rested his hand against the wall and looked into Adelia's eyes. He asked her where the girl's friend was hiding. Adelia didn't know what she should do. If she told, she would be acknowledging the fact that Garlet was insufferable. But if she didn't answer, Reinhard would kill her. That's what the girl thought. She turned her head away from the hero. The hero asked the girl, are you deaf? Adelia replied that her friend told her that she had an important appointment. The hero put his hand to his chin and Adelia started to walk away already. Reinhardt thought about the fact that Garlet had gone to her parents' house, so she's somewhere in the neighborhood. Adelia thought as she answered the question. The girl twitched and her face turned blue. The hero had asked her a question. Did he give her permission to leave? The guy was being very bold with the girl. After a while they sat across from each other. Reinhardt asked Adelia, has Garlet applied for a vacation yet? The girl lowered her head and answered that she seemed to have. The hero asked her what Adelia would do if her friend left. The girl with glasses was sad. She replied that she didn't know. It would be nice if Garlet changed her mind, Adelia said. The hero put his right hand to his mouth and thought for a moment. Suddenly, the girl raised two hands and sweat was on her face. Reinhardt suggested that Adelia convince her friend to stay. The girl with glasses said that was a bad idea. Garlet is a noble woman after all. Adelia closed her eyes and said that of course she could, but she was very scared to change Duke Owen's mind. She has no right to even look at him. Adelia asked the hero to say better why it was so important to him that Garlet stay. Reinhardt sat with a nonchalant face. The girl opened her mouth in surprise. The hero had told her that it was boring without Garlet. Adelia blushed and screamed so hard that the hero's ears bled. She asked him, don't they fight every time they meet? Doesn't Garlet really like Reinhardt? The girl blushed even more. She said, the reason why you're upset is that Garlet is leaving. Steam rose from Adelia's head. Reinhardt sat across from her and didn't understand what she could have made up. It was the first time he had ever seen such a simpleton. The hero sat on a chair, and with his back Garlet opened the door behind him. The girl shouted to Adelia that she was here. Hero turned his head toward Garlet and said they were just talking about her. The girl looked questioningly in the hero's direction. She didn't understand why he was. The things in the room were scattered. A white skirt lay on the bed. Garlet was greatly embarrassed, and she stood with her mouth wide open. It was already night outside, with only light coming from the castle windows. Garlet shouted loudly for Reinhardt to get out of there. The girl was pushing at the hero's back. He was asking her why she was kicking him out. The girl's whole face was red. She was saying, now. Garlet dragged the guy by the arm and asked him a question. Does he even know how much these clothes cost? Without waiting for an answer, she told Reinhardt to get out of here. The guy didn't resist, but asked the girl why he had to leave. What had he done wrong again? Garlet's face became as red as possible that even tears started pouring out of her eyes. He yelled for Reinhardt to just disappear. The lights were still on in the castle. The morning had come. A wooden sign hung over the door that led to Garlet's room. Reinhardt and Garlet sat across from each other at the table. The boy asked her why she hadn't mentioned it before. The girl replied that she would rather die than tell the hero anything. Garlet turned her head away from the hero. Reinhardt held his hands one on top of the other and asked the girl if she took a vacation. The girl closed her eyes and smiled. She said that was a good thing. She won't see the hero for a whole year. But the guy asked her not to. He sat half sideways to the girl and asked her not to go on vacation. Garlet opened her eyes wide and didn't say a word. Then her face turned red again. She shook her head back and forth, and Reinhardt thought about the fact that Garlet had fallen in love with him. The girl put her hand to her chin and asked why she should listen to a hero. The guy put his hands on the table and said that of course he didn't know what was in the girl's head right now, but just that if she took a vacation, she would lose a whole year, the hero explained. The girl, sitting on a chair, was silent and listened to the hero. Reinhardt added that Garlet would be junior to him in his course. Would that suit her? They sat at a wooden table. The girl said nothing intelligible at first, but after a second, there was sweat on her face, and the girl herself shouted that it was impossible. Reinhardt is a freshman, after all. Garlet raised her index finger up, and the hero smiled. He was talking about how he was far from being as easy as he looked at first glance. What Garlet was saying was that she wouldn't put up with it. The girl trembled. Reinhardt was sure that the girl did not want to submit to him. He said to Garlet, 100 push-ups, 100 squats. He would squeeze all the juices out of her. Drops of water were falling on the girl's hands. He asked the hero why he was doing this to her. The hero kept one hand on the table and looked at the girl in silence. She said she didn't want to take a vacation. Garlet tried to wipe away her tears, but her parents do. They're forcing her. They sat at the table and talked to each other. Garlet asked the hero what he meant, that taking a vacation in this situation could create a bad image for the imperial family and the temple. Plus, would Bertus and Charlotte attend classes no matter what? Reinhardt said, exactly like that. Garlet began to panic, droplets starting to appear on her face. The girl didn't know what to do. She thought she was in a hopeless situation, but now she realizes that she wasn't. The hero pointed his finger at the girl who was crying and asked if she had a choice. He told her that Garlet had to convince her father. Garlet's hair shimmered in the light. Reinhardt asked her, did she really think Bertus would really do anything to her? The hero looked at Garlet exhaustedly. He gave her some advice. She could say that in such a situation, The student guards would be beefed up and the temple would be safer than ever. The prince and princess are staying. Do you think father will risk the family's position? Asked the hero to the girl. It is much more effective to say it than to be stubborn. Reinhard continued to speak. The girl looked warily at the hero, who exhaled. She asked him if he was definitely a teenager. Reinhard replied that if Garlet had gone through the same things he had, she would have become one. Ellen approached the table. From the back, her hair seemed black. The hero was not much surprised by the girl's arrival. In the light, Ellen's hair was blue in color. She asked, "Is it already time for a night snack?" Reinhard got up from the table and said, since they had a guest, he would cook for her as well. Garlet, hesitating, asked the boy, "Will you cook?" The hero stood with his hand up beside Ellen and told her she could sit wherever was convenient. He would choose what to cook. Garlet yelled after the hero and didn't realize where he was going. Ellen and Garlet stood opposite each other under the chandelier. The girl with brown hair looked away and thought that the situation was very awkward. It was the first time they were sitting across from each other. Garlet didn't look at Ellen and couldn't think of anything to talk about. Next to Garlet stood a clock. Abruptly, she became cheerful and turned her head to the side, while Ellen sat with a nonchalant face. She was glad the food was ready and called everyone to eat. The girl with blue hair put a piece of meat in her mouth. Next to Helene sat Reinhardt, and across from them was Garlet. There were many pieces of meat in the plate and a mug of tea next to it. Garlet asked the hero, "Do you know how to cook?" Reinhard replied that it wasn't that he could, just that he could make something edible. The hero poked his fork in Ellen's direction and told her not to take it all for herself. She said she wouldn't. Reinhard said, "Well, really, just try to eat it all." Ellen looked at the hero and his gaze was directed toward Garlet. Ellen asked the hero how did they get so close. There were drops of sweat on Reinhardt's face and he looked at Ellen. He didn't know what to answer. Garlet, on the other hand, asked in response, did they need an excuse to talk to each other? Ellen sat stone-faced on the bench next to the hero. Reinhardt was frightened by Helene's gaze. He didn't understand why the girl was staring at him like that. The hero apparently realized if she was. Before he could speak, Reinhardt's hand was already covering Ellen's mouth. The girl wanted to say that he was the first through the letter, but her next words were hard to make out. Garlet didn't understand what letter she was talking about. The hero raised his hands and stood between the two girls. He said that he and Ellen went to fencing pairs together, plus because of the duel she was lenient to him in training. Garlet asked if Reinhardt was deceiving her. Ellen replied that it was like that. It got dark outside again. Hero asked Garlet if she could tell him tomorrow how her conversation had gone. The girl didn't understand why she had to tell him about it, but she agreed. Reinhardt and Ellen sat alone at the table. They were both looking off into the distance. The hero asked the girl why she had started talking about it in the first place then. She replied that she told him that he had fallen in love with her at first sight. The hero asked in his head for a god to save him. Reinhard recalled leaving the hall and there was a screen near his head that spelled out the completion of the challenge. His assignment was to write a love letter to a classmate and get rejected. He didn't think at that moment that he would get 200 points. The hero was too intoxicated by those 200 points and thought he could accumulate 6,000 for the skill. Reinhard was propping his head with his hand and a sad Helen was sitting next to him. She asked him, was it a lie? The hero's eyes grew wide. He looked at Ellen in a puzzled way. The hero's face was covered in sweat. He didn't know what to say. Helene looked at her reflection in the mug of tea. The girl took a sip of tea and said that it seemed so. Reinhard apologized, but the girl said it was okay. Morning came. The hero yawned and covered his mouth with his hand. The next day, Reinhard was walking through the city in the early morning. It was as if Bertus had read his mind and he was rid of one of his problems. Bertus had talked Garlet and Liana, who at the beginning had also planned to take a sabbatical, into not doing so. No, not persuaded, but insisted. Of course, that only worked to his advantage. No matter how much they owed him, forcing them to drop out was the last thing the hero would want. After all, he didn't even ask him to do that. Why would he take the initiative? Reinhard does not understand what this strange man is thinking at all. The hero's thoughts were interrupted by a girl who stood behind him. She said that she searched for Reinhard. The girl stood to the left of the hero, and there was doubt on his face. She asked Reinhard if he had some time, and, if he didn't mind, could he go with her. The boy replied that it wasn't that he couldn't, it was just that the ban on leaving the school hall hadn't been lifted yet. The girl winked at him and said that there were always exceptions. Reinhard was walking behind Charlotte. They were both wearing black clothes, following the hero, and the girl wished the hero and the girl a good journey, and no other word was even said. So that's what it is, the power of a princess. It is frightening, thought Reinhardt. The girl, smiling, walked along with the hero. Reinhard asked her if she was afraid to go out when the situation in the country is like this. Charlotte replied that there was no need to worry. No matter what happens, she has a way to protect herself. The princess had a hood on her head and the hero was looking at her with his mouth open. He said it was certainly ridiculous to ask this now, but where are they going? Charlotte thought she had told Reinhardt that. They are going to a shopping street in the Alligar neighborhood. The light was falling on half of the hero's face and his eyes were blue in color. Could it be that Charlotte is looking for the place where the hero was last seen in his past guise? Reinhardt's head began to ache again. Reinhardt thought that this time too, Bertus supporters were following him. He thought about how he would rather turn into a bat and fly away than reveal his true identity. The boy turned his head away from the girl and told her that he didn't know why they were going there, but he had a strange condition lately. Charlotte smiled and the hero noticed it. The girl said she knew what Reinhardt was talking about. The girl shifted her gaze toward the guy and said she noticed what a pretty good relationship he had with Bertus. Reinhardt wiped his face and replied that he didn't know what Bertus thought about it. But yes, the sun was illuminating a huge castle with a blue roof. Charlotte told the hero that he himself knows there are exams in different grades in the temple, and there are not only individual exams there are also group ones where a team is required. Reinhardt himself knows that the grades for these subjects affect the overall score. The hero crossed his arms and the princess brought her hand up to her chin. She explained that if he has a bad relationship with his co-commanders, then Charlotte asked bluntly. The princess smiled and watched the hero's reaction with her peripheral vision. She asked what it would be like for Reinhardt if his group got rid of him. The boy didn't understand why the princess was explaining that to him. The girl and the hero were walking in an alley past a resident who was wearing a cloak and backpack. Reinhardt clarified. The princess wants to say that a low grade will affect the overall grade. Charlotte added that the hero said that he had a good relationship with his class, but if he didn't behave normally, he would be dropped. Reinhardt walked behind the princess with a very sad look. He asked her, are grades really that important? Even Bertus is fixated on them, the hero added. The princess looked to her right and thought for a moment. The girl replied that she didn't know how it used to be, but now they were very important. Now for them, grades are a matter of life and death. The girl and the guy stood between two buildings in town. She said that if something happened to either of them, the other would be barred from the throne. The hero replied that he knew that. The emperor's letter with the red seal. After entering the temple, the emperor issued a decree to the royal class. This message was addressed to Charlotte, Bertus, and everyone else. In it, he warned his followers not to do anything foolish. The princess raised her head slightly upward. She said that the emperor must have known of Bertus' intentions to kill her, but he didn't give it much thought at the time. They want to prevent blood feuds in the future. The prince and princess stood with their backs to each other. Right now, they hope that everyone will be at peace, because if there is any trouble, this one will become a real headache. Charlotte stood with closed eyes in front of the hero, who seemed to be tired of listening to everything already. The girl asked, if an accident happened to the two of them, would the third one be able to become emperor? Reinhard replied, yes, that's right. Then the guy twitched a little. He thought about the fact that the grades they get in the temple affect the order of succession to the throne. Reinhard rested his chin on his thumb and Charlotte smiled. The hero was thinking about the fact that, even though it's not basic, but his thoughts were interrupted by the princess saying that he had gotten it right. The girl held onto the wall with one hand and the other hand held her head. She said that in the temple, results were often achieved through group work. In other words, the loss of one person is a heavy blow. Reinhard walked over to the girl and stood beside her. He replied that he now understood why Bertus had discouraged those who had decided to go on sabbatical. They turned their faces to each other and Charlotte suggested that they finish talking. They stood in front of the market stalls. The child the princess is looking for. He was last seen on this street. They decided to ask around. Reinhard and the princess asked around. After a while, Charlotte was drinking a drink through a tube. The two of them were tired. The girl and the boy sat on the blue bench. The princess knew it wouldn't be easy, but for so many people to care so much about each other. That's the way of the world, the hero replied. Reinhard remembered how they had been chased away and pointed fingers. He wondered if the inhabitants would behave the same way if they knew Charlotte was the emperor's daughter. The girl held a glass in her hand and was upset because she never learned anything new. The boy looked at the girl with his blue eyes. He asked her about the fake scroll she was talking about. Reinhard knew he needed to ask it, as if he wasn't aware of it. The princess held the glass with both hands. He said he couldn't elaborate on the hero, but he had a reason to leave her. In his opinion, it was the best solution to survive. The unfamiliar guy stood alone in the middle of the forest. He mindlessly ran away and didn't think through his next move. The same guy was walking around the city, holding a roll of paper in his hand. All he had were the magic scrolls from the Demon King's castle. Most likely, he decided to sell them on this shopping street and get the money he needed. Except that it wasn't without problems. The structure of the magic scrolls of demons, different from human. Ordinary people, not wizards, will think it's just a joke, or they would think that someone had brought a fake. The princess took a sip of the drink. Later, it was said that a fireball scroll was stolen somewhere. There are witness testimonies, but there's no one who bought the scroll. Because of this, Charlotte has lost all her clues. Reinhard half closed his eye. He was the last person to visit Ellerith's store. If that's the case, does it mean that someone gave false testimony? The girl got up from the bench. Charlotte said that this was a place she wanted to check out in person too. They went to the store from which the fireball scroll had been stolen. The man with the beard and tail had no intention of talking to the hero and princess. The three of them stood near the table. The princess apologized, but this was an important matter, so the proceedings were still in progress. The girl asked the man to tell again what happened then. Reinhard was greatly surprised. The man said that he didn't care if the thief was caught or not. He didn't understand why this scroll was stolen or how much it was worth at all. The man told the story of what happened and the hero listened to it with his hands on each other. The hero was angry because the man spouted nonsense of pure bullshit. The man turned his head and closed his eyes after the hero's remark. Reinhard said that the man said he personally gave him the scroll. The merchant replied that he didn't know where the kid had gone, and he didn't know his name either, so it's unlikely that this information will be of any help. Charlotte, smiling, said that of course it would help. The girl moved closer to the table, and the merchant watched her with side vision. He didn't really tell him anything, the man thought, but the girl answered him that he had already told him something. Charlotte put the scroll on the table. She said she would give it to him for a quarter of the usual price. The merchant took the scroll in his hands and couldn't believe it wasn't a fake. It was a real scroll of lightning. Charlotte told him that if she wanted it, she could buy it. The merchant immediately put down 3 coins. He couldn't refuse such an offer. The man looked at the scroll with a smile on his face. He couldn't believe such luck. Suddenly, sweat broke out on the merchant's face. It was because of Charlotte's question. She asked him where in this process did she have the opportunity to steal the scroll. The princess stood in front of the merchant and smiled. She said there was no appraisal office in the store. He right behind the counter could assess whether the scroll was real or fake. As soon as the merchant saw the boy's scroll, he immediately realized it was fake and pushed it out. The princess pointed her finger at the door that was behind the man's back. She asked him how the boy was able to steal the fireball scroll from the cabinet behind the merchant's back. Charlotte looked at the man and said that that boy didn't steal anything, meaning that the man was trying to hide something. The merchant was yelling at the girl. The man said that if he said he stole, then he stole. Reinhard hit the table. He glared menacingly at the merchant and told him if he didn't want the hero to roll him in a tortilla, he better keep his voice down. The guy gave him an intimidating look. He told the merchant that he could just tell him exactly how the boy stole the scroll from him, or tell him what he was hiding. There was sweat on the merchant's face, because it was explained to him that he was now charged with interfering with the investigation by giving false information. Reinhard asked the merchant angrily, will they decide amicably, or will the hero go to the right person and the merchant will tell everything as he will get a good beating? The merchant looked at the hero and was greatly frightened. The girl sat in bewilderment. She clenched her hand into a fist and screamed, sitting beside the guy. He could not believe that there were such people in. How can you say such nonsense with a stone face? Charlotte took Reinhard by the shoulder and started shaking him. She asked the guy, are you ignoring me or something? Does he think I would believe such a thing? Hero sat in his thoughts and there was a drop of water under his left eye. The hero thought about the fact that the merchant had also blurted out at the end that it was all a lie. And the princess was angry, though one can understand, thought the hero. Reinhard opened his mouth in surprise. It was after the princess's question. She didn't know how one could be so stupid. The hero now realized what had angered her the most. Charlotte took Reinhard's hand. She reasoned that this is why a proper public education system is needed in the empire, and all because there is no education. The hero looked at Charlotte with sweat on his face. He listened to the girl talk about how then at least one less stupid person would be. When they have someone pretend to be white and fluffy and lie in the eyes, she cannot stand it. Reinhard looked at Charlotte fearfully. The girl squeezed the boy's hand hard. Reinhard said that of course he understands her, but the hero came close to the face of the princess and they looked into each other's eyes. Reinhard asked her to calm down at least a little. The girl still held Reinhard's hand and apologized. On the way, Charlotte ate something. Reinhard said he would gratefully accept it as it wasn't at his expense. However, he asked if the emperor's daughter really eats street food. Charlotte replied that she had once been fastidious. She suddenly began to remember. She said that then she remembers chewing mud-spattered leather shoes in the demon prison and couldn't even dream of another meal. Charlotte stared at the food in her hands. She said that she felt that she would never be able to taste anything more magnificent than the sponge cake she ate after her release. The hero looked at her and said that this is not the sweetest story. Reinhard was suddenly surprised by something. It turned out that he was surprised by the question that Charlotte asked. She asked if Reinhard knew what was scarier than a demon dungeon. Charlotte said that when people started eating each other out of hunger, they were much more terrifying than demons in those moments. According to her, some people realized what they had done and ended up going crazy and taking their own lives. Then suddenly Charlotte smiled. She asked if it was worth holding on to your mind in a place like this. Reinhard looked at her apprehensively and said that he seemed to have heard deep words that he shouldn't have heard. Reinhard asked suspiciously if she was saying that now she must die. Charlotte asked him, without showing any emotion, how he had guessed. However, she immediately put her hand on his shoulder and said that she was joking, but Reinhard clearly didn't like the joke. They continued walking somewhere. On the way, Charlotte said that in any case, thanks to the fact that they personally came to check, they were able to find out something. The hero asked her what they had found out. Charlotte told him that when an investigation is conducted in this way, you can learn a lot. For example, to find out where stores are located, or to look at the reactions of salespeople who testified. Charlotte pointed at something. She said that this way, you can find out the most important detail. The princess said about the trajectory. The heroes stopped. Charlotte said that their target went through that gate, and one by one went through all the nearby scroll merchants. According to her, all the merchants who actually saw it are on this side. Charlotte put a hand to her chin. She said that in the end, it turned out that the fire scroll merchant hadn't seen him. According to her, you cannot go any further because everything is already clear here. Charlotte said that was how they knew the scroll hadn't been stolen. Reinhard was shocked and speechless. Charlotte put her hand to her chin and said that the boy had no reason to run away. Reinhard looked at her in horror. He was surprised by Charlotte's question. She asked him that if it was as he said, then what did the boy do after he couldn't sell the demon scroll? Reinhard didn't know the answer to that question. Charlotte held her hand out in front of her and said that the store where it would be worth doing this is right in front of them. And then she pointed to a shop that was not far from them. There was a sign above the store. Reinhard looked at Charlotte in horror. He thought about how he knew she was smarter than he was, but he couldn't have imagined that she would get this far on such a small scale. Charlotte took off her hood and offered to take a look at that store. Reinhard asked her if she was sure this was the right place. Charlotte turned around a bit and said that maybe it wasn't true. Then she went on to say that no one else had seen him. According to her, it means that among those whom they interviewed, someone is lying. She said there was a good chance that one of them had done something to the boys. Reinhard was excited. What bothered him was that he didn't have anything to say to her. He also thought that Charlotte's doubts made sense, so they couldn't be dismissed as nonsense. Reinhard was horrified. He wondered if Elleris was still in the store. He thinks she went to the archipelago to look after Eri. Reinhard was thinking that even if Charlotte didn't know who Reinhard was, just starting to suspect Elleris might cause problems. He knew it was only a matter of time before she found out Elleris' true identity. Reinhard suddenly started using magic. He thought that there was nothing he could do and that he needed to make some adjustments right now. However, something shocked him. It was written on the system panel that if Reinhard wanted to make adjustments, 10,000 points were needed. He was shocked and wondered what the other incredible requirements were. The hero looked at Charlotte. He thought about how she wanted to find him so badly that it was almost impossible to ignore that fact. This bothered Reinhard greatly. They were already standing in front of the store's entrance. Charlotte reached for the handle and pulled. However, the door was closed. Charlotte asked if there was anyone inside. Reinhard said it might be that they had the day off. Reinhard was glad that the store was closed. He immediately suggested that she go somewhere else and then go back to this store. However, a moment later, Reinhard was already terrified. He knew it had happened. He looked at Charlotte and realized that she was wearing the expression of someone who had found an answer. The man passed behind the heroes. He asked them why they had come here since the store was empty. Charlotte was still standing in front of the door. She asked the man if it was really a day off at this store. The man replied that Elleris seemed to have gone somewhere far away and the store was closed now. Charlotte asked him how long the store had been closed. The man thought about it and put his hand on his belt. He said the store has been closed since the beginning of the holidays. The man was looking suspiciously off to the side. He said he knew she'd gone somewhere. According to him, this is not surprising in principle because Elleris is still quite young. Charlotte turned away from the door and asked if the man might know when the landlady would be back. He said she hadn't said a word when she left, so he didn't know anything. A passerby started talking about Elleris. He said that Elleris did not participate in the general meetings of merchants. She got along well with everyone, but she did not get very close to anyone. He said that Elleris seemed to be very kind because she always helped those in need. However, he added that he thinks that she did not have a commercial streak, no matter how you look at it. The man started walking further and told them not to waste time and come back another time. Reinhard and Charlotte were standing with their backs to each other. Reinhard said that there was nothing to do now, so he suggested that we return tomorrow. Charlotte stared wildly at the floor. She exclaimed that she would get there anyway. Reinhard was stunned. Charlotte started using magic. Reinhard tried to stop her. He asked her what she was doing. Suddenly there was an explosion. The residents of the city were scared. However, Charlotte looked completely calm. Reinhard thought with horror that she was crazy. The door was smashed to splinters. The heroes were standing on the threshold of the store. Charlotte pulled her hood down a little. She suggested that we go to the store and check if the scroll was still there. Reinhard wondered where this crazy initiative came from. Charlotte stepped inside the store. She said she couldn't believe what she was saying. However, she gave orders to Reinhard to look in that direction as she was going to check the office. However, a red-haired girl suddenly appeared and asked them about what they had arranged here. Ellery asked them who they were. Ellery asked them pityingly who they were and what they wanted. She also asked them why they had broken in on her like this. Charlotte looked away for a moment, seemingly thinking of something. She started to remove her hood. Reinhard was surprised. Charlotte greeted Elleris and introduced herself, saying that she was the Emperor's daughter. However, Elleris was not happy about it. She stood with her arms crossed and listened to Charlotte. The princess said she had something to ask Elleris. After removing her hood completely, Charlotte said that they would have to have a small conversation. After a while, Charlotte was looking at Elleris's documents. The princess said that many people are now looking for one child. She waved her hand and looked at Elleris and asked if Elleris already knew about this. The girl replied that she knew. Then Charlotte said that she had heard that Elleris had not seen him. She asked if that was true. Elleris confirmed this, saying that she had never seen the child before. Elleris was tense, holding her hands together in front of her. Charlotte said that she had just looked at Elleris' documents and saw that she was originally from Ferja. Charlotte asked if Count Ferja was a good feudal lord. Elleris made a pitiful face and said that the county of Ferja was a union now known as the Bishopric of Renderley. According to her, the Count of Ferja is not actually a feudal lord. Charlotte looked at Elleris suspiciously. Reinhard looked at Charlotte, not understanding the situation. But then he was horrified when he realized that Charlotte was preparing a trap for Elleris. The hero realized that Charlotte was going to ask Elleris something that only the people of the county knew. The hero thought that Charlotte is, of course, Charlotte, with her detailed knowledge of the affairs of the Empire, but also from the pre-prepared Elleris. Reinhard gets goosebumps. They are like two fighters in a verbal battleground. Then Charlotte asked if Elleris was a sorceress. Elleris replied that this was not the case. Charlotte made Elleris nervous by saying that Elleris, however, had tools that could only be used with skill. Charlotte continued to look around, but there was no sign of the fire scroll. Charlotte said that Elleris is a special merchant who doesn't have any artifacts for battle magic, and battle magic is the most popular. Elleris said pityingly that it was true, but whatever it was, battle magic was made for fighting. So she decided not to sell such things. Charlotte looked at Elleris suspiciously again. The princess reached out and asked Elleris to bring the trade book. After a while, they were still in the store. Charlotte stood and thought about something, while Reinhard and Elleris were in suspense. Elleris started to walk away and said that the Emperor's daughter herself had stopped by, and that was how she greeted them. Elleris asked for forgiveness for her ignorance. She said that if they waited a little longer, she would go downstairs and make them some tea. So Elleris went down somewhere. As soon as Elleris left, Charlotte said that no matter how much she thought about it, it was still strange. Reinhard asked her what exactly she found strange. Charlotte said that the most popular item in scroll shops is battle magic scrolls, and this girl says that she doesn't sell them because there is a possibility that they are used with malicious intent. Charlotte said it didn't matter, but that was not how merchants behaved. Then Charlotte started talking about seeing Elleris' trading book. Charlotte said that she couldn't even pay the rent for 2 years because with this approach, her store is unprofitable. According to Charlotte, there are too few everyday items in this place where she lives. The decor of the room is somewhat impersonal. Everything is so ordered. Charlotte said that even if Elleris had gone missing, no one would have noticed. Charlotte turned and looked out the window. She said she had no proof, but everything was too suspicious. Charlotte put her hand to her chin and continued to analyze the situation. Reinhard was alarmed. He thought that if she continued like this, she would soon figure it out. Reinhard was thinking that once the investigation started, the royal spies would appear. Because of this, they would no longer be able to see Elleris in the capital. Reinhard was nervous. He knew that something had to be done, because if everything remained as it would be Elleris, not him, who would be in danger first. Reinhard thought about how he was trying to make sure that the store was just a cover story and that something else was involved. So, in order to really be completely sure of this, Charlotte begins to use all possible methods. Reinhard suddenly imagined what would happen if it turned out that Elleris was a demon. Reinhard was horrified. The hero decided that it was necessary to act. Reinhard held out his hand. He told Charlotte not to jump to conclusions and to listen to him. Reinhard was not happy. He wondered if he had a choice. He suggested that she leave it at that. Charlotte was suddenly surprised by this and asked him what he meant. Meanwhile, Elleris was still downstairs. Reinhard said that if everything was as he thought, then she had some ulterior motive. Charlotte started to argue and reminded him that Elleris was running the store at a loss. Elleris was pouring tea. Charlotte said there was no reason for it, but if so, she was very kind. Then Charlotte said that if her assumptions were correct, that child was here, she was almost certain of it. Reinhard said they found out why the child was having trouble selling the scroll. so he suggested we go to the next store and see if he could sell it there. Reinhard began to persuade Charlotte. He asked her if Elleris, a girl who was basically no different from them, could possibly be able to wield dangerous battle scrolls. Reinhard said they would have been taken away from her. According to him, even if she had scraped together money for them, they would have been taken away, and in any case, she would not have been able to sell them. Then, he reached out and asked her a question. The hero asked her if she thought the child who came to sell the demon scroll had something else. Charlotte replied that it could be. Reinhard calmly said that she only had guesses. The hero said that Elleris checked the book of scrolls and realized that it was a scroll of demons, because she is a person who knows at least something about magic. According to Reinhard, if she found out that it was a demon scroll, she could ask where he got it from. Charlotte couldn't understand him. She asked Reinhard what he was trying to say. The hero said that he thought Elleris would have wanted to protect this child in any way possible. Charlotte was surprised. Reinhard was unperturbed. He thought that he had had enough of playing games. He knew that before she got close to the more dangerous truth, it was best to push it in the right direction, give or take a few minutes. Then he said that if we assume that she is a sorceress and recognize the scroll and she is really so kind, then of course she realized that the boy was in a dangerous situation and decided to help him. Charlotte was angry. She shouted that if they could find him, they would need to find out more. Irritated, she asked him how he knew she was protecting the boy. Charlotte began to argue with Reinhard about what he was just suggesting. According to her, even if this is true, it is not a reason for her to stay here. Charlotte exclaimed in frustration that Elleris was their only lead. However, Reinhard was still unperturbed. Charlotte was startled when Reinhard asked her a question. He asked her what if the fact that they were looking for the kid would put him in even more danger. Reinhard said that if they found him, Bertus could find him. Charlotte stood with her head bowed. At that moment, Elleris stood up with a tray of tea in her hands. She said she brought tea. The situation was as tense as possible. Charlotte shifted to a less polite level of speech than she had at the beginning. She turned to Elleris and said that she would ask briefly. Elleris didn't like it. She looked exhausted. Charlotte said she thought Elleris was absolutely connected to the missing boy case. But Charlotte also knows that scary people are looking for him. So she had a theory. Charlotte asked if it was possible that Elleris was hiding it and protecting it. This surprised Elleris a little, but she didn't show it. Charlotte said that Elleris didn't know who was trying to hurt the boy. Charlotte started to suggest out loud that it was also possible that Elleris didn't know if this information could be shared, so she lied to Charlotte. Elleris was tense, but she continued to listen to Charlotte in silence. According to the princess, whatever Elleris said or didn't say, she will use all possible methods to find out everything about Elleris. Charlotte then added that it was possible that if she found out, the boy would be in even more danger, so she thought she should stop now. Charlotte looked worried. She earnestly asked Elleris to answer her. Charlotte asked if Elleris was really protecting the child. Elleris was very nervous, and she looked away. Reinhard was also flustered, and he stared at Elleris intently, waiting for her to say something. Elleris put her hand to her chest and said that it was true and that the boy was safe. Charlotte was shocked. Elleris apologized for not being able to tell the truth. Reinhard turned to Charlotte. She began to lose consciousness and the heroes immediately rushed to her. Some time passed. The heroes were already sitting near the tree. Charlotte didn't stop crying. Reinhard calmly sat next to her as she cried. Charlotte wiped away her tears and began to calm down. She considered what Elleris had told her, and Elleris said that she already knew that the princess wasn't going to harm the boy. And now we see what happened. Elleris said that too many people wished the boy ill, so even Princess Elleris couldn't tell the truth. Charlotte was sitting on her lap. She was in shock. Elleris said that the child is fine, and also added that she thinks it would be better if Charlotte does not know where he is and what he does. Elleris put her hand to her chest and said that she was a sorceress, not some great sorceress, but that she was strong enough to protect one boy. Elleris then said that she might seem unreliable to the princess, but she asked her to just believe her. Charlotte sat and stared with annoyance at Elleris, who was saying that when it was safe, they would be able to communicate. According to Elleris, emails will probably be a good way to do this. Elleris said that if Charlotte came in person, they wouldn't be able to predict the consequences, so it would be better if someone else handled the sending and receiving of the letters. Elleris immediately cited Reinhard as an example and said that it would be better if this young man sent letters. And here we are again transported to reality. Charlotte breathed a sigh of relief. She asked Reinhard if he understood that Bertus couldn't let the events of the day reach his ears. The hero replied that of course he understands this. Charlotte smiled at that. She suddenly took Reinhard's hand and thanked him. Charlotte blushed a little and said that if it wasn't for his abilities, she definitely wouldn't have learned anything. Reinhard looked away and said that they were just lucky. She squeezed his hand and thanked him again, saying she wouldn't forget it. As they walked, Reinhard said that Charlotte's hands were cold. The hero told her to go home because it was getting colder outside. At the same time, Reinhard was thinking that now Charlotte would do her best to protect Elris. The hero understood that in the end everything was resolved, but for some reason Reinhard is very disgusted at heart. Reinhard lowered his head, thinking that he was probably too tired. He supposed it might be because he'd burned a lot of nerves during the day. His mind is occupied with the fact that he wants to shower and go to bed, but suddenly something caught Reinhard's attention. Charlotte was standing in front of him, clearly displeased with him. Irritated, she asked him where he'd been all day. Charlotte was not happy because she had been waiting for him all this time. Reinhard replied that he had worked out a little because he still had a day off. The hero asked her what she was doing here, but then something occurred to him. He remembered asking her to tell him about her conversation with her father. Charlotte grudgingly replied that she didn't know why, but he asked her to tell him how it would go. Reinhard asked her how it went. However, Charlotte was confused and mumbled. Reinhard asked her if her father was insisting on leaving. Charlotte replied that this was not the case and that he said that you cannot take it. Charlotte started to say something, but then stopped and said that if Berta said so, it couldn't be helped. Reinhard asked her if the problem hadn't been solved. The hero noticed that she was confused. He asked her why she was hesitating. Reinhard asked Charlotte to talk faster if there was a problem, because he was sleepy. Charlotte was excited. She said her father said he wanted to see Reinhard. She blushed and turned away from him. The hero was shocked. Reinhard asked if a nobleman like her father suddenly wanted to meet someone like Reinhard. Charlotte began to speak very hesitantly. She said her father seemed to think that Charlotte wasn't the type to think of that on his own. According to Charlotte, she said everything, as Reinhard explained, and he asked who made it up. Reinhard was shocked. It made sense, he thought, since she only said a few sentences to him each time. So of course, in the Archduke's opinion, the situation is rather strange. Reinhard was angry and he asked her if she had just spilled the beans about him. Charlotte looked away nervously and said that it wasn't true and that her father didn't believe she'd thought it up on her own. Reinhard crossed his arms and calmed down. He accepted the situation and asked Charlotte how she presented him. Charlotte thought about it. He asked her and hoped she hadn't imagined him as a nasty bandit with a nasty temper. Charlotte was shocked. Horrified, she turned away and began to sweat harder than usual. He started to follow her and said that now he would definitely hit her. Charlotte apologized and said it was just a mistake. Reinhard said he would give her a light blow and asked her not to worry. Then they got into a fight, and so the next day came. Reinhard went somewhere and asked to meet Archduke number 11. Reinhard was alarmed. He was sitting in a luxurious office, and in front of him sat Father Charlotte. Reinhard said it was an honor to meet Charlotte's father. The Archduke saw Reinhard for the first time. He said he'd heard about Reinhard's influence on his daughter. The hero replied that this is the case. The Archduke only asked him why. Reinhard replied that she had said that she did not want to take a sabbatical, and the hero only told her what, in his opinion, could be done here. The Archduke asked if she had asked him to. The hero confirmed it. The Archduke took a sip of tea, then said that this story ended without any additional consequences, so he didn't see anything wrong with Charlotte continuing to visit the temple. Then he immediately added that she didn't need it. Reinhard asked the Archduke what he meant. Her father replied that Charlotte didn't need the opinion of low-born types like Reinhard. The hero is not surprised and wondered what suddenly happened to the Archduke. Her father put the cup on the platter and said that he wasn't trying to hurt Reinhard by being a commoner. He said that Charlotte simply didn't listen to much more distinguished people. The Archduke had said in other words that looking at Reinhard's background, she should just ignore him. The Archduke put his hand to his chin and said that not only did she listen to Reinhard, but she also accurately quoted his words. An awkward silence fell between them. The Archduke asked if Charlotte was in love with him by any chance. Reinhard was stunned. He exclaimed that he didn't know about her, but he absolutely didn't. This shocked the Archduke. He got angry and asked Reinhard what he meant. He started yelling at Reinhard for daring to look at his youngest and say such a thing. The hero was surprised and wondered what was wrong with this aristocrat. Reinhard assumed that her father had gone mad in his old age. Suddenly, a red-faced Charlotte burst into the room, screaming. She yelled at her father and asked him what he was talking about. Charlotte also yelled at Reinhard and told him to leave the room right away because they urgently needed to talk to their father. Reinhard got up and said that he would go, but the Archduke asked him to stay, explaining that he had something else to discuss. However, an exasperated Charlotte yelled at him and shut him up, and so Reinhard headed for the exit. Charlotte began to yell at her father that she would sink into the ground with shame. Charlotte asked her father about how he could have called Reinhard and asked such obscenities. As Reinhard left, he thought about how it turns out that even the strongest magician on the continent turns white and fluffy in front of his daughter. Charlotte was very confused. She shouted for her father to go home at once and not even think of coming without a letter. The Archduke was confused and started talking about how he was a father and his daughter was in love. Charlotte's blush deepened at that. She tried her best to pretend otherwise. Her father was horrified by her reaction. Charlotte almost started crying, and then started yelling that she hated her father. He was startled. Scarlet turned and started to walk away. The Archduke sat on the floor in shock, shouting her name after her. Reinhard knew it was time to go. Some time passed, and night fell. Scarlet knocked on Reinhard's door. The girl was confused. Reinhard asked if they had a good conversation. Scarlet hesitantly said that wasn't true. She exclaimed that her father had misunderstood. Reinhard thought for a moment and looked at her intently. Then, suddenly upset, he asked her if she really didn't like him. Scarlet blushed, and her head began to spin. However, she started shouting and asking him about why she would like someone like him. Scarlet said it didn't make any sense. Reinhard asked her if that wasn't the case, why was she yelling like that? Then he closed the door on her. Scarlet was surprised. She started banging on the door and demanding that Reinhard open the door immediately. However, Reinhard was satisfied because he clearly achieved what he wanted. Scarlet was bursting with shame and embarrassment. Scarlet began to cry and again demanded that he open the door immediately. Reinhard's smile never left his face. He wondered why he was doing all this. After that, some time passed. Everything was back to normal. Reinhard began taking classes on controlling magical abilities. Although his abilities were inferior to others, the speed at which Reinhard used them was something that no one else could match. Although, of course, there are some who got the closest. Reinhard immediately thought of Kono Rint from A8 and his teleportation. The hero understood that his speed was faster than you can imagine. Although, of course, this is difficult to apply somewhere because after teleporting, he appears naked. A poor guy whose ability advantages overlap with disadvantages. Reinhard was thinking that Kono would be next anyway. And then there's her. Rihanna de Grand was standing nearby. Reinhard described her as a magical genius. She is one of those who, even if she does nothing, will overtake the majority. Reinhard was envious of her as soon as he saw her. He was thinking that he wasn't bad either, but it would be nice if everything went so smoothly anyway, but something's been bothering him lately. A girl told the students that everyone had done a good job today. She said that this was the end of the measurements. She also informed them that the midterm exam was only a short time away, so the students should prepare properly. The students were not happy about it. However, if you are a student, then this is an inevitable fate. Everyone loves this event to death. The midterm exam will start soon. After a while, Reinhard was already training with Ellen. He turned to her. The hero asked her if she was studying for exams. He wondered if she was only swinging a sword. Ellen replied that it was true. Reinhard was a little hurt. After all, it's an exam right now, everyone is sitting in the corners and studying, and Ellen says she's just practicing as usual. Reinhard thought that even Bertus and Charlotte were up to their necks in business, and they were all geniuses. Reinhard asked her if she did this every time, but did she really have so much luck with her exams every time? The hero got up from the floor and thought that this was an unwise question because he had invented it. Reinhard began to think that if he was judged only by his intelligence, then Louis Ankton of B2 was the best. But Louis is just fine in the head. When it comes to fights, it's exactly the opposite. In other words, in the overall score, which includes personal scores, Ellen always comes first. The hero wondered if he was doing the right thing now, practicing with such an opponent. He was thinking that if this continued, it would be expected what grade he would get. Reinhard thought about the fact that he would have to prepare for the exam and study. However, then he rejected this idea because if he tries hard and the grades come out lower than the guys, then he will be incredibly ashamed. Reinhard covered his face with his hand. All he could think was that he was sick of studying. Ellen sat down next to Reinhard and asked if he was getting ready. He suddenly turned around in surprise. He wondered if she meant that he wasn't very smart. Reinhard thought she was going to ask him if he really didn't need to study. Reinhard lay back on the floor. He complained that he didn't know. He decided to let it go. The hero also said that if Ellen is not studying, then he will not be either. Ellen asked him what the connection was. However, Reinhard only irritably asked her not to be a bore. Suddenly, Reinhard received a quest from the system. If he enters the top 10 in the midterm exam, he will receive a reward in the form of 3,000 bonuses. Reinhard wondered how to refuse if such a tempting bait was thrown in. The hero, sitting on the bed, thought that to improve his magic abilities, he uses 2,000 bonuses. In this case, he will still have 4,300 bonuses. If he decided to improve the next skill, it would take 4,000. Reinhard knew that in such a situation, it was impossible to ignore the possibility of receiving achievement bonuses. However, he strongly disliked the fact that he needed to enter the top 10. Reinhard thought that he was actually smarter than the other kids, but it seemed impossible for him to beat 10 of them and take 10th place in the entire school. Then, he decided to see what other quests there were. The goal of the other quest was to get the lowest place in the exam. For this, he would have been given 1,000 bonuses, but the hero did not like it. He put his hands on his knees and exclaimed that it was great. Reinhard picked up a pencil and enthusiastically said that he would take 10th place. After a while, he was already writing something in a notebook. Reinhard and Ellen were sitting in the dining room. Ellen was surprised because Reinhard had said he wouldn't be studying. The hero replied that people are like that, they say one thing and do another. While Reinhard wrote in his notebook, Ellen ate quietly. She said she thought Reinhard would do just fine. The hero was surprised and put his hand to his chin and asked why she did it all of a sudden. Ellen said Reinhard was smart. Reinhard blushed a little. He was confused, but he thanked her. Suddenly, something confused him even more. He turned away from Ellen. Reinhard wondered if she was enjoying the praise from a high school girl. He wondered if this was too much for an adult. Reinhard also reflected that she was much smarter than he was anyway. Reinhard was thinking about it when he suddenly came up with an idea. He exclaimed happily and suggested that they study together. However, Ellen calmly said that she didn't want to. Reinhard was upset. Ellen continued to eat in silence. After a while, Reinhard was walking through the evening academy. He wondered what the exam was like in the original story. In his memory, the episode with the exam was the part in which Ludwig is revealed in all its glory. The good old type of protagonist, fighting with a strong sense of justice, but a clueless hero. Ludwig studied hard every day, but his grades were poor. In the end, he was on the verge of failing the exam. But I started studying with Louis Angton, and fortunately, little by little, his grades improved. In the royal class, among the first year of study, he is the smartest. Louis Angton. Reinhard thought that this guy was obviously selfish and gossipy, but if they practiced together, the probability that Reinhard would get the 10th place was very high. So Reinhard walked over to Louis and put his arm around him. The hero said that he wanted to ask something. Louis was startled and asked what Reinhard wanted to ask. The hero responded by asking why Louis was so tight. Reinhard said he didn't even hit Louis. Louis wondered what was going on and what that bandit Reinhard wanted. Louis asked Reinhard what the case was. The hero smiled. Then he suggested that Louis teach him. Louis was surprised. After a while, they were already in the library. Charlotte was surprised Reinhard was there, too, because it was a Class B dorm. Reinhard said he wasn't here for long, just to learn. Charlotte asked him if he was studying with Louis. The hero confirmed this and called Louis a smart guy. Louis was very displeased and wondered why this bandit was picking on him. Charlotte said it was true. Then she asked if she could come with them, if she wasn't in the way. Louis was confused, but he agreed. Reinhard was thinking that in the original, Louis had snapped back, asking why he had to help Reinhard. However, things are different now. Suddenly, someone entered the room and called out to Reinhard, asking what he was doing in their dorm. Reinhard was shocked. He turned around in surprise as he recognized the voice. It was Ludwig. The guy exclaimed that he was glad to see Reinhard. Charlotte said they were going to study together now, and she asked if Ludwig wanted to go with them. However, Reinhard was sure that Ludwig was definitely not allowed to go with them. However, Ludwig gladly agreed to study with them. Reinhard was very displeased. The hero thought that this type is just a black hole. Ludwig is engaged, but his studies are not given to him. He works hard at everything, including his studies. But the report card is terrible. The original plan was for Reinhard to train with Louis Angton. He decided that it was also possible with Charlotte since she wasn't much weaker than Louis. Reinhard was getting more and more uncomfortable. Charlotte pointed to the page and said that it was clear from the context that the speaker was denying that he was wrong. However, Ludwig said he didn't see it. Ludwig noticed that the speaker said he was wrong. Charlotte confirmed that the speaker did say so, but he said that it was his fault, and in fact he continued to think that other people were to blame. Reinhard was already shaking with anger. Ludwig continued to argue with Charlotte and said that the speaker still said that he was wrong. Suddenly Reinhard broke down and started shouting. He called Ludwig a wooden man and asked if Ludwig couldn't understand being told directly. Reinhard shouted and asked how many times he needed to explain. The hero was furious. He asked how, with Ludwig's head, one could understand something in the text. Ludwig just laughed and apologized. He put his hand to his chest and said that no matter how hard he tried to study, he still couldn't do it. Charlotte felt sorry for Ludwig and asked Reinhard why he was treating Ludwig like this. Reinhard was furious and wondered if this worm was really the main character. Then Charlotte started explaining something to Ludwig again. Charlotte asked him about the largest vassal state, but Ludwig answered incorrectly. Reinhard was incredibly angry, but at the same time, he couldn't understand how this was possible, because Charlotte had asked Ludwig this question more than 10 times already. Louis was also very angry. Suddenly, he broke the pen he was holding. He shouted that the state is called Karenstadt. Louis started insulting Ludwig. He furiously asked if Ludwig had made a mistake 10 times in the task he had already solved. According to Louis, this is something that even 10-year-olds know. Reinhard was shocked. Louis continued to yell at Ludwig. He said that it was so simple that there would be no such task in the exam. And then Louis finally got out of his mouth and stopped talking. Charlotte looked upset. She turned slightly in Ludwig's direction and asked him a question. She asked if Ludwig had been accidentally dropped upside down as a child. Reinhard was surprised that Ludwig got the most from the kindest girl. Ludwig calmly replied that this was definitely not the case. Charlotte asked him again if he was saying it hadn't happened. Reinhard realized that her expression seemed to be asking what was wrong with Ludwig if it hadn't happened. Charlotte put her hand to her chin and said that the Empire needed to get the public education system up and running. She suddenly exclaimed that it wasn't Ludwig's fault. According to her, this is the fault of the Empire, which still has no primary education. She smiled sweetly and said that Ludwig was fine. Reinhard wondered if Charlotte really didn't like Ludwig. Ludwig asked if it was great. Charlotte said that in the future we just need to raise the average intellectual level of the population. She enthusiastically exclaimed that it was impossible for such sad cases to appear again. Reinhard wondered if Ludwig was grateful for that. Then he decided that he needed to worry about himself right now. Reinhard asked Louis about what would happen in the exam this time. Louis told Reinhard to write it down faster, and so they continued to study for some time. After that, it was time for lunch and the heroes came to the dining room. Reinhard was asked if he should eat with the class today. The hero asked if there really was such a rule. Louis confirmed this, but said that there is no specific ban. Meanwhile, someone nearby was playing a guitar. This student drew attention to himself and exclaimed that he would sing a song while everyone was eating. He exclaimed that they were the immortal songs of Lannian Cessar. The girls were happy to listen and applaud him. Reinhard was shocked. He saw Charlotte sitting nearby, enjoying the music. She asked if it was true that the atmosphere wasn't the same as in Class A. Reinhard still admitted it. Class B is a bit behind, but there is a sense of life here. Reinhard was thinking that it wasn't that he didn't like life in Class A, but everyone there was just training and practicing to develop themselves. Reinhard had even forgotten what it was like to enjoy life. Suddenly, he found himself wishing that he could just continue to enjoy life. After that, Reinhard took away his morning workouts and invested all his time in studying. Charlotte and Louis really admired Reinhard for getting better at his studies. Thanks to them, he was strengthened in the idea that he could not lose and worked even harder. Reinhard thought that he absolutely didn't want to confirm that he just got older with age, but in fact his head is working worse than these guys. Reinhard's goal is to get high scores in general subjects. The hero understood that probably more than 100 people would get 100 points. If Reinhard made a mistake on just one question, the grade would collapse, so he studied until his eyes hurt. However, this eventually happened. In the midterm exam, Reinhard answered one question incorrectly. The hero sat at his desk and thought about the correct answer. After a while, the average grades of professors in individual subjects in the general exam were posted on the bulletin board. All the students looked at the board in surprise. The top 5 temple students with the highest score were placed on it. At the top of the list was Reinhard, followed by Ellen, then Bertus, and then Louis Ankton. Reinhard was surprised, but Garlet was horrified. Reinhard won first place. The children were standing in front of a blackboard that indicated the places that the students had taken. In the general exam, the hero took 734th place, but in the royal class, he is the first. The reason is simple. In short, he received an intermediate grade in individual subjects of a + and higher. The students sat at their desks and wrote tasks while the teacher looked at the piece of paper in his hands. Because the midterm assessment focuses on how much progress the student has made, regardless of their abilities. Naturally, the hero could not fail to get a good rating. Helene and Reinhard were standing on the pedestal. Thus, in general subjects, only they have the highest score. But in the general exam, Helen had 2 mistakes. That's why he won first place in his class. Reinhard and the other students looked at the board in surprise. The orange screen said failure. The hero did not complete the task of getting into the top 10 on the general exam. Reinhard failed to make the top 10 in the general exam, taking first place in the midterm exam, but the situation is different here. In other words, he failed to enter the top 10 and won't receive the reward. This caused unrest in the temple for a while, and then May came, the time when everything starts to turn green. Several events occurred during this period. Garlet said, her hands clenched into fists, that it was just a coincidence. But they often saw each other, and each time the girl was overjoyed. Reinhard and Bertus were talking to each other. The hero thought that there would be problems with him, but everything turned out fine. Reinhard had blue seals affixed to his body with a yellow pattern. The new scan revealed a talent of sensitivity to magic power, and due to the fact that the hero managed to develop a new talent in a short time, extra attention was drawn to him again. Reinhard was walking down the corridor with 2 girls whispering behind him. The hero has nowhere to hurry, so he decided that he would move gradually. Reinhard walked into Ellery's office and waved at her. The exit restrictions were lifted, so they exchanged information about the latest news. The girl with red hair and eyes was smiling as she talked to the hero. The princess has stopped chasing, and the hero now plays the role of a carrier pigeon. Elleris seemed determined to maintain the status quo. A girl with pink hair worked as a waitress and served mugs of drinks. Eri seems to have settled in Rizek, a port city in the Edna archipelago. Reinhardt thinks that she is already used to living there, but he is sure that Elise still keeps an eye on them to make sure everything is in order. Reinhardt was standing in front of Charlotte, a letter in her hand. Returning to the temple, the hero gave the princess what she was waiting for, the boy's letter. The envelope had a red seal with a picture on it. He handed her his letter. The girl had taken the letter out of its envelope and was reading it. It read as follows: "I'm sorry I left without saying anything. I'm doing fine. This girl is protecting me, so I'd like to see you do well, too." As soon as the exit restrictions were lifted, Charlotte sent Reinhardt to get the letter she had been waiting for. Perhaps the fact that he had brought it so quickly had touched her. She was smiling broadly and crying. The princess constantly thanked the hero. The hero looked down, and there was sadness on his face. As he looked at it, he had the feeling that his heart had been pierced by many needles. Reinhardt was lying on the ground, and there were abrasions on his face. His whole body ached. He had his hands around his neck, and Helene was standing beside him. Reinhardt couldn't understand how the girl managed to fend off attacks all the time. Probably due to the fact that the hero took a break during exams, the whole body became wooden. He also asked the girls why he felt even more terrible than before. Helen opened her mouth a little, but said nothing. The girl was holding a wooden sword in her hand, and the hero was sitting next to her. She said that she raised the level a little. Reinhardt was looking ahead. He reflected that Helen was using more power because he was a better person. Does this mean that Reinhardt's level has also increased? Helen stood quietly and looked in the boy's direction. The hero told the girl that he felt a little better, but he still wants to ask something. Reinhardt looked up at Helene, who was holding a sword in her hand. He asked her how much she was giving into him. Helen jerked her head to the side. She held the sword in front of the hero. Then the girl held it up and said it was her. Helen placed her sword perpendicular to the ground and held on to it. The girl added that it was him. The hero sat with one hand on his knee. He asked her where she was pointing. On the ceiling, not the sky. The girl replied that if you use superpowers, it can be a little better. Helen sat down next to the hero. She told him that they had practiced so much together, so Reinhardt didn't know his level himself. He noticed that the girl didn't pretend to be good. She really thought she was good. The boys were sitting side by side. The guy asked her if it was too much to say. Helen said it was true. In fact, Helen's abilities are constantly improving at an incredible rate, and this difference will only grow. The girl was sitting with her back against the wall. Helen is a peak that the hero will never overcome. Reinhardt was fighting a sword fight with another student. Even so, he still sensed it at the last assessment of swordsmanship. He was used to the girl, so when he fought with others, he saw what slowed him down. That's why he divided his points to get a faster start and more efficiency. Above the hero's hand, there were 3 symbols that were responsible for the hero's physical abilities. Thanks to this, his physical upgrades for the sword mastery specialization added 2 or 3 points to his physical abilities. Compared to before, the ability awakenings without taking into account magic power increased by about 2 times. Training with Helene every day, Reinhardt didn't even notice how he was able to easily defeat others. Even without resorting to suggestion, you can defeat the enemy only with the help of skills. The hero was sitting still, and the girl started to get up. Reinhardt wondered if he went deeper into the swordsmanship lectures, he might be able to level up a little more. Helen was fully up. She told the guy to get up too. "We must continue." The hero got down on one knee and said that he would go again to receive from Helen. It was sunset outside, and Reinhardt could be heard shouting from the temple. A girl in a white t-shirt and gray eyes was smiling. She was glad to see her youngest. The girl heard that he got the first place. A hero was running beside her. He knows that his image is not very good, but this reaction makes him sad. The girl replied that, to be honest, he didn't look like someone very smart. Reinhardt didn't argue with that. Their faces were covered in sweat. The girl said that whatever it was, now the exam is over and it's time for the first group task. The hero was standing next to a girl who was resting on a bench. They were discussing their first assignment. Perhaps it will be for survival. Usually, the task topic is fixed. The girl took a bottle of water and told Reinhardt that if there was a survival mission, the hero would do well. The hero wasn't too happy with these words because it sounded like he would succeed because he was weak. The girl sitting on the bench smiled. She said it wasn't a problem. She was drinking water from a bottle, and the hero was just about to take a sip. The girl said that in survival missions, guys from noble families give up halfway. What else can they do? The hero brought the water bottle closer to his mouth. He explained that all the children from noble families grew up in hothouse conditions. Effenhauser hinted that this week's group mission topic would be a survival mission, but he didn't explain anything else. But of course, the hero, the original author who came up with the exam topic, already knew. The hero stared menacingly in front of him. After a few seconds, his face was covered in sweat. we can see the beach. There were footprints from two guys in the sand. This time, the stage for a group survival mission will be a deserted tropical island. All the kids were hot and their faces were covered in sweat. One of the guys was shouting how hot he was. The girl was indignant and said that he was yelling like a madman. The hero walked behind his classmates. For some reason, when he was writing this part, Reinhardt smiled uncertainly. The hero is very hooked on survive at all costs. This is an uninhabited island that is part of the Imperial Kamsencha archipelago. It is about 3 times larger than the area of the temple. From now on, the students will take tests here. The teacher looked at the children and told them that they needed to hold out for about 5 days, until Friday night. It doesn't matter which way. The two guys were standing behind each other. All they have to do is find a way to survive here with the available supplies. What a stupid mission, one of the guys thought. The two girls were looking at the teacher. They asked if it was dangerous. After all, leaving students on the island is somehow irresponsible. The teacher looked at the children who were scared. He said no one was forcing them. If they want to give up, they can do it. They'll just get it, that's all. But they're royal class. The 4 students looked at Effenhauser, who said that they were a special layer even in the temple. Let the students show how they are better than others. This is one of the ways to prove superiority, the teacher said. He was holding a gold coin in his hand. If it is difficult, students can use this button like artifact. They will fail the test, but they will immediately move to a safe place. Effenhauser still stood in front of all the students and told them that there were special conditions. If they complete them, the mission will end earlier than planned. In addition, the class that completes them will receive additional points. The teacher disappeared and a blue light appeared in his place. Before he disappeared, he explained to them that everything he had to say was said so they can start. A guy with white hair and a girl who was sitting next to him were looking into the water. She was crying and didn't know what it was. Scarlet doesn't know what to do. Ona wanted to go home. Bertus was standing behind Reinhardt. The hero leaned into the sack. It contained several swords, crates, and flasks. The hero thought that the people from the temple would prepare fewer tools. Reinhardt turned his head in Helene's direction and asked her if the girl was giving up. She said no. Bertus stared off into the distance, a little startled. The hero asked him the same question as Helen. The prince replied, of course not. The hero picked up his sword and walked towards the forest. He said he and Helen were going to check on it, and Berthus was sent to keep an eye on the boys. Ryo Unhard was standing behind Helene. He asked her to come with him, and she agreed. Bertus spread his arms and looked at Helene and Reinhardt. He wasn't sure if they should go there now. They don't even know what's in there. The hero told him that they needed to do something. The hero rolled his eyes at Bertus' suggestion of their deaths. Reinhardt stared confidently into the distance. The prince said he understood. He'll take care of everything. The hero didn't want to go there, of course, but achievement points were at stake. Scarlet and 2 other guys were sitting on the sand. In the original story, Class A, where there are a lot of guys from the aristocracy, manages to survive the first day, but in the end, most of them give up. Helen was standing in front of 2 guys and a girl who were looking at her. Everyone gave up as usual, and only Helen remained. Class B, on the other hand, under the guidance of Ludwig, will complete the mission in full force. This is an original story that doesn't include Charlotte. Reinhardt and Helene, who was holding a bow, were standing under the scorching sun. But since they deviated from the original plot, Reinhardt can't even imagine how it will turn out with the B class. Whatever the case, the class of plot was bad. Scarlet was sitting on the sand, crying, and Bertus was talking. Besides, even Bertus doesn't want anything bad in his heart. The hero would prefer that the guys were controlled by him to maximize efficiency. Helen and the hero were standing under a palm tree. Suddenly, the phrase about a minority in a group deviating from the norm came to mind. Reinhardt was smiling, and Helene was standing with a serious face. They found drinking water that was lacking. They'll probably be talking to Helen about them now. There were coconuts in the sand. Bertus stared at them in surprise. He asked Helen and the hero if they had brought it here. If the water suddenly runs out, I can hold out a little longer, Reinhardt replied. The prince was looking at the hero who was drinking water. Bertus invited him to talk. The 2 of them stood near the trees and talked. The prince thought that the hero had done something like this before. Reinhardt closed his eyes and said grandly that he needed to do something. There's no point in sitting still. If you just sit there, your strength will only decrease. Bertus exhaled and looked at the hero in surprise. The hero opened his eyes and raised his head, and the prince looked at him with his mouth open. Reinhardt said they needed a place to sleep, even if it was bad. A place to hide from the sun and rain. Bertus asked the hero, is it possible to make it now? There were huge leaves on the palm trees. Reinhardt said their Pobsuju were trees, vines, and those palm leaves everywhere. He can do something about it. Bertus asked the hero, only made of leaves. Reinhardt smiled and said that neither he nor the prince needed to worry about the details. They have those who are well versed in this. The girl with pink hair and glasses was shaking all over. She said there was no equipment or tools on the island. The prince looked at Adelia with a smile and held out his hand. He suggested that the support could be made from trees and the roofs from palm leaves. He asked the girl if she had any good ideas. Adelia raised her hand a little and said that it was possible to make something like a dugout. Will they have to sleep in the ground? Adelia asked. Bertus had startled her. He replied that if they were not going to give up, then yes. The prince held out his left hand in the direction of the children and said that, from now on, they should do something. They might give up, but they should at least try. Giving up without even trying is kind of crazy. Erich, Kono, and Kyra all looked at Bertus carefully, but with sad faces. They had to bring as many leaves as they could. To make a roof, you will need a lot of them. Darla sat far away from everyone. Someone asked her to cut down the tree with magic. Bertus pointed to the tree behind him. Garliff said something like that would probably do. The prince was glad, but he said that it could be dangerous, so the girl should be careful not to get hurt. Bertus was standing in front of Helen and Cliffman. He asked them to help Adelia set up camp. Reinhardt looked at Bertus thoughtfully. You give him one instruction, and he's ready for 10. Cheered up, that's why he's leading well, the hero thought. The prince stood looking to his right. Villain or not, he's a natural leader. Reinhardt pointed a finger to the side. Bertus said that now he, too, must attend to his own affairs. Reinhardt asked him if he could talk to the other two. The hero was pointing his thumb at Heinrich and Liana. Anyway, these two are the most important ones among them, the hero thought. Liana adjusted the strap of her backpack and looked dubiously at Reinhardt. The sun shone brightly on the beach. Reinhardt was standing in front of Liana and Heinrich. They warned him to speak briefly about what he needed. They glared at Reinhardt. Liana has never spoken to him, and Heinrich doesn't like him. Henry looked at the hero calmly. Now, in any situation, when necessary, he will need to light a fire. First, they will need to prepare fresh water. Heinrich's face was a little red, and Reinhardt was standing in front of him with his hand raised. The black-haired guy asked, "Fresh water?" The hero said yes. They also need fresh water. Reinhardt held up his index finger. He said Adelia knew how to make a simple water purification device. Heinrich opened his mouth wide and held up his hands. He didn't want to listen to Reinhardt because he doesn't want to be a flint. The hero calmly told him that Henry would be a walking tinderbox. Reinhardt's forehead turned red. He thought that Henry was infuriating him and that the hero wanted to hit him. A guy with white hair came up to Heinrich and pointed at him. He told him that it didn't matter who gave the orders. If Heinrich doesn't do this, they will die of dehydration in 2 days. A guy with dark hair was looking at the hero, baring his teeth. Reinhardt suggested that he put the past in the past, and since they were already in the same boat, they should row together. Henry turned his back on the hero and walked away from him. He told him he wasn't doing it on his orders. This is his sacrifice for everyone. Reinhardt turned his head towards Liana. The girl twitched a little and her face was questioning. The hero asked her to go hunting. She asked again, "Hunting?" The hero pointed to the right. Reinhardt was pointing at the water. The hero was looking towards the water with a smile, and there were beads of sweat on the girl's face. To be more precise, the hero was referring to fishing. Birds flew over the island. Liana electrocuted the water to catch fish. The girl was standing in the water, and the hero held his hand near his chin and thought. Liana said her speed wasn't that fast yet. Reinhardt wasn't sure if she could fish. The girl held her wrist with her other hand. She understood what the hero wants to do, but she will have to go to the depths where fish are found. The hero held his hand to his chin. Liana said she couldn't swim. Reinhardt thought about it. The girl was still holding her wrist. The hero suggested that she take it to the depths. The girl looked sadly at the hero, who slightly opened his mouth in chagrin. He thought that then he would get an electric shock. Liana couldn't understand how such a guy had gotten the first place. Liana stretched. She said she didn't need to carry it. There must be fish in the shallows, too. She'll come closer and give me an electric shock, and then we'll see. Liana raised her hand to her forehead and realized something. She turned to the hero and said that she couldn't touch the fish. Scarlet screamed loudly, her face turning blue. She held onto her shoulders as the boys carried the trees behind her. The girl was afraid of a beetle that fell from a tree. This is too much, one of the guys thought. I felled a tree myself, and I was most afraid. Bertus was looking at the boys with a smile on his face. He said there was enough wood now. Now they need to take care of this tree and make a dugout. The boys dragged them to pour, and Bertus showed them and told them what to do. Lind and Cairo must stack the leaves they bring on top. Erich and Cliffman had to hold the piece of wood because they were strong. Then, when there are enough leaves, you will need vines to fix them. Bertus looked away as the guy behind him set up the board. 3 guys made a frame that looked like a shelter. Bertus noticed that the kids in Class B were making something interesting. Helen, who was holding the boards in her hands, and Bertus were looking in the direction of these guys. They still didn't know the special conditions of the mission. Darlith was screaming again, her face flushed. She didn't know what it was. Reinhardt was holding the lobster that Liana had caught. The hero didn't know what had so frightened Garlet. It's just food. The lobster was dark red in color. It was very large. Surely it will be very tasty. The two guys looked surprised and poked the lobster, but Garlet was still scared. The guys weren't sure if it was safe to eat, but they assumed that if it is properly fried, then most likely it is possible. The girl thought that it could be poisonous at all. Bertus came up to them. He was sure that the teachers were watching them. If they're going to eat something wrong, the teachers will let them know. Liana's eyes were white with shock, because Bertus said one probably wouldn't be enough. The girl turned and walked forward. She's going to get something else right now. Reinhardt was looking at the guy who was drinking water. The hero said that if they didn't save water, they would regret it. Then the guy asked the hero, and again you can't get coconuts. Reinhardt's face was intimidating, and the guy with the blue hair was afraid of him. Are you thinking of just climbing palm trees? Reinhardt asked the guy. He suggested that he try to do it himself. The guy with the blue hair said that wasn't what he meant. Reinhardt calmed down. He remembered that this guy's ability was teleportation. Therefore, the hero does not need to climb. The guy was sitting on the sand, holding a canteen in his hand. The hero told him that he would do it now. Reinhardt was pointing at the boy. He told him that he was now in charge of picking coconuts, and since it won't fall, it will be easy. That's what Reinhardt told him, but fresh water still needs to be found. After all, coconut water can neither wash nor wash the wound. The hero was walking through the forest and looking for something. According to the plot, there definitely should have been fresh water here. The hero's face was covered in sweat. He didn't believe that he was the one who had set such damn difficult conditions. Reinhardt stood holding a dagger above him. Even if Klasa didn't win, if they lasted until Monday, they would get achievement points. That's why he doesn't really care about winning or losing a group mission. The hero sat down under a tree. He can't understand why, knowing this information, he tries so hard. The hero was sitting under a tree, but he noticed something and shifted his gaze to the side. He just wanted to punch himself in the head and pass out. A man was leaping in his direction, and a beast was running. The girl leaped and aimed her bow at the beast. She leaned forward a little. Catch something caught. The girl was standing over the dead beast. She didn't know how to carry him now. This is Delphine Isidra. The hero waved to a girl who had a quiver on her back. He said he could help if the girl was having a hard time. She recognized the hero. The two of them stood beside the dead beast. Reinhardt was surprised that she had caught such a big one, but she didn't know how to catch it now. The girl smiled, and the hero pointed his finger at this beast. He would help her, because it would be hard for Isidra to be alone. She thanked the hero. The girl was holding on to the belt that kept the quiver from slipping off, and Reinhardt noticed that she was a good shot. It looks like the girl has trained before. Reinhardt and the girl looked at each other and talked. Isidra is from Talprad. Almost everyone learns to hunt there. Of course, the hero already knows this. The girl's eyes were light red and she was standing there with a smile on her face. Delphine Isidra is a member of the Forest Ranger Group, a mountain state in the northern part of the empire. Talprad is famous for the fact that all its inhabitants can shoot arrows. But even for them, Delphine's abilities are outstanding. Spirits of various colors were flying around the girl. At first, she only practiced archery, but later on, she would start using a unique power called elemental magic. There was a strange seal above the elf's bare-chested hands. It is said that the forest rangers of Talprad have the blood of long-extinct elves in their veins. Delphine has developed this power, so she will be able to master the magic of the elements as well. Reinhardt was dragging the beast, and Isidra was waving at Charlotte. She shouted to her that they were here. Charlotte remembered the girl leaving alone. The princess turned to Isidra and saw Reinhardt. She didn't understand what he was doing here. The hero was holding onto his shoulder, and Isidra was smiling broadly and pointing at the hero. She said that they met in the forest and the guy helped her drag the beast. If it wasn't for the hero, the girl wouldn't have been able to deliver it. Charlotte looked at them, and around the guy and the girl saw flowers and a pink glow. Reinhardt's face was a little sweaty. Charlotte looked at him, smiling. Although this is a cooperation mission, but they are rivals. The girl does not understand why the hero helps them. The hero made a ring with his thumb and index finger. He assumed they wouldn't let him go empty-handed. So one leg, for example, would be enough, Reinhardt told them. The princess looked surprised, but after a couple of seconds, she covered her mouth and laughed. The hero, as usual, calculated everything. Isidra held a blade in her hand. If she caught him, then it's up to her to decide, too. The girl who caught the beast pointed towards the water. She said one leg wasn't a problem. They'd better take a look there. Someone came up out of the water and everyone was looking at him. The guy who was standing in the water was holding a spear above him with a fish on the end of it. This guy had a big abs on his torso and a big fish on the end of his spear. Reinhardt looked at him in surprise. The guy was smiling, and the pikes were also a little red. He shouted that he had caught another one. Charlotte and Isidra stood there smiling, while Reinhardt was shocked. The guy in one day caught food for the whole week. That's how this video ends. If you have sat through to the end, please don't forget to press the subscribe button and leave feedback. See you in the next video.